Shifting the scene to a grand hall, a cold demand for divorce shatters the quiet atmosphere. Stunned by the sudden declaration, the pink-haired woman remains completely silent in disbelief. The red-eyed, black-haired man coldly proposes that she renounce her family name and leave. He promises a generous financial compensation if she quietly complies with his demands. The pink-haired woman, Rosalina, stares back at him with growing irritation and resentment. He slams a black-gloved hand firmly onto the separation agreement to emphasize his point. She is stunned as she realizes the massive gold settlement he is offering. Rejecting the offer, she hysterically asserts her proud identity as Rosalina Felsdon. A crazed red glare reveals the depth of her growing obsession and madness. She expresses her desperate, unhinged desire to keep both him and the family title. The black-haired man watches her dramatic display with cold detachment and disapproval. Slamming her hands down, she hysterically screams that everything belongs to her. Torn documents are scattered across the floor, symbolizing the destruction of their marriage. In the modern world, a brown-haired girl reading a novel on her phone pauses. She pitied the novel's villainess, Rosalina, for choosing her own tragic path. She thinks that she would have gladly taken the massive divorce settlement instead. The narrative outlines the villainess's downward spiral, culminating in a failed poisoning attempt. The villainess's tragic story ends with her execution at dumb. Calling the villainess a fool, the brown-haired girl crosses a busy city street. Two white doves fly across a bright blue sky, marking a sudden transition. Still distracted by her thoughts about the novel, she walks through the night. She reflects on how she keeps repeating the same meaningless habits. A harsh text message from a debt collector demands money, worsening her stress. A sudden loud horn startles the brown-eared girl as she steps forward. Realization dawns on her as she recognizes the sudden, imminent danger. She realizes too late that the pedestrian crossing light has already changed. Blinded by bright truck headlights, she stands frozen in the middle of the street. Oppressive darkness closes in as the tragic collision becomes completely inevitable. As her consciousness fades, a mysterious voice whispers the name of the villainess. She suddenly snaps her eyes open as someone calls out Rosalina's name. The black-haired man demands her attention, prompting her to wonder about his identity. She vividly recalls the traumatic memory of being hit by a truck. Touching her face, she notices the unfamiliar, elegant details of her appearance. She stares at her own hand, now adorned with elegant lace sleeves. Looking out the grand window, she takes in her opulent, unfamiliar surroundings. Looking into the mirror, she is stunned by her beautiful, unfamiliar reflection. She is shocked to realize she has possessed the body of Rosalina. In disbelief, she slowly accepts the reality of her sudden fantasy transmigration. She quickly pieces together the context of the tragic scene she entered. The black-haired man repeats his proposal for her to leave quietly. The newly transmigrated Rosalina quietly absorbs the gravity of the divorce negotiations. He rests his hand firmly on the contract, waiting for her signature. He gestures dismissively, expecting her to put up her usual dramatic fight. He reiterates his condition for her to quietly sign the divorce papers. She is stunned when he officially offers her the $5 million gold settlement. The black-haired man scoffs, bracing himself for her inevitable hysterical rejection. Shaking in her seat, she tries to process this incredibly lucrative offer. Believing she is crying, the man coldly tells her that tears are useless. He emphasizes his exhaustion, stating he has repeated this decision many times. He coldly declares that her tears will never change his mind. Rosalina gasps in stunned silence as the black-haired man watches her coldly. She visualizes the astronomical 500 billion won divorce settlement glittering before her eyes. The black-haired man coldly asserts that a person should remain where they belong. Smiling brightly, Rosalina readily agrees to his terms and accepts the separation. Rosalina happily asks where to sign, leaving the black-haired man completely bewildered by her cooperativeness. With swift and elegant strokes, she immediately signs the divorce agreement. The black-haired man watches in absolute shock as Rosalina cheerfully signs the papers. She hands the signed document over to him, finalizing their separation. Rosalina gracefully bids him farewell, eagerly preparing to leave her old life behind. He clutches the signed divorce papers, unable to believe how easily she complied. Stunned by her sudden departure, the black-haired man calls out for her to wait. Rosalina glances back with a triumphant smile, ready to embrace her newfound freedom. Rosalina joyfully declares that their relationship has officially reached its final end. The black-haired man stands frozen in silence, completely dumbfounded by her reaction. With the cheerful final farewell, Rosalina officially closes the chapter on their marriage. A soft tap echoes as she turns and steps out of the room. As she walks through the sunlit corridor, a servant politely calls out to her. The coachman bows respectfully and asks Rosalina where he should drive her. Rosalina boards the carriage and instructs the coachman to head to Duke Brighton's estate. She internally vows to drastically change her tragic destiny with her massive new wealth. The narrative reveals how the Brighton family's financial decline earned Rosalina a disastrous reputation. Despite her desperate struggles to find love, she was only met with cruel whispers. A brief memory of her past wedding day flashes, showing her hopes for a new beginning. A black-haired man stands at the altar, looking distant, even on their wedding day. Despite her efforts, her marriage ultimately collapsed and ended in a cold divorce. Rosalina realizes why the original villainess was so desperately driven to madness by the divorce. She firmly resolves that she will not suffer the same tragic death as before. Rosalina steels her resolve, determined to survive no matter what challenges lie ahead. She passionately reminds herself that securing this divorce is her only key to survival. Her carriage finally pulls up to the grand and sprawling estate of Duke Brighton. An announcement confirms the complete restoration of the estate's damaged and deteriorated luxury items. The elderly butler lists off the newly restored crystal crafts and carpets bearing the family seal. Duke Brighton looks up from his desk in annoyance as a sudden knock interrupts him. A maid enters the study, bowing respectfully to announce the arrival of a guest. Duke Brighton raises an eyebrow, questioning who could possibly be visiting at this hour. The maid nervously reveals that the unexpected visitor is none other than Rosalina herself. Duke Brighton instantly clutches his forehead in deep frustration upon hearing her name. Gritting his teeth, Duke Brighton coldly orders the maid to send Rosalina away immediately. An aura of intense frustration surrounds him as he refuses to see his daughter. The trembling maid explains that Rosalina insists on seeing him no matter what happens. Duke Brighton scoffs in absolute disgust, muttering about how shameless his daughter has become. He decides to make time for her, intending to deal with her demands directly. Standing by the window, Duke Brighton instructs the maid to make Rosalina wait outside. He maliciously orders all chairs removed and denies her even a single glass of water. A grand-grandfather clock ticks loudly, emphasizing the cruel and agonizing weight he inflicts. The afternoon sun slowly shifts, casting long shadows across the empty estate hallway. With a weary sigh, Duke Brighton finally removes his glasses and sets them down. Duke Brighton, rubbing his eyes wearily, decides to finally call it a day. Noticing his butler's nervous hesitation, Duke Brighton demands to know what is wrong. The elderly butler leans in close to whisper a shocking update to the Duke. Slamming his hands down in fury, Duke Brighton yells in disbelief that Rosalina is still waiting. Pacing anxiously across the carpet, Rosalina mentally acknowledges that getting her way will not be easy. Standing in the empty hallway, she laments how cruel her father is for punishing her like this. Steeling her resolve, she decides to remain confident since she knows the secret of Brighton's downfall. She reflects on her privilege of knowing the novel's plot, which will help her survive. Rosalina crosses her arms, hoping that her father will at least negotiate rather than reject her outright. A sharp click-clack sounds as her elegant, jewel-adorned shoe steps forward. Startled by a sudden presence, she turns around and nervously calls out to her father. Duke Brighton stares back coldly, demandingly asking the Duchess what she has come for. Smiling brightly against a backdrop of roses, Rosalina politely states she is here to ask a favor. She reflects on the harsh social system where women are denied the right to make decisions. She notes that a husband requires the wife's father's formal permission to finalize a divorce. Rosalina stands elegantly, mentally preparing herself to deliver her proposal. Clenching her dress tightly, she reminds herself that she must succeed in this mission. Looking him straight in the eyes, she officially requests his permission to get a divorce. Duke Brighton reacts with absolute fury, declaring that she must have completely lost her mind. He angrily recalls how hysterically obsessed she was with her husband 3 years ago. He brings up her past arrogant declarations that he would never return to this household. He details her past crimes of stealing the family seal to marry without any approval. The Duke expresses deep weariness, while Rosalina sweat drops and insists she has changed. Knowing he won't believe her words easily, she confidently proposes that they make a deal. Duke Brighton scoffs in absolute disbelief at the sudden mention of a deal. Putting a hand over her heart, she prepares to make her pitch with absolute conviction. Turning his head, the Duke listens closely as she begins to propose her terms. Clasping her hands, Rosalina promises to secure the safety and prosperity of the Brighton family. She stares back at him with fierce, unwavering determination in her eyes. The butler mentally dismisses her words as arrogant, but the Duke suddenly calls for his attention. The butler stands completely dumbfounded as Duke Brighton abruptly orders him to prepare a room. The frantic butler tries to protest his decision, but the Duke walks away without listening. A heavy slam echoes through the corridor as the door shuts behind Duke Brighton. Left with no choice, the dazed butler bows and politely offers his services to Rosalina. Walking into her grand new bedroom, Rosalina happily celebrates her successful return to Brighton. Sprawled face down on the plush bed, she groans in pain from her sore, exhausted legs. She rolls around happily on the mattress, ecstatic at completing her very first step. She reflects on the struggles of her past life compared to her sudden fantasy transmigration. Recalling the original villainess's brutal execution, she vows not to let her second chance go to waste. With sparkling, determined pink eyes, she tells herself that seizing opportunities is easy. She resolves to survive by acting the exact opposite of the novel's original tragic villainess. Raising her fist in victory, she celebrates that this is far easier than working a part-time job. She collapses onto her back, completely relaxed and pleased with her progress. Shifting back to the drawing room, Duke Brighton and his butler stand in quiet contemplation. Pouring tea, the butler questions why the Duke accepted her request despite no real development. Duke Brighton sits in silence, deeply contemplating his daughter's highly unusual behavior. Staring at his reflection in the cup, he recalls his order for her to wait outside. He notes that the old volatile Rosalina would never have left this drawing room intact. He envisions her going completely berserk the moment she was ordered to wait. He vividly imagines her smashing vases and destroying the estate in a childish tantrum. Duke Brighton covers his face with his hands, exhausted by the memories of her past madness. Lowering his hands, he decides that it wouldn't hurt to trust her one last time. Shifting back, Rosalina sits up in her bed, yawning widely as she starts her new day. A soft rustle sounds as the pink-haired woman is gently asked if she has woken up. Shaking with intense fear, the maid nervously asks if she should prepare the bathwater. A smooth rustle echoes as she sits up, her long pink hair cascading down. The maid's hands nervously offer a clean white robe for her to wear. A sudden light tap sounds as her hand gently brushes against the fabric. With a sudden gasp of terror, the maid recoils as if expecting a blow. Throwing herself flat onto the floor, the hysterical maid frantically begs Rosalina not to fire her. Shaking uncontrollably, the maid continues to sob, declaring she has committed a grave sin. Cheering on the ground, the desperate servant tearfully begs for mercy and forgiveness. The maid cautiously glances up, utterly confused by the lack of an angry reaction. Splashing in her warm bath, Rosalina cheerfully tells her frightened maid to run along. Stunned by her mistress's kindness, the maid quickly bows and offers to assist whenever needed. A loud slam echoes through the hallway as the door finally closes behind her. Seeing her colleague shaking, another maid asks in confusion what has happened inside. Submerging herself in the warm water, Rosalina enjoys a relaxing, quiet moment alone. Outside the room, the second maid dismisses the story, advising her shocked companion to rest. Staring blankly at her reflection, Rosalina wonders if her reputation is truly that terrifying. She narrows her eyes, realizing how deeply feared the original villainess was. A sudden shudder runs through her as she recalls her predecessor's notorious, unpredictable temper. Dressing in a simple robe, Rosalina brightly greets her servants with a cheerful smile. The maids gasp in sheer horror, completely unnerved by her uncharacteristically pleasant behavior. A sudden soft thud sounds as a sealed letter slips and falls to the floor. Rosalina picks up the envelope with curiosity, causing her maid to shriek in panic. The document is revealed to be a gossip magazine detailing high society's latest rumors. She opens the paper, finding a sensational headline announcing her own husband's upcoming divorce. The article glorifies Argentine Failsden, the Empire's greatest hero and legendary young swordmaster. It details his warlike marriage to Rosalina, eagerly questioning who will take her place. Rosalina stares blankly at the dramatic description of her failed relationship in public. Ignoring the public mockery, she sits calmly while her servant watches her with anxiety. She remains focused on her true goal, unbothered by the dramatic rumors circulating. Shaking with nerves, the maid brings in a formal letter on a silver tray. She quickly turns her head, surprised by the arrival of an unexpected letter. Examining the seal, Rosalina muses that even the cruel villainess must have had friends. Her eyes widen in shock as she recognizes the seal of Duke Failsden. She slices the envelope open, wondering if her ex-husband is upset by her cooperativeness. A sudden soft rustle sounds as a large bank check slides out of the letter. She gasps in disbelief upon realizing the check is worth a staggering $1 million gold. The letter explains the funds are a down payment to ensure her commitment to divorce. Her ex-husband explicitly requests that she keep her word and finalize their legal separation. A wide, triumphant grin spreads across her face as she visualizes her immense wealth. Delighted, she orders her maid to prepare a dark, inconspicuous robe for her outing. The scene shifts to a grand, bustling auction house filled with eager, noble guests. The energetic auctioneer dramatically announces the arrival of the highly anticipated final item. On display sits a beautiful heart-shaped bottle filled with a glowing green liquid. Sitting in the audience, Rosalina eagerly recognizes the legendary potion she came to buy. She rejoices knowing this magical elixir is the key to breaking Leodora's curse. Feeling incredibly confident, she gloats over her massive fortune and newly loaded pockets. She smugly celebrates how effortless this mission is, planning to spend the excess on delicacies. A few minutes later, her confidence shatters as the bidding turns unexpectedly difficult. As she bids 600,000 gold, a mysterious competitor immediately counters with 700,000. Rosalina panics under her blue hood, frustrated that someone counters every single bid she makes. She glares at the mysterious hooded competitor who keeps driving up the price of the potion. She fondly recalls having 1 million gold, confident it would buy her anything. With a sudden poof sounding, her triumphant mood shatters as her massive fortune vanishes. The masked swordmaster relentlessly raises his paddle, bidding an overwhelming 900,000 gold. Determined to win, Rosalina clenches her paddle tightly, refusing to give up the cure. Standing up, Rosalina boldly shouts out her final bet to secure the precious elixir. The beautiful glowing green elixir sits shining brightly, the ultimate prize of the auction. She celebrates winning the Tears of the Wind potion, holding the tiny bottle victoriously. Outside the auction house, the masked swordmaster approaches her to propose a trade. Turning around in surprise, Rosalina questions his unexpected request to make a trade. The masked swordmaster insists she has no use for such a dangerous artifact. He offers an astronomical 5 million gold if she hands the potion over to him. Rosalina immediately rejects his massive offer, completely bewildered by his sudden proposal. A tense, silent standoff ensues as both stand completely dumbfounded by the other's resolve. She angrily accuses him of being highly suspicious for not bidding his millions earlier. Caught off guard by her sharp logic, the masked swordmaster hesitates to answer. Rosalina smugly tells him not to judge her determination by his shallow standards. Clasping the bottle, she proudly declares she bought it to save her sick brother. With an intense glare, Rosalina warns him that he should give up and leave. Suddenly, a violent surge of dark madness grips the masked swordmaster, causing excruciating pain. His eye turns a menacing crimson as the curse takes complete control of his mind. Overcome by rage, the manic stranger aggressively grabs her, shouting in blind fury. Rosalina looks at him with deep concern, wondering if he can even hear her. The masked swordmaster struggles to breathe, desperately fighting back the overwhelming dark energy. Calming down, he apologizes for his rudeness after hearing she did it for family. He points toward the entrance where an elegant carriage stands waiting for them. Though visibly exhausted, the dark-clothed man politely offers to escort her to the carriage. Her hand suddenly reaches forward, offering him a clean handkerchief to wipe a sweat. He stares blankly at the offered cloth, utterly confused by her sudden act of kindness. Rosalina gently urges him to wipe his sweat, noting how exhausted he looks. He declines the gesture, insistently pushing the fabric back toward her hand. Insisting it is a simple thank you gift, she cheerfully urges him to accept it. Rosalina playfully presses the soft cloth directly against his chest, refusing his rejection. Surrendering to her playfulness, he gently accepts the handkerchief and wipes his brow. Smiling warmly, Rosalina teases him for finally using someone else's handkerchief. Suddenly, his eyes widen in complete shock as a peculiar realization strikes him. A sudden gust of wind blows his hood back, scattering cherry blossom petals around. She bids him a cheerful farewell, turning away with a bright, radiant smile. Walking down the garden path, Rosalina heads back toward her carriage with light steps. The silent competitor slowly raises his gloved hand to slide off his ornate mask. Removing his mask, the gray-haired swordmaster stares ahead, realizing something about her has changed. Meanwhile, Duke Brighton sits in his study, calmly reviewing reports regarding the estate's matters. A sudden knock-knock sounds as the worried maid interrupts his work, looking deeply anxious. She reports that Rosalina has just caused a massive commotion outside her brother's room. Hearing that Lady Eliza couldn't handle the situation, the Duke snaps his quill. An aura of pure fury envelops him as he struggles to control his temper. Duke Brighton screams her name in absolute explosive fury, his eyes burning with anger. A sudden heavy slam echoes as his fist hits the desk in rage. Without hesitation, the enraged Duke storms down the hallway to confront his troublesome daughter. With a sudden grinding sound, the gray-haired Duke furiously admits to himself that he was incredibly foolish. He bitterly recalls how he gave his daughter another chance even after being deeply betrayed. With a sudden slam, Duke Brighton bursts through the doors, shouting Rosalina's name in fury. The narrative explains that long ago, the Brighton family lost two of their most precious treasures. They lost Beatrice, the mistress of the family, and an ancient heirloom passed down through generations. This sacred heirloom was known as the guardianship of Brighton, which protected their bloodline. The tragedy began when young Rosalina broke the fairy branch, causing Leodore to fall asleep. A sudden crackle of magical lightning strikes down toward the terrified children as they huddle together. Beatrice desperately threw herself in front of the children to shield Rosalina from the curse. Taking the curse in her daughter's stead, Beatrice went into early labor from the shock. Beatrice lost her life during childbirth, leaving behind a young Rosalina who lost her memories. Only one witness remained, observing the young girl who survived despite the terrible curse. The sole witness wept, knowing that just surviving the magical attack was a miracle. Eliza, Beatrice's former maid, demands that Rosalina immediately hand over the potion she brought. Eliza refuses to let Leodore consume anything suspicious, but Rosalina firmly asserts she can prove its safety. Eliza passionately declares that she views the sleeping Leodore as if he were her own child. Eliza warns Rosalina that she will take drastic measures if she continues to be uncooperative. With a loud gasp, Eliza calls for help just as Duke Brighton storms in, shouting at Rosalina. Eliza clings to the Duke, tearfully accusing Rosalina, while Rosalina stands back in disbelief. A firm, decisive step echoes through the quiet room as Rosalina prepares to make her move. Duke Brighton demands to know what trick Rosalina is trying to pull this time. Ignoring the accusations, Rosalina pops open the stopper of the heart-shaped green bottle with a sudden soft pop. To everyone's absolute shock, Rosalina raises the bottle and drinks a portion of the green liquid. Rosalina explains that this is the Tears of the Wind potion, proving it is not poisonous. She confidently asserts that this legendary medicine will definitely wake Leodor from his eternal sleep. Eliza yells out in protest, asking how they could possibly trust such an outrageous claim. Rosalina explains she found the information in the Falsdawn family's highly restricted secret library. Rosalina points out that being left entirely alone for 3 years gave her ample research time. Eliza suspiciously questions how Rosalina gained access to a library reserved only for the family head. With a sharp hand gesture, Eliza demands an end to Rosalina's lies and suspicious explanations. To Eliza's utter shock, Duke Brighton interrupts and admits that such a feat is indeed possible. The Duke sighs, noting that doing whatever she wants is exactly how Rosalina always behaves. Duke Brighton grants permission to proceed, leaving Rosalina thrilled that her path is finally open. With light, determined steps, Rosalina walks over to the bedside where her sleeping brother lies. Rosalina remains focused on her goal to save Leodor from the fairy's dark curse. Saving Leodor will also allow her to secure the Duke of Brighton's complete trust. Despite her outward confidence, a sudden wave of anxiety hits her, making her wonder if it will work. Stealing her resolve, Rosalina gently pours the glowing green elixir directly into Leodor's mouth. The room erupts in sheer panic as Duke Brighton and Eliza anxiously shout out Leodor's name. Leodor slowly opens his pale green eyes, weakly calling out Rosalina's name in confusion. Tears well up in Rosalina's eyes as she gently clasps his hand, whispering to her brother. Smiling warmly, Leodor softly notes how much of a beautiful young lady she has grown into. A sudden, quiet sigh escapes him as the lingering magical glow fades and his eyes close again. Rosalina watches in despair as Leodor slips back into sleep under the fairy's relentless curse. Leaning close, Rosalina whispers to her sleeping brother, hoping his soul can still hear her. She fiercely vows to find a way to wake him up permanently as soon as possible. Rosalina stares at her brother with absolute determination, making a silent, sacred promise to him. Standing in the dark shadows of the hallway, Eliza glares with intense hatred and malice. An ominous, bloody aura surrounds Eliza as she silently seethes with rage against Rosalina. The tense mood shatters as Duke Brighton's sweat drops, dryly telling Rosalina to stop joking around. The gray-haired Duke offers his pink-haired daughter any dresses or jewels she desires, leaving her completely bewildered. He surprises her further by offering the summer villa she had always wanted as a child. A sudden clattering sound echoes through the room as a hand firmly sets down a teacup. Standing amidst white flowers, the pink-haired lady politely rejects his offer, stating a reward is unnecessary. She announces her departure since there is nothing left to discuss, leaving the Duke utterly stunned. Stopping at the doorway, she turns back, catching the gray-haired Duke off guard with a sudden comment. Smiling brightly, she turns back around to address her busy father one last time before leaving. She asks him to spend more time with Leodor, catching the gray-haired Duke completely by surprise. A quiet sound of footsteps echoes as she confidently walks away from his study. The gray-haired Duke stands before a portrait of his young daughter, wondering if she has changed. A sudden loud commotion nearby shatters his thoughts, accompanied by a maid's desperate screaming apology. Looking down, he spots a blonde maid prostrating herself before his pink-haired daughter, begging for mercy. Smiling warmly, Rosalina laughs softly and gently tells the frightened maid that everything is completely fine. Watching from above, the Duke wonders if she matured during her long exile as she leaves. He recalls her determined promise to find a way to wake her sleeping brother as soon as possible. Rosalina smiles brightly, her face full of hope and relief as she walks down the hallway. The gray-haired Duke looks down with a softened, thoughtful expression, deeply affected by her unexpected grace. He recalls a past report about how his daughter lived entirely alone and isolated for 3 years. Meanwhile, a cruel, dark-haired woman screams in absolute blood-red fury upon hearing about the official divorce approval. She seethes with intense hatred, biting her nail and blaming the siblings for ruining her plans. Releasing a bitter sigh, she collapses backward onto her bed to contemplate her next move. A sharp, painful kick lands on a trembling maid, causing her to gasp in sudden agony. The cruel lady sits on the bed, glaring down at her new, terrified maid with complete disdain. Glaring coldly, she asks the trembling maid why she has not finished cleaning the room yet. The poor maid screams in agony as she receives another violent, painful kick from her mistress. Gripping a whip, the cruel woman mockingly remarks that she has never seen this useless maid before. She wears a sinister smile, falsely reassuring the crying maid that she will fix her poor behavior. Raising her whip, she sadistically orders the maid to say thank you each time she is beaten. She demands compliance, forcing the terrified, sobbing maid to weakly acknowledge her cruel, horrific rules. Meanwhile, Rosalina gasps in shock as the Duke officially announces his approval of her divorce. She smiles in delight as her father confirms all of her rights and privileges are fully restored. The gray-haired Duke looks at her warmly, telling her that she may now finally call him father. Looking at her dazed face, the Duke wonders if she can even hear his words of acceptance. Thrilled with her success, Rosalina joyfully throws herself backward onto her bed in celebration. A floating system window states that her remaining alimony is 40 billion, which is still not enough. Rosalina taps her chin thoughtfully, realizing she must gather an immense amount of money very quickly. A floating window explains that she needs even more money to successfully keep her 4 million beau. She realizes that divorced women are traditionally pressured by their families to quickly arrange a remarriage. A chibi illustration shows her hiding behind a fan, imagining herself being pressured into another marriage. She imagines her hard-earned treasure chest being taken away as a customary sign of gratitude. A blue glowing system window announces that there is only one viable solution to her problem. With fire burning in her eyes, she determinedly vows to buy a title and secure her independence. Standing in her room, the pink-haired girl prepares to face the challenging trials ahead of her. A blue glowing system notification displays her F-rank awakening trait as a dimensional item summoner. She is urged to change her fate and acquire massive wealth using her newly unlocked abilities. Rosalina reacts in shock, pointing at her new system window and analyzing her sudden magical traits. A bright blue notification asks if she has been trapped inside a game-like fantasy world. Clenching her bedsheets, she enthusiastically envisions a bright flowery path of wealth and freedom ahead. The scene shifts to a dark stone cave tunnel where quiet footsteps echo in the darkness. A foot steps forward, dipping into glowing magical blue water pooling inside the deep stone cave. A portrait introduces Daisy, the golden brown-haired protagonist of the original story. Walking through the blue cave, the pink-haired Rosalina reflects on the abandoned mine she received. She offers the scroll as a gift of friendship to the other girl. Looking around the cave, she identifies the document as a mine ownership transfer certificate. Clutching the scroll, the golden brown-haired Daisy hesitates to accept such a massive gift. Leaning close, the pink-haired Rosalina coldly pressures Daisy into accepting the transfer certificate. Rosalina gestures dramatically, asserting that the mine holds a far greater secret value. Rosalina points deeper into the cave, instructing the golden brown-haired Daisy to look ahead. They stand before a glowing blue lake imbued with legendary fairy purification magic. The golden brown-haired Daisy stares at the magical lake in absolute awe and wonder. Standing behind the distracted girl, the pink-haired Rosalina wears a dark, sinister grin. With a sudden push, Rosalina shoves the golden brown-haired girl into the deep water. Screaming in terror, the golden brown-haired Daisy plunges directly into the glowing blue lake. A massive splash erupts as the golden brown-haired girl disappears beneath the churning water. The pink-haired lady stands calmly at the edge, watching the ripples settle on the water. The pink-haired girl stares down into the water, her expression cold and completely remorseless. The water bubbles gently as the ripples slowly fade into an eerie, quiet stillness. Smiling triumphantly, the pink-haired girl raises her head and celebrates her successful scheme. Rosalina contemplates the fatal trap of hypothermia and the dizzying layout of the mine. The system window reveals that the original heroine possesses an incredibly powerful plot armor. Emerging from the magical lake, the golden brown-haired Daisy remains entirely unharmed and dry. Under the glowing blue lake, Daisy discovers a massive cluster of shining magical crystals. A blonde-haired man named Calyx embraces Daisy, passionately rescuing her and confirming their feelings. While the lovers embrace, the pink-haired Rosalina watches them from the shadows, glaring behind her fan. Glaring with sharp eyes, Rosalina plans to leverage her knowledge of the original storyline. Rolling up her sleeves, the pink-haired Rosalina confidently prepares to change her destiny. A sudden realization strikes her that her future relies entirely on her upcoming decisions. An illustrated scale weighs the choice between entering the lake for 10 billion or staying put. Standing at the edge of the glowing blue water, Rosalina contemplates her next move. Taking a deep, quiet breath, the pink-haired girl steels her resolve and prepares herself. A sudden sharp tap echoes as her bare foot takes a firm, decisive step forward. With a sudden leap, the pink-haired girl boldly jumps down toward the glowing lake below. Mid-air, she suddenly panics and worries if Daisy only survived due to heroine privileges. A massive, towering splash of white water erupts as she crashes directly into the lake. The scene shifts to a simple white chimney under a clear, bright blue sky. A room filled with scattered papers introduces the headquarters of the Dark Information Guild Heinous. A pair of grand ornately carved wooden double doors stands tightly shut in the quiet hallway. Gripping his chest in agony, a man violently coughs from a sudden internal pain. Bound in heavy chains, a black-haired, red-eyed man struggles against his immense pain. Looking at a clipboard, a freckled assistant notes the severity of the family's hereditary curse. Clutching his head, the exhausted black-haired man demands to know the final medical findings. The freckled assistant reads the discouraging reports from the mages, shamans, and physicians. The black-haired man slams his hand down, dismissing the report about the ordinary handkerchief. Glaring with glowing red eyes, he furiously orders his terrified assistant to leave immediately. Sighing deeply, the exhausted black-haired man collapses back into his ornate study chair. A hand slowly slides open a wooden drawer to reveal a golden-trimmed white card inside. The black-haired man retrieves the card, deeply questioning how the woman achieved her goal. He presses the handkerchief to his forehead, instantly triggering a warm, healing magical glow. Despite seeking help from renowned physicians, mages, and shamans, no one could ease his terrible agony. He suffers under a horrific curse that freezes his heart and tears his body apart. A hand tightly clenches a white handkerchief with intense force. The red-eyed, black-haired man demands to know what trick Rosalina used. Narrations recount how she exploited Failsdawn to dominate others, clinging to him under the guise of love. In his memory, the pink-haired woman waves and smiles with feigned innocence. She confidently walks away under the bright sky, leaving him with bitter memories. Back in the present, his assistant desperately calls out to him. The assistant panics as he announces the Duchess of Failsdawn is waiting in the parlor, shocking his master. The black-haired man rushes out, moving swiftly toward the parlor. Wearing a mask and hood, he apologizes to his guest for making her wait. He stops in his tracks, noting her presence as she squeezes her wet hair. The pink-haired girl sits completely soaked on his expensive sofa, laughing awkwardly. She cheerfully explains that she only came to retrieve her handkerchief. Glaring at her dripping wet state, he demands to know what she thinks she is doing. She notes that her actions are all for the sake of her bright future. She muses about laying the necessary cornerstones for her upcoming plans. She playfully adds that the finer details of her plans must remain a secret. He silently ponders her mention of a secret with deep suspicion. The scene transitions to a memory of the Empire's borderlands 2 years ago. A lone soldier stands guard outside a dark military tent under the moonlight. A dark-gloved hand pulls back the heavy fabric of the tent door. The Duke asks if that is all of the report as a subordinate calls out. Messenger delivers an urgent-sealed letter from the Duke's main residence. The letter shockingly delivers news of the Duchess of Failsdawn's passing and requests his immediate return. He reflects on the absurdity of an unknown woman engaging him, impersonating the Duchess, and dying. He burns the document, deeply questioning the identity of Rosalina Brighton. The scene returns to the dark castle courtyard under the starry sky. Footsteps quietly tread through the grass beside a resting horse. A cloaked traveler prepares to mount a horse wearing a dark leather mask. The black-haired man turns his head sharply, sensing something unusual nearby. Palace servants scurry through the courtyard in a state of sheer panic and confusion. He silently peeks around the corner of a pillar to observe the commotion. Rosalina demands that the blue banners be replaced with black ones for a funeral. The servants weakly protest that there is not enough time to secure black banners. Glaring coldly, she sharply questions if they are claiming they cannot do it. Terrified, the servants quickly scramble to take down the blue banners as ordered. Watching from the shadows, the black-haired man realizes that she is indeed perfectly alive. He concludes that the news of her death was entirely a trap to lure him back. Rosalina smiles triumphantly, noting that he has finally arrived. She calls out his name, leaving him utterly shocked that she sensed his presence. He steps out and demands to know the meaning of her ridiculous death farce. She gently explains he needed to return, but he claims he does not understand. She admits she faked her death just to get him to visit for a moment. She notes that even though the chances were slim, her trick successfully worked. She points out the undeniable proof that he is currently standing right before her. The white lily slips from her fingers and begins to fall to the ground. She declares that she knew they were destined from the moment she first saw him. Embracing him, she pleads with him to stay comfortably by her side instead of fighting. With a harsh push, the black-haired man aggressively orders her to stop. He seethes with disgust, thinking of how incredibly selfish and unpleasant she is. Glaring with dangerous intensity, he seriously contemplates whether he should just kill her now. A dark-gloved hand reaches out, reflecting on how a simple reach and grasp can seize power. An ominous narrative box warns that the pink-haired woman's slender neck will easily break. Gently touching his cheek, the pink-haired Rosalina mockingly notes his insomnia has worsened, placing him in a dangerous state. Rosalina softly smiles, whispering to the red-eyed man that he should just sleep a little. The hand slowly slides forward, casting a quiet, soothing spell over the sleeping room. As the man's eyes close, she gently reassures him that he will soon be all right. With a cheerful chirp, the dark night sky quickly fades into a clear, bright morning. Birds chirp cheerfully over the towering stone walls of the magnificent white imperial palace. With a sudden gasp, the black-haired man jolts upright in bed, completely wide awake. Discovering Rosalina sleeping beside him, the shocked man realizes she tricked him and questions her methods. Glaring with sharp red eyes, he warily notes she is a dangerous and unrecognizable woman. Hovering his hand over her, he darkly contemplates whether he should kill her right now. With a sudden sharp pause, his outstretched hand hesitates and stops near her sleeping face. Pulling his hand back, the frustrated man tightly clenches his fist in silent irritation. Turning away, the black-haired man swiftly throws on his dark cloak to depart the bedroom. The massive bedroom door slams tightly shut, leaving the sleeping room in complete silence. From above, the cloaked horseman can be seen quickly riding away from the garden's fountain. Standing by the window, Rosalina quietly watches the horseman ride off into the distance. A hand reaches out towards the empty window frame, reflecting on the lingering touch. Waving her hand, Rosalina asks the masked guildmaster of Heinous if he is listening to her. The hooded masked guildmaster sits quietly before her, completely lost in his own thoughts. The masked guildmaster lightly coughs, suddenly remembering the handkerchief she came to retrieve. Rosalina cheerfully nods, confirming that she has indeed come to get her handkerchief back. The masked guildmaster shockingly reveals that her handkerchief is currently not in his possession. Dropping his pitcher, the freckled assistant shrieks in absolute shock at the master's unexpected confession. A majestic owl is illustrated detailing the secretive path to the Dark Information Guild, Heinous. The pathway lies in the alley closest to the grand statue of the inviting emperor. At the end of the alley stands the most inward secluded antique shop. With a soft creak of the carriage wheel, a passenger slowly steps outside. A hand carefully reaches down, sliding a dark chess piece across the checkered board. With a sudden sharp clack, the hooded Rosalina decisively places her chess piece down. Peering through the wooden partition, Rosalina demands to meet the guildmaster of Heinous. Behind the closed grand wooden doors, a voice begins to deliver a shocking response. The masked guildmaster clasps his hands, deeply annoyed by her sheer, unbothered arrogance. Shaking her head frantically, Rosalina rejects his words and refuses to accept the situation. Fuming with anger, Rosalina declares her plan cannot be easily discarded and asks if he lost it. Holding her chin, Rosalina quietly speaks about the profound significance of her lost handkerchief. Rosalina dramatically laments that it is her husband's only gift, a treasure beyond gold. While Rosalina fumes at his disrespect, the masked man questioningly repeats her claim about her husband. Looking at his desk, the masked man recalls it was just a plain handkerchief without any embroidery. The masked man silently ponders why she would give away something she supposedly cherishes so much. The masked guildmaster raises his hand, politely asking her when she received this special gift. Rosalina gasps in mock surprise, crossing her arms defensively at his sudden, prying question. Rosalina sharply retorts, asking if gathering information is not precisely what they do at Heinous. Rosalina strictly scolds him for losing a valuable item and then asking an impolite question. As Rosalina expresses her deep disappointment, the suspicious masked man notes her obvious ulterior motives. Rosalina mockingly suggests he give up his title, and he surprisingly agrees to her demands. As their clashing energies manifest as fighting animals, the terrified assistant begs not to enter. Letting out a heavy sigh, the exhausted masked guildmaster slumps forward in his chair. The masked man admits he has no excuse for the loss, offering an alternative instead. The masked guildmaster offers to accept a request in Heinous as compensation for the lost handkerchief. Presenting her a seat, the masked man asks for her thoughts while she secretly plots her moves. The pink-haired girl smiles with sudden joyful excitement at his generous offer. She quickly clears her throat, trying to regain her composure and act professional. Sitting comfortably, she agrees to let the mistake go since he is being cooperative. Smiling haughtily, the pink-haired girl declares she will overlook his mistake just this once. Behind his mask, a subtle, amused smile creeps across the guildmaster's lips. He notes she intends to take her divorce settlement and completely abandon her remarriage plans. Sipping her tea, she scoffs at the absurd idea of marrying again for someone else's benefit. She happily explains her dream of building independent wealth and buying a title to live alone.
The guildmaster is relieved by her quick understanding, sparing him from tedious explanations.
She recalls recognizing his white mask from the auction house, identifying him as the Heinous leader. She reflects on the guild's formidable reputation for completing requests with absolute loyalty and pride. Rejoicing in her successful gamble, she suddenly shifts her focus back to him with curiosity. Observing him closely, she gets a strange sense of familiarity from his handsome masked face. She ponders silently, trying to recall where she might have seen him before. Her train of thought is loudly broken when the assistant calls out to her, startling her. A sudden commotion sends hands scrambling as someone loses balance near the table. A loud crash echoes through the room as tea-set pieces shatter against the floor. The guildmaster catches her in his arms, urgently asking if she is hurt anywhere. Holding her close, the masked man's piercing red eyes lock onto hers in a tense moment. The freckled assistant suddenly bursts through the large wooden door, shouting for his master. Seeing them in an embrace, the assistant freezes and confusedly asks what is happening. Releasing her, the guildmaster orders his panicked assistant to fetch all imperial documents regarding aliases and titles. Turning back to her, the masked guildmaster questions how she intends to pay for his services. He points out the massive cost of their information, leaving her looking slightly bemused. She beams brightly, playfully telling him that he is worrying about completely unnecessary things. With a bright flash, she drops a heavy, sparkling pouch of blue gems onto the table. She holds her chest, reflecting on the lingering warmth of his touch from moments ago. The memory of his protective embrace flashes back in her mind, leaving a deep impression. She taps her chin, deeply lost in thought over his mysterious identity. She wonders why the guildmaster wears a mask, noting her elegant transition into formal wear. She muses that he was never mentioned in the original novel, making him a complete mystery. She suddenly snaps out of her daydream with a comical look of pure shock. Shaking her head frantically, she berates herself for letting her focus slip away so easily. She reminds herself of her ultimate goals and what she truly needs to focus on. She envisions a future of absolute luxury, draped in jewels and surrounded by endless gold. Sitting elegantly at the parlor table, she decides it is time to organize her thoughts. A glowing system notification appears before her, confirming her unique status as a system summoner. Her digital status card materializes, labeling her as an F-rank summoner. Recalling her attempts to summon a silver bar, she met with a system restriction warning. Even attempting to summon a simpler bronze bar resulted in a puff of smoke. She collapses on her bed, lamenting her low level and the string of painful failures. Back in the present, she sighs deeply while taking a sip of her warm tea. She wonders what small yet practical items she can actually summon at her current rank. Nearby, gossip-loving noblewomen whisper snidely about her impending divorce and foolish reputation. The ladies gigglingly suggest her divorce is just a cover for being kicked out. One red-haired noblewoman remarks that the high position never suited her in the first place. Gripping her teacup, she sharply interrupts their gossiping, demanding to know who they are. A tearful young blonde-haired girl with green eyes looks up in startled distress. Hannah and her blue-haired companion mockingly discuss how the villainess interfered in their engagement. Overhearing their gossip, Rosalina calmly eats her snack while agreeing the villainess should stay in her place. Hannah warmly comforts the crying blonde-haired Bronzina, who tearfully apologizes to her. While pretending to weep, Bronzina secretly glares, smugly thinking the Duke belonged to her from the start. Tense thought questions why Rosalina has not approached them despite clearly overhearing their loud gossip. The gossipers recall Rosalina's explosive temper, expecting her to ruin her reputation by reacting violently. An aggressive memory flashes of the hot-tempered villainess violently grabbing another noblewoman's hair. Acting innocent, Bronzina subtly manipulates her companions, inwardly sneering at Rosalina's predictable nature. Bronzina inwardly fumes over Rosalina daring to steal her prince and usurping her place. Wiping away mock tears, Bronzina acts distressed while Hannah gasps at something nearby. Sipping her tea with perfect composure, Rosalina ignores the shocked murmurs referencing her title. Rosalina glances sideways, mildly amused and thoroughly confused by the dramatic whispers. A dramatic vision illustrates how the gossiping young ladies perceive the intimidating presence of Rosalina. The gossipers whisper about her villainy until Hannah slams her teacup down and demands they stop. Hannah boldly confronts Rosalina, defiantly asking how she can show her face so shamelessly. Hannah continues her harsh lecture, shouting that getting a divorce is nothing to be proud of. Instructed to stay quietly at home, a comically stunned Rosalina internally questions the absurdity. Bronzina fake pleads for Hannah to stop while their companion wonders if Rosalina is too intimidated to speak. The gossipers smugly conclude that the feared villainess of Failsden is not so formidable after all. Hannah mockingly questions who could ever handle Rosalina's notoriously difficult temperament. Hannah smugly repeats rumors of Rosalina being abandoned by her family and thrown out of the house. The dark blue-haired companion gigglingly suggests that Rosalina should marry a 60-year-old count seeking a fourth wife. Feigning sympathy, Bronzina gently remarks that the Duchess did not want her life to turn out this way. The girls continue to whisper condescendingly about how Rosalina lacked guidance due to having no role model. As the girls praise Bronzina, Rosalina suddenly clutches her chest as a painful ache grips her heart. Entangled in imaginary thorns, Rosalina wonders if the original owner's lingering sorrow causes her chest to ache. Although she originally intended to quietly move on, Rosalina's expression turns sharp with quiet resolve. Bronzina watches with eager anticipation, waiting for Rosalina to finally explode in a fit of rage. The blue-haired lady flinches in surprise as Rosalina calmly brings up the rumors they were discussing. Hannah gasps in sudden alarm as Rosalina turns her cold focus entirely on their gossiping circle. Rosalina sternly accuses the ladies of spreading malicious gossip for their own amusement without verifying any facts. Hannah's face flushes with pure humiliation and anger as Rosalina turns the tables on him. Declaring that she is different, Rosalina firmly pushes Hannah aside to investigate the truth herself. Rosalina's piercing red eyes lock onto Bronzina, singling her out in a tense standoff. Rosalina directly asks Bronzina if it is true that she was the one meant to marry the Duke. As Rosalina mockingly walks away, a sweating Bronzina panics and begins stammering about what happened 4 years ago. Panicking, Bronzina stutters that the Duke was receptive when they discussed the engagement during his brief visit. Rosalina smiles smugly as she realizes the Duke only briefly hinted at considering the match. Rosalina summarizes their behavior, pointing out that they maliciously spread uncertain rumors while pretending to be innocent. Rosalina coldly insults Bronzina, stating she lacks the value to even be considered a true villain. Rosalina smiles beautifully, musing that Bronzina must have lacked a proper noblewoman to look up to. Flinching from the insult, Bronzina is deeply shaken as Rosalina questions if her role model was insignificant. With a look of pure fury, Bronzina snaps and angrily demands who Rosalina thinks she is. Losing her temper, Bronzina screams and swings her hand to violently slap Rosalina across the face. With a sharp whoosh, Bronzina's hand swings wildly through the air in an attempt to strike Rosalina. Suddenly, the phantom presence of the original Rosalina appears, triggering a sudden rush of memories. With a sudden, sharp snap, a hand swiftly catches the swinging wrist midair, stopping the slap. With a loud smack, Rosalina delivers a powerful slap that sends Bronzina reeling to the side. The onlookers shriek in absolute horror and shock at the sudden violent turn of events. Rosalina fiercely points her finger, scolding them to live a good life and stop bullying others. The shocked noblewomen reluctantly agree, deeply shaken by Rosalina's sudden display of physical force. Rosalina quickly flees the scene, internally panic-stricken about letting her explosive temper get the better of her. She quickly reassures herself that the chaotic confrontation was highly productive despite the sudden drama. She happily realizes the scuffle gave her a critical breakthrough to test her summoning powers. The masked guildmaster suddenly appears before her, questioning if she has urgent business. Startled by his sudden presence, Rosalina eagerly asks what brought him directly to her. He explains that he brought the finalized contract draft himself instead of sending a standard messenger. While he notes the loud cafe disturbance, Rosalina enthusiastically thanks him for delivering the document. The masked guildmaster quietly observes her, his sharp red eye filled with silent intrigue. Rosalina beams back at him, her vibrant red eyes shining with overwhelming excitement. As he turns to check the commotion, she desperately clings to him and demands an escort. The pair strolls together through the bustling city square, drawing curious glances from nearby townsfolk. Staring at the document, Rosalina mentally complains about the tedious nature of managing business reports. They continue their walk side by side, a comfortable silence settling over them amidst the crowd. Rosalina playfully teases him, jokingly asking if his personal delivery was motivated by romantic feelings. She boasts about her captivating charms, while he silently notes her complete lack of magical energy. The masked guildmaster abruptly stops walking, staring down at her with a serious demeanor. Rosalina turns to face him head-on, awaiting his response with an amused and confident posture. She brightly instructs him to address her directly by her first name from now on. The guildmaster responds with quiet disbelief, seemingly taken aback by her bold casual request. She firmly explains that she is utterly exhausted by her current formal noble married title. She mentions her upcoming divorce, but he flatly refuses her request to use a different name. He sternly states his refusal to gamble on her trust in anything that is not guarantee. He advises her that such casual familiarities must wait until her separation is legally completed. Feeling awkward, she internally questions his overly serious attitude and wonders if he genuinely dislikes her. She scolds herself for acting out of character and resolves to keep their relationship strictly professional. Rosalina suddenly pauses in her tracks, her attention captured by a highly enticing aroma nearby. A nearby street food vendor is busy grilling delicious skewers that release a mouth-watering scent. She gazes longingly at a freshly grilled chicken skewer, fascinated by the local culinary delights. Noticing her intense gaze, the guildmaster steps forward and asks the vendor for the price. Rosalina proudly refuses to borrow money, loudly demanding the vendor put the charge on her tab. While Rosalina happily devours the scorching hot food, the guildmaster kindly offers her a drink. Delighted by the sweet, refreshing juice, she readily agrees to check out another nearby attraction. They stop before a bizarre local sculpture that leaves both of them feeling quite bewildered. After buying the odd sculpture, she watches in shock as a purchased fruit splits open to reveal a blinking eye. Rosalina remains deeply puzzled by the bizarre produce, unable to classify the unusual items. Guildmaster casually purchases one of the bizarre items, leaving the street vendor overjoyed. Thrilled by his purchase, Rosalina eagerly asks if he plans on tasting the peculiar food. The master responds with a gentle, charming smile, firmly denying any intention of eating it. Rosalina stares silently at the fruit basket, completely captivated by his surprisingly soft and sweet demeanor. Back in her room, a flustered Rosalina aggressively beats her pillow, venting a romantic confusion. Shaking off the distracting thoughts, she fires herself up to focus solely on her goals. She brainstorms minor yet highly valuable items that she can successfully summon at her level. She triumphantly arrives at the perfect solution, realizing that roses are her key to success. She recalls that imperial citizens across all social classes harbor an absolute obsession with roses. High-quality rose extracts are universally coveted, making the flower an incredibly lucrative commodity to summon. Even the most critical noblewomen pride themselves on displaying rare and beautiful rose decorations. She notes that almost every single noblewoman she encountered wore some form of rose embellishment. Stealing her resolve, Rosalina extends her hand forward and boldly activates her summoner skill. A powerful surge of magical energy erupts around her as she attempts to materialize a rose. Rosalina concentrates intensely, shouting to summon a rose as bright pink magical energy swirls around her. Floating amidst glowing petals, Rosalina smiles in delight, believing her summoning attempt was a massive success. Rosalina stares blankly at a single, sad-looking rose on her bed in absolute disappointment. She pokes the pathetic flower, feeling dejected by the underwhelming results of her summoning magic. Rosalina closes her eyes in deep frustration, noting that the summoned item is not even a real rose. A pink artificial rose is displayed, serving as a decorative item meant to bring joy. In the grand office, Rosalina's silver-haired father quietly drafts documents while his bald butler stands nearby. The silver-haired duke pauses his writing, looking up with a serious and thoughtful expression. From a high angle, the quiet and spacious office remains peaceful as the butler prepares tea. Pouring tea, the bald butler comments on how peaceful the mansion is, to which the duke quietly agrees. Sipping his tea, the silver-haired duke speaks up to ask where Rosalina is currently staying. The butler continues pouring tea, reassuring his master that there is nothing unusual to report regarding the lady. A quiet click sounds as the white and gold office doors slowly begin to creak open. Peeking her head through the door, a hesitant Rosalina nervously tries to speak to her father. Standing at the doorway, Rosalina musters her courage and announces that she has come to say something. The butler stands frozen in absolute terror, imagining a demonic Rosalina fiercely warning them to stay out of her business. Gasping in panic, Rosalina covers her mouth as she suddenly realizes she forgot to knock. A sharp knock sounds as Rosalina quickly steps back to knock on the door, prompting the duke to ask what she wants. Rosalina stares at her father with wide, nervous red eyes, preparing for an awkward conversation. Rosalina asks if his birthday is approaching, leaving the silver-haired duke repeating the word in utter bewilderment. Rosalina stands awkwardly in her green and white dress, fidgeting with her hands behind her back. Fidgeting with a small pink gift box behind her back, Rosalina shyly explains that she brought a birthday present. Handing it over, Rosalina brightly offers the gift, revealing a polished golden fountain pen inside a box. The silver-haired duke inspects the gleaming pen as Rosalina proudly boasts about its appearance before starting to explain. The duke presses the gleaming golden pen against paper, testing it out with a serious look. Waving her hand, Rosalina cheerfully explains that the gift is not a functional pen, but rather a solid lump of gold. Clasping her hands with excitement, Rosalina eagerly asks her father if he thinks her unique golden creation is cool. Sweating in disbelief, a chibi version of the duke sighs in mild exasperation over the uselessness of her gold gift. Gazing at a vase of flowers, her inner monologue regretfully acknowledges how immature she has behaved all this time. Rosalina smiles softly, hoping this small gesture will help mend her strained family relationships. The golden pen stands elegantly in its heavy base on the desk, gleaming under the light. In the warm sunset light of his office, the duke sits silently, lost in thought. Staring intensely at the golden pen, the duke silently questions if he truly deserves to receive a gift from his daughter. Overcome with regret, the duke looks down as he remembers how he always chose to turn a blind eye to her struggles. Covering his face in deep remorse, the duke laments his past failure to be a supportive parent she could rely on. A soft double knock on the office door suddenly breaks the duke's quiet reflection. Lowering his hand, the duke looks up sharply as a voice calls out to address him. Standing at the door, a trembling pink-haired maid nervously announces that she has something highly important to report. Nabbing his glasses, the duke narrows his eyes and coldly questions if the matter concerns Rosalina once again. Elsewhere, Rosalina holds a large bouquet of pink roses, muttering about how strange the situation before her is. Looking at the servants, Rosalina points out that this mansion is clearly her own home. Rosalina narrows her red eyes in deep annoyance, questioning why so many obstacles are blocking her path. Sighing dramatically, Rosalina explains her simple desire to decorate her late mother's room with the beautiful roses she summoned. An authoritative voice rings out from the shadows, flatly declaring that her request is absolutely forbidden. The stern elderly maid steps forward, coldly asserting that Beatrice's room is entirely off-limits to everyone. Standing shoulder to shoulder, the two maids firmly block the hallway, declaring that no exceptions will be made. The elderly maid lets out a quiet, chuckling snicker, smugly thinking that Rosalina is harmless and just needs more time. The maids plan to drag out this absurd standoff, scheming to ensure the duke arrives to witness the scene. The maid maliciously schemes to frame Rosalina as a thief breaking in to destroy her late mother's untouched belongings. She plans to further accuse Rosalina of cruelly forcing a cursed maid to tend to dangerous cursed roses. Under a menacing silhouette, the maid maliciously anticipates Rosalina's imminent downfall from the Brighton household. Rosalina approaches the startled maid, cheerfully asking if she is waiting for someone. Leaning in with a knowing smile, Rosalina asks if she is waiting for the duke. Rosalina cheerfully proposes waiting for the duke together, triggering a sudden wave of panic in the maid. Rosalina nervously reassures herself that she did absolutely nothing wrong to warrant such anxiety today. Rapid footsteps suddenly echo down the corridor, signaling someone approaching her in a great hurry. Father's frantic shout startles Rosalina, making her immediately second-guess if she did something wrong. The silver-haired Duke pants heavily at the doorway, looking intensely relieved yet deeply worried. Rosalina frantically waves her hands to defend herself, panicking over yet another apparent misunderstanding. Suddenly, her father lunges forward, grabbing her arm as the bouquet of pink roses slips away. The bouquet of pink roses falls onto the floor, scattering soft petals across the carpet. A loud, urgent question echoes through the hallway as the Duke asks if she is hurt. Grabbing her shoulders tightly, the Duke desperately asks Rosalina if she is completely unharmed. Utterly bewildered by her father's frantic and caring reaction, Rosalina responds with a quiet confession. Rosalina internally questions why entering her mother's forbidden room is crucial to unlocking the story's secrets. A decorative book floats in the air, its pages rapidly turning to reveal past history. A narrative explanation details the necessity of understanding the original novel's plot from the very beginning. An ornate golden key rests atop an open book, hinting at a hidden treasure. A woman's elegant pink heels step gracefully onto the polished castle floor with a light clack. A brown-haired girl with a white bow in her hair stands looking out at the gardens. Rosalina enthusiastically embraces the brown-haired girl, expressing her absolute delight that she finally arrived. Daisy explains she came because of a letter about Rosalina's health and to clear up the mind misunderstanding. Smiling warmly, Rosalina instructs the brown-haired girl to follow her deeper into the castle. Rosalina offers Daisy a grand tour of Brighton Castle, encouraging her to look around freely. Daisy expresses concern over Rosalina's pale appearance, but Rosalina cheerfully dismisses any need to worry. Rosalina quietly compliments Daisy's kind nature, steering the conversation exactly where she wants it. Shifting the focus, Rosalina warmly coaxes Daisy to share more details about her own life. Rosalina mentally recalls how she previously pushed Daisy into the lake under the guise of an accident. Rosalina questions how Daisy managed to discover a massive vein of valuable mana stones right afterward. Wearing a sharp, sinister smile, Rosalina confesses how intensely jealous she felt of Daisy's luck. Oblivious to the danger, Daisy smiles out the window and credits Rosalina for her fortune. Rosalina opens a grand door, cryptically mentioning she has prepared a special gift for Daisy. Daisy steps into the beautiful bedroom, instantly feeling surprised by the room's elegant layout. Rosalina stands before the vanity mirror, quietly revealing that this room belonged to her mother. Daisy gasps in horror upon realizing they have entered the estate's strictly forbidden room. Rosalina violently sweeps a glass vase off the table, shattering it to Daisy's absolute shock. Wearing a malicious grin, Rosalina dares Daisy to try and slip away from her trap. Rosalina forcefully shoves Daisy backwards, causing the terrified girl to scream out in panic. Daisy stumbles back against the wall, accidentally pressing a hidden stone mechanism with a click. A secret passage slides open to reveal a hidden stone statue, delighting the plotting Rosalina. Rosalina dramatically accuses Daisy of finally revealing her true manipulative colors to the Duke. Rosalina is suddenly struck by absolute shock as an unexpected development halts her plan. A brilliant, blinding golden light suddenly erupts from the newly opened secret chamber. Daisy holds up a beautifully glowing golden egg-like relic, completely bewildered by its presence. A brilliant golden crest suddenly glows on Daisy's forehead as the relic activates. The Duke points in absolute shock, identifying the artifact as the legendary fairy's emblem. Daisy stands bathed in radiant light and flowers, looking like a true fairy tale heroine. A narrative caption officially introduces the lost heirloom of the Brighton family, the fairy's emblem. The narrator declares that the glowing fairy's emblem is an absolute must-have legendary item. Rosalina's determined red eye reflects her realization that entering Beatrice's room was the only key. The Duke holds the trembling maid Antonia as other servants watch the confrontation unfold. A narration explains that the maid Antonia suffers from a rare condition called the Curse of the Rose. Rosalina realizes with horror that touching a rose could prove absolutely fatal to the young maid. The narration reiterates how a simple touch of a rose could easily end a victim's life. The head maid continues her accusations, reporting that Rosalina insisted on trespassing in her late mother's forbidden room. The head maid maliciously accuses Rosalina of secretly trespassing into the private quarters multiple times before. She further claims that valuable belongings have recently gone missing from the untouched room. The head maid smugly asserts that a person's wicked nature can never truly be reformed. An outraged Rosalina speaks up, demanding that the head maid stop her slanderous accusations immediately. The Duke cuts in, coldly asking the head maid if she knows her most important responsibility. The Duke fiercely declares that her primary duty is ensuring his daughter's absolute safety. Rosalina is left completely flabbergasted by her father's sudden fierce display of protective concern. Refusing to hear any excuses, the Duke reprimands the terrified head maid for her dangerous negligence. The Duke commands his guards to immediately lock the screaming head maid in the dungeon. Watching the head maid get dragged away, Rosalina silently reflects on how futile their schemes were. Rosalina gathers her scattered bouquet, realizing her elaborate backup plans are no longer necessary. Brushing aside her thoughts, she decides to address her father directly to request something important. Presenting a rose, she reassures him that there is no danger to worry about. The Duke gently inspects the magical rose, amazed by its unique beauty and safety. Rosalina brightly asks if she may place her summoned roses inside her mother's room. Rosalina watches as her father gently returns the single rose back into her flower bouquet. To her delight, the Duke opens the forbidden door and invites her to enter. Overjoyed by his permission, Rosalina eagerly agrees to follow him into the room. Together they stand in silent reverence before a grand portrait of Beatrice cradling her baby. Rosalina looks at the portrait with a gentle smile, feeling a warm sense of connection. Looking around the elegant room, Rosalina's attention is drawn to a peculiar stone statue. Rosalina is suddenly startled as a strange sound breaks the quiet of the room. Her father starts gesturing toward the decor, catching her completely off guard with his explanation. The Duke relentlessly lectures her about history, leaving a comical Rosalina weeping in exhaustion. Rosalina continues chatting animatedly, completely oblivious that her father is already walking out. Leaning against the door, she lets out a heavy sigh of relief after the ordeal. Her eyes widen in wonder as she discovers a beautifully ornate, glowing jewelry box. Rosalina carefully holds the glowing family relic, smiling softly at its mysterious warmth. Opening the box, she is puzzled to find a glowing golden egg resting inside. The scene abruptly shifts to a dark, ominous sky filled with heavy storm clouds. Heavy rain begins to pour down, drenching the silent brick streets of the city. Droplets of water splash against the stone pavements as the storm grows fiercer. Looking up at the sky, Rosalina holds out her hand to catch the falling rain. Trapped under an awning, Rosalina laments that she is completely stranded by the sudden downpour. Rosalina groans, dreading the inevitable lecture she will receive from Antonia for sneaking out alone. A sudden step splashes into the puddles, signaling the arrival of a mysterious visitor. A masked, dark-haired man in a teal coat suddenly appears, holding his umbrella over her. The dark-haired masked man gazes at her, questioning if she is indeed Lady Failston. Recognizing him, Rosalina gasps in shock and questions why her master has suddenly appeared. Leaning in close, the mysterious masked man silently studies her startled face under the umbrella. Rosalina blushes softly under his intense gaze, her heart skipping a beat in surprise. Without a word, the dark-haired man begins draping his own warm coat over her shoulders. Rosalina squeezes her eyes shut in surprise as the large coat envelops her head. He points to a nearby carriage and politely offers to escort her safely back home. Shivering slightly, Rosalina wraps the coat around herself and accepts his kind gesture. Extending his hand, the masked master demands that Rosalina return his coat. The master eyes Rosalina with surprise and comments on her choice of dress. Looking down nervously, Rosalina hesitates before asking her master a personal question. Leaning in close, the masked master directly asks Rosalina if she is dating anyone. A comical ting sounds as the masked master blinks in blank surprise. Rosalina cheerfully clarifies that she isn't seeing anyone, leaving her master surprised. Smiling warmly, Rosalina slips off his coat and promises to wash it before returning it. The master yanks his coat back, prompting a loud protest from a stubborn Rosalina. Adjusting his mask, the master questions what she is doing as a married woman. Rosalina flashes a highly mischievous and confident smile. Rosalina giggles, deciding to share a secret with him despite it being highly confidential. Rosalina eagerly declares that she expects to become a free, single woman very soon. Staring blankly, the masked master quietly repeats her mention of freedom in disbelief. Sudden lightning flashes as a stern voice firmly declares that divorce is not an option. Rosalina sweats as her husband demands the deposit check she spent at the other show. The legal document on the desk represents the absolute requirement needed to proceed with divorce. Rosalina protests the forced marriage, but her husband coldly reminds her of her own lies. Rosalina is left utterly frozen and dumbfounded by her husband's sharp accusation. Rain pours outside as her husband points out the massive headache a missing check causes. Rosalina is overwhelmed by intense frustration and annoyance over her failed divorce scheme. Rosalina desperately proposes writing a notarized sworn statement to guarantee she will accept the divorce. Her husband remains silent, deeply contemplating her desperate proposal with a skeptical expression. Gulping nervously, Rosalina desperately begs in her mind to finally be granted a divorce. Defeated, Rosalina storms out while promising to return once she retrieves the check. Trembling with pure rage, Rosalina fumes over her husband's stubborn refusal. After fuming and cursing her husband, a sudden tring sound alerts Rosalina. A floating blue window warns of a divorce failure penalty, leaving Rosalina deeply bewildered. The blue window details that fate enforcement will now be executed as a penalty. Refusing to yield, Rosalina resolves to earn the gold and rushes to meet her master. Rosalina dramatically bursts into the office, loudly proclaiming her determination to get things done. Rosalina fiercely confronts her master, who can only offer a meek, bewildered response. Standing in his elegant study, the master asks Rosalina the purpose of her sudden visit. Smiling brightly, Rosalina confidently prepares to state the obvious reason for her arrival. Suddenly collapsing onto the table, Rosalina dramatically groans about not eating since morning. Rosalina pathetically begs for snacks, leaving her master completely dumbfounded by her behavior. Her master points out that because this secret location is hidden, resources are scarce. He further explains that staff is limited and the food isn't particularly delicious. The master looms over Rosalina, waiting to see how she will react to his warning. Unbothered, Rosalina simply hums with a charming smile on her face. Rosalina cheerfully requests that he just bring her whatever food is currently available. Freshly sliced warm bread is presented as the perfect simple comfort food. A dollop of rich, smooth cream is scooped up to accompany the bread. Thick cream is spread generously over a warm slice of fresh bread. Sweet honey drips down near a warm bowl of savory mushroom soup. A large, satisfying bite is taken out of the cream-spread bread. Rosalina happily munches on her snack while her master watches in mild amusement. Rosalina internally admits she had been incredibly anxious and worried just moments before. She admits she fully expected to be served cheap, moldy bread instead. Chewing happily with stuffed cheeks, Rosalina declares the meal to be an absolute feast. Reaching for her drink, Rosalina notes her noble body isn't picky about food. The masked master wonders if Rosalina ever had an etiquette teacher back in Brighton. Rosalina quickly stuffs bread into her master's mouth to successfully stop his endless nagging. Smiling brightly, Rosalina eagerly asks her master if the food is indeed delicious. When Rosalina offers him another piece of bread, the master firmly declines her. Rosalina bursts into joyous laughter, entirely amused despite her master's growing irritation. Her bright, carefree laughter echoes warmly, surrounded by a beautiful flourish of blooming flowers. The master admits he fully expected her to leave after complaining about his rudeness. He recalls rumors of Rosalina's vicious past, including flipping tables in fits of rage. He reflects that this wedding portrait of a wicked woman is the true Rosalina. Gazing quietly, the master begins to wonder if he has completely misunderstood her. Pouring drinks, the master suggests they finally get straight to the point of her visit. Rosalina cheerfully raises her mug for a toast, leaving her master utterly bewildered. A sudden clink sounds as their two wooden mugs meet in a simple toast. Rosalina grins mischievously, flashing an OK sign when her master mentions business. While the master drinks, Rosalina begins searching her dress to retrieve something for him. Rosalina reaches deep into her dress pockets to retrieve her brilliant new business proposal. A sharp gasp of pure shock sounds as the master's eyes widen in horror. With a sudden slap, the master forcefully knocks a falling pink rose from her hand. He desperately grabs her face, demanding if she is aware of the deadly rose curse. A sharp gasp escapes his lips as the master stares with intense, breathless panic. Picking it up, the master realizes the rose is an incredibly realistic fake. Rosalina explains that the perfect realism of this fake rose is its prime selling point. A quick click sounds as the master calculates, noting premium pricing will increase profits drastically. Rosalina happily declares that even a fake will easily pass as real with proper pretense. Rosalina confidently invites her master to partner with Hennis and discuss their business terms. The scene shifts as Rosalina sleeps peacefully in her grand bed the next morning. Stretching with a sleepy yawn, Rosalina slowly wakes up with messy, tangled pink hair. Hearing birds chirp, Rosalina wonders in confusion why nobody has come to wake her. Walking downstairs, Rosalina calls out for her maid, Antonia, in the quiet mansion. Rosalina stops in her tracks, looking around with a puzzled expression on her face. Downstairs, a group of maids gossip, asking who is willing to clean Rosalina's room. One maid complains about cleaning it yesterday, questioning why anyone would willingly go there anyway. They whisper about how the head maid Dorota was captured, wondering if other enemies remain. Sitting quietly on the stairs, Rosalina listens to the maids' harsh gossip in silence. Rosalina resolves to lay low for a while to keep her precious body safe. A sharp gasp sounds as one of the gossiping maids suddenly spots Rosalina watching. Rosalina gazes down coldly through the banister, making direct eye contact with the maids. The maids begin whispering in absolute panic, terrified that they have been caught gossiping. Rosalina is completely dumbfounded as the maids flee upstairs without offering a sincere apology. Rosalina wonders in irritation how these maids can possibly remain so bold and confident. She suspects that a powerful, unseen figure must be backing them from the shadows. Suddenly, Antonia appears and loudly scolds Rosalina for walking around the mansion in her nightgown. Still grumbling, Antonia gently but firmly pushes a comical Rosalina back toward her room. Rosalina's eyes narrow with suspicion as she ponders who could possibly be pulling the strings. Brushing aside her worries, Rosalina gets ready for the day amidst beautiful glowing flowers. Rosalina admires herself in the mirror while a tired Antonia yawns in the background. Antonia playfully asks if she ever gets tired of staring at herself all day long. In comical outrage, Rosalina yells back, deeply offended by her maid's cheeky remark. Clenching her fist, Rosalina proudly declares that she must admire her beauty every single second. Rosalina happily cheers about her self-admiration, while Antonia can only offer a weary response. Sitting down with a weary sigh, Rosalina tells Antonia that she has something important to share. Antonia turns around with a puzzled expression, asking her mistress what she wants to discuss. Rosalina clutches her arm tightly while admitting she has been plagued by terrible nightmares lately. A sudden gasp escapes Antonia as she reacts in absolute shock to her mistress's confession. Sitting down near her, Antonia gently inquires about the specific nature of these disturbing dreams. Placing a hand to her chin, Rosalina tries to piece together the hazy memories. She recalls a terrifying silhouette of herself laughing and screaming maniacally in her dream. Rosalina recalls that in her nightmare she was furiously screaming at a mysterious shadow figure. She remembers an intense, heart-wrenching pain that felt as though her chest would shatter. Rosalina anxiously tries to recall the specific name the shadowed man had called her. Antonia waits in tense silence, watching her mistress struggle with the painful dream memories. Breaking her pensive silence, Rosalina suddenly gasps and urgently declares her need to go outside. Rosalina abruptly bursts out of the room, leaving her bewildered maid questioning the sudden departure. While wrapping her cloak, Antonia asks about an escort, but Rosalina firmly dismisses the idea. Antonia peeks out and yells a reminder to return before dinner as Rosalina dashes off. Rosalina flashes a bright wink, enjoying her escape dressed in a simple brown cloak. The scene shifts to the bustling streets of the city under a bright blue sky. Rosalina reflects on the mysterious master of Hinos, whose true identity remains completely unknown. Spotting him, Rosalina cheerfully calls out to her master, teasing how easy he is to find. A startled assistant stands nearby as the master quietly reacts to Rosalina's sudden appearance. The master reaches out his hand, offering to guide Rosalina down the stone steps. Smiling softly, Rosalina places her hand in his as they share a quiet moment. When Rosalina asks about his presence, the master dryly points out he is conducting business. Rosalina's eyes sparkle with excitement as she eagerly asks if he means her own business. Giggling, Rosalina quickly corrects herself to their business while her master releases a tired sigh. The master explains his search for a building while Rosalina insists on tagging along with him. Rosalina cheerfully declares that being stuck inside behind a desk would only dull his senses. Clinging to his sleeve, Rosalina boasts of her confidence while her master questions her behavior. With a sudden yank, the master pulls her hood completely over her eyes, making her shriek. A loud cry of frustration escapes Rosalina as she struggles to see under the hood. The master strictly orders her to stay hidden, prompting a quiet groan of annoyance from Rosalina. As they walk away together, Rosalina reluctantly agrees to his demands while his nagging continues. A sudden violent crash echoes as a potion bottle shatters, splattering pink liquid everywhere. Trembling with pure fury, the dark-haired schemer demands to know why everything is falling apart. Fuming with malice, the wicked woman realizes that all of her carefully crafted schemes are failing. She reflects with bitter resentment on the imprisonment of her loyal assistant, Dorota. Gritting her teeth, she places the entire blame for her ruin on Rosalina. Resolving to take drastic action, she decides to increase the deadly dosage of her poison. Screaming in a violent rage, the malicious woman banishes her terrified servants from her sight. Her eyes narrow with chilling focus as she vows to proceed slowly with her plans. With a vicious grip, she violently grabs her maid's hair while making a cruel threat. She heartlessly throws the crying maid down, shouting that not a single servant is useful. The poor servant crashes painfully onto the carpet, crumbling in absolute terror. The remaining maids cling to each other in fear as their mistress's wrath continues to echo. Peeking from behind a curtain, Rosalina watches the dark scene unfold and notes her success. Holding a mysterious glass vial, the dark-haired woman smiles sinisterly, plotting her next move. While the villainess plots her final strike, Rosalina watches silently, her eyes burning with resolve. Safe in her own bath, Rosalina happily splashes around while singing a cheerful tune. Antonia watches with a weary sigh, silently comparing her mistress's bathing habits to an old man's. Rosalina's playful mood vanishes as she narrows her eyes, focusing intently on her next move. Rosalina reflects on Eliza Brighton, the dark-haired stepmother associated with dangerous thorns. Following Duchess Beatrice's death, Eliza rose from a lowly maid to the Duchess. As the sole witness, she ruined young Rosalina's reputation after the Beatrice incident. Eliza put on a devoted front, caring for the children to escape any suspicion. Rosalina deeply questions if the stepmother's entire saintly public persona is merely a deception. Shivering with fear, Rosalina feels completely terrified of the sinister woman's true nature. Rosalina steels her resolve, knowing she must tread carefully to protect her own life. A sudden soft sniffling sound echoes as Eliza weeps sorrowfully into a white handkerchief. Eliza laments that all the invited guests have sent their regrets for the party. Haunted sweets lie abandoned on the table despite the immense effort put into preparation. Eliza tearfully apologizes, expressing deep sorrow for failing to support her as a mother. Smiling gently, the pink-haired young lady reassures her stepmother that everything is perfectly fine. Young Rosalina happily presents her stepmother with a vibrant, beautifully wrapped bouquet of flowers. Overwhelmed with emotion, Eliza gasps in pure delight at the thoughtful floral gift. Bright, cheerful laughter echoes warmly through the lush sunlit garden during their private tea. Rosalina happily promises to cherish the special gift she received from her stepmother. Rosalina shifts the conversation, addressing her stepmother with a sudden curious inquiry. Rosalina casually mentions that there is a specific matter she has been wondering about. A sudden quiet tap sounds as Rosalina asks if she remembers the fairy tree incident. Rosalina presses for more details, her sharp gaze locking onto her stepmother's face. A sudden firm grip sounds as Eliza unexpectedly reaches out and grabs Rosalina's hands. Eliza tightly squeezes her hands, her expression turning intensely solemn and deeply emotional. Eliza laments the cruelty of others, defending young Rosalina as an innocent child. Eliza argues that blaming Rosalina will never bring the deceased Duchess Beatrice back to life. Rosalina quietly observes her stepmother's defensive reaction, confirming her own growing suspicions. Eliza pulls Rosalina into a warm, comforting embrace amidst a backdrop of blooming flowers. While Eliza whispers comforting words, Rosalina silently notes that her stepmother's reaction is exactly as expected. A sudden, painful crash sounds as a helpless maid is thrown violently to the floor. Young Rosalina hesitantly asks her stepmother if she may finally call her mother. A chilling, sinister smile creeps across Eliza's face as she gladly welcomes the request. Eliza dramatically claims to be deeply moved while her wicked reflection gleams in the glass. Eliza gasps in sudden surprise, her attention abruptly pulled by the Duke's arrival. A loud, violent crash echoes as the Duke furiously slams his fist onto the table. The angry Duke strictly commands his servants to immediately bring him the guest list. The Duke vows vengeance against those who insulted him, while Eliza tries to placate him. Eliza gently reminds her husband that high society cannot be dominated through raw force. In a bright, peaceful moment, Eliza carefully pours a warm drink for her husband. Rosalina suddenly pauses, noticing a highly unusual scent and color from the poured tea. Rosalina curiously asks about the specific nature of the tea her father is drinking. The Duke warmly explains that his devoted wife always prepares this special medicinal tea. Young Rosalina laughs merrily, playfully declaring her personal dislike for any kind of medicine. Shivering in her bedroom, Rosalina panics, realizing the suspicious medicinal tea was actually poison. Rosalina gasps in horror as she remembers her father's rapidly failing health and pale face. A muffled, desperate groan escapes Rosalina as she buries her face deeply in her pillow. Terrified, Rosalina despairs over how she can possibly defeat such a cunning, venomous snake. Springing upright, Rosalina urgently declares that she absolutely must find a major strategic breakthrough. A brilliant, warm golden glow suddenly emanates from a mysterious egg resting on her table. Rosalina focuses intently on the luminous egg, recognizing it as the legendary fairy symbol. Leaning over, Rosalina desperately begs the glowing egg to finally hatch and wake up. A sudden spark of hope flashes in Rosalina's eyes as she senses a reaction. Rosalina lets out a wide yawn as the morning light begins to fill her bedroom. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of light erupts from the mysterious egg sitting on her bedside table. The intense, blinding light fills the entire chamber as the legendary fairy egg finally cracks open. Rosalina tentatively steps down, her heart racing as she moves closer to investigate the phenomenon. In her cupped hands, she cradles a tiny, glowing green-haired fairy that has just hatched. The newly awakened fairy gasps in pure shock as she gazes up at Rosalina. With tears in her eyes, the little fairy emotionally calls out to Rosalina as Rose. The fairy frantically demands to know why Rosalina took so long to wake her up. Sobbing, the fairy complains about the incredibly long wait she endured inside her egg. Whimsical sparkling light floats gently through the air, carrying the tiny fairy's magical presence. Confused by the fairy's emotional outburst, Rosalina asks if she had really been waiting. Rosalina recalls the original story's description of a fairy pure and white as a cloud. She realizes this creature perfectly matches the description of the manipulative evil spirit from the original novel. This malicious entity was the one who fed young Rosalina terrible advice, leading her into traps. Following the fairy's deceptive guidance ultimately led the original Rosalina straight to her execution. The fairy's true wicked intent was always to watch Rosalina suffer and die a miserable death. In the original timeline, the evil spirit gleefully laughed as she abandoned her doomed victim. But returning to the present, the cute little fairy happily clings to Rosalina's hand with pure devotion. Feeling utterly defeated, Rosalina laments that her supposed secret weapon is actually a dangerous threat. Overwhelmed by this dangerous revelation, Rosalina decides to ignore the fairy and go back to sleep. Staring blankly into the dark, Rosalina anxiously ponders how to handle this unpredictable, malicious creature. The next morning, Rosalina casually eats her breakfast while completely ignoring the fairy's annoyed protests. Setting her jaw, Rosalina reaches a firm decision on how to handle the situation. She realizes that keeping a manipulative and unpredictable spirit around is far too dangerous for her plans. Rosalina sternly tells the fairy to stay still, resolving to pretend the creature simply does not exist. With the glowing fairy hidden near her, Rosalina prepares to face the day with a serious expression. At the banquet, Rosalina's father sits at the table while the invisible fairy flies around his face. Rosalina cheerfully dismisses his concerns, politely urging her father to enjoy his tea. Her father mentions that he heard she is the host of this lovely banquet. He compliments her hosting skills, which makes Rosalina pause and focus intently on his words. Rosalina flashes a warm, sweet smile in response to her father's heartfelt praise. Looking closely at the tea, Rosalina suddenly senses something highly suspicious about the brew. As her father raises the cup to drink, the little green fairy gasps in absolute horror. The fairy urgently warns Rosalina that the tea is laced with a deadly poison called acarotia. Rosalina gazes at the cup, acknowledging that the suspicious tea matches her grim memories. Although the fairy begs her to intervene, Rosalina hesitates, unsure if she can trust the creature's warnings. Her father generously offers to grant her any wish, prompting Rosalina to make a strategic request. She boldly asks her father to share a cup of his special medicinal tea with her. Rosalina playfully lies, claiming she has been feeling rather weak and fatigued lately. Heartbroken by her words, her father deeply blames himself for how much she must have suffered. Later, Rosalina presents her masked master with a sample of the suspicious medicinal herbs. The masked master hands Rosalina the official analysis report detailing the herb's chemical properties. The master confirms that the sample indeed contains the highly toxic ancient herb known as acarotia. He explains that the poison silently accumulates over time, causing fatal cardiac hardening when combined with alcohol. Recognizing her stepmother's lethal scheme, Rosalina grimly reflects as the fairy proudly boasts about her accurate warning. Rosalina immediately asks her master if there is a known antidote to neutralize this deadly poison. While the fairy confidently claims no antidote exists, the master quickly contradicts her, leaving the spirit stunned. The master reveals that a cure made from a rare herb called etra will successfully counteract the poison. Rosalina thoughtfully presents the master with a special health remedy as a token of her gratitude. She explains that these rare herbs only recently arrived from across the sea. The masked master sighs, explaining that while he appreciates the thought, this generous gift is simply too much. Laughing cheerfully, Rosalina tells her master not to feel burdened because she has an excess of them, as her maid struggles with a massive bag behind her. Rosalina notes that she gave some to Maurice as well, who happily cradles his own large bundle. Rosalina silently realizes her stepmother's expert tactics of mixing false information while pretending to help, as the little fairy frantically protests. Crying desperately, the little fairy begs Rosalina to believe her, claiming there was absolutely no antidote in her own time. Rosalina gives the crying fairy a cold, menacing glare, terrifying the helpless little spirit. Master marvels at the rare medicine, admitting that even he could never guarantee obtaining something so incredible. Leaning over the table in sheer astonishment, the master wonders where on earth she managed to find it. A massive stack of wrapped packages is slammed onto the table with a loud thump. As the tea and pastry sit on the table, the master begins to offer his thoughts. The master sincerely expresses his constant gratitude before pausing to bring up another important matter. Rosalina brightly requests a single ticket from Memento Mori from her master. The guard acknowledges her ticket and confirms that it has been successfully checked. The brutal and blood-stained arena of Memento Mori stands ready for the gladiatorial gambling matches. Rosalina watches the scene, confidently noting that she already knows today's match outcome. Rosalina recalls that today's victor is a nameless slave gladiator of unknown nationality and age. The massive, purple-skinned giant gladiator suddenly charges forward with a thunderous thud. The giant roars in victory as the announcer declares the fifth gladiator has fallen to roaring cheers. The announcer shouts to the crowd, marveling at the giant's peak condition and wondering who can defeat him. As a cell door rattles open with a heavy clank, the announcer introduces the next challenger. A chained gladiator steps forward as the announcer proudly declares him Memento Mori's newest challenger. Crowd gasps as the mysterious challenger is announced as the fearsome one-strike Kali. A smug spectator mockingly dismisses Kali, predicting he will die from a single hit. The wealthy spectators burst into arrogant laughter, confident in the giant gladiator's victory. To liven up the atmosphere, the host prepares to present a very special offer. The announcer reveals that Memento Mori has prepared a highly special gift for the crowd. Rosalina's eyes widen in shock as the announcer reveals a legendary fragment of healing. The crowd whispers in disbelief, questioning if it can really save those on the brink of death. The host urges the spectators to predict which of the remaining 9 gladiators will defeat the giant. The announcer promises the rare healing fragment to whoever correctly predicts the outcome as Rosalina reaches out. An attendant politely approaches the hooded Rosalina, asking if she would like to place her bet. Spectators whisper amongst themselves, eagerly checking if the legendary bull has entered the arena yet. The screen showcases the terrifying presence of the arena's undefeated champion, the mighty Bull Cold. Rosalina hands over her finished bet, focusing on guessing which exact match number the bull will appear in. With a glowing aura surrounding him, Kali stands ready as the announcer declares the match's start. With a powerful stomp, Kali lunges forward across the arena floor at incredible speed. The crowd watches in suspense as Kali directly clashes with the monstrous purple-skinned giant. A thunderous collision echoes through the arena as their weapons strike with massive force. Rosalina and the spectators gasp in absolute shock at Kali's blinding, near-invisible movement speed. Kali swiftly slides behind the giant, executing a flawless, lightning-fast defensive maneuver. Kali launches a swift, decisive sword strike, catching his massive opponent completely off guard. The giant gladiator gasps in sudden realization of Kali's unexpected high-speed assault. Confused by the speed, the giant turns around, completely unable to track Kali's movements. Kali lands gracefully on the arena floor, his sword prepared for the final strike. With a clean and powerful swing, Kali unleashes a lethal slash against his massive foe. The giant's massive legs give out as he begins to collapse onto the arena floor. The purple giant falls flat on his back, defeated by a single decisive strike. The crowd gasps in disbelief as the announcer declares Kali the victor of the match. As Kali slowly turns his head, Rosalina flinches slightly beneath her dark hood in surprise. Rosalina freezes in suspense, wondering if her eyes have just met the victorious slave gladiators. Rosalina flinches in sheer disbelief beneath her dark hood, swaying as she stares in shock. She recalls that the victorious slave gladiator's true identity is Calyx Blake, the lost soul heir. In the original novel, the female lead was destined to rescue and save Calyx Blake. This fateful encounter at Memento Mori was the spark that started the original story's plot. Rosalina reluctantly admits she would have tried her best to avoid coming here if possible. She worries that any wrong move could completely ruin the crucial meeting with Calyx. Gazing down at her hand, she wishes this stressful situation were not the case. A bright magical sparkle suddenly glows from her tightly clenched fist. A cute little green-haired fairy suddenly pops out and whispers to Rosalina. The fairy urgently warns Rosalina that suspicious people have been tailing them since earlier. Rosalina realizes slave traders are blatantly tailing her to retrieve the precious healing fragment. Suddenly, a harsh voice calls out from behind, commanding her to stop right there. Rosalina pauses and turns her head slightly to look back with a calm, serious gaze. 3 smug mercenaries block her path, asking where she thinks she is going. A mercenary reaches out his hand, demanding she surrender the legendary fragment of healing. The mercenary aggressively demands she hand over the precious healing item immediately. He mockingly calls her naive as she stands silently in the alley. The 3 mercenaries burst into mocking laughter, questioning if she really thought she could keep it. Beneath her dark hood, a knowing, confident smile plays on Rosalina's lips. The lead mercenary menacingly warns her to surrender the item while he is still being nice. Rosalina remains unbothered, silently noting that she fully anticipated this confrontation. She lets out a quiet, relaxed sigh, preparing herself for her next move. Rosalina firmly plants her feet on the cobblestone floor, ready to negotiate. She calmly tells the mercenaries she does not care how much they were paid. Holding up 3 fingers, Rosalina offers them 3 times their payment to back off. The lead mercenary laughs mockingly, completely dismissing her generous financial offer. He draws his sword, boasting of loyalty to their employer, much to Rosalina's annoyance. Rosalina strictly tells herself to focus, knowing she cannot afford any failure here. The green-haired fairy watches Rosalina closely, waiting to see what she will do. Under her dark hood, a slightly wicked, knowing grin spreads across Rosalina's face. Rosalina cheerfully pulls out the glowing blue healing fragment, showing it to her pursuers. She highlights that this priceless item is indeed the legendary medicine they seek. Rosalina pauses, clutching the magical crystal tightly in her hand. She menacingly asks what their employer will do to them if they fail their mission. The mercenaries break into a nervous sweat as they realize failure means their deaths. Rosalina smiles brightly, offering to resolve their problem with a generous gesture. With a dramatic spin, Rosalina tosses the glowing blue crystal high into the air. The precious stone sails in a wide arc far over the stone well. The fairy catches the crystal midair and drops a fake replica into the canal water below. The mercenaries scream in absolute shock, astounded by her sudden display of physical strength. Heavy splashes echo through the water as the frantic thugs scramble to retrieve the object. Rosalina watches in amusement as the desperate mercenaries plunge into the canal to search. Underwater, small hands firmly grasp the genuine glowing blue healing fragment. The green-haired fairy swims swiftly through the deep blue water carrying the heavy crystal. The little fairy bursts through the water's surface, gasping loudly for air. The fairy tearfully complains about doing manual labor while the thugs search the canal behind her. Rosalina flashes a sweet, apologetic smile, playfully praising the spirit as the best fairy ever. Pleased by the compliment, the fairy happily flies off to deliver the crystal safely. Left alone, Rosalina looks down the quiet alley, wondering why her target has not arrived yet. She anxiously ponders if she has been tricked, just like in the original novel's timeline. Read this back with a faster speed. An off-screen voice calls out to Rosalina as she stands in her purple hood. Rosalina gasps in shock as a glowing blue crystal suddenly floats behind her. The floating crystal speaks up, teasingly warning Rosalina that she is way too obvious. The spirit continues to warn her that anyone could easily steal the fragment at this rate. The green-haired fairy happily giggles, showing Rosalina that she successfully secured the genuine Huon fragment. Suddenly, the little green-haired fairy freezes in confusion as something unexpected catches her attention. Hiding behind a stone wall, Rosalina holds her breath as she senses someone approaching. Sweat dripping down his face, Calyx mutters in frustration about forgetting his mask in his haste. Peering out from her hood, Rosalina is stunned to see him and questions his presence. Urgently grabbing his wrist, Rosalina insists that they have no time to stand around. Rosalina pulls the bewildered gladiator along, telling him there is no time to explain and they must flee. Wet footsteps splash through the canal water as an angry thug curses from behind. The wet mercenary desperately searches the water, screaming in frustration because he cannot find the crystal. Glancing up, the angry thug spots Rosalina and Calyx fleeing down the alley together. The furious mercenary splashes forward, shouting demands to know where they think they are going. With a wild swing, the mercenary hurls a weapon directly toward the fleeing pair. Calyx shouts a warning to Rosalina to get down before shielding her from the incoming blade, taking the hit himself. Rumors swirl about Rosalina losing her temper and stabbing her husband with a knife after hearing about a divorce. The purple-haired woman laughs mockingly, calling the rumor about the stabbing the most amusing news she has heard recently. Slipping into her indoor shoes, she continues to mockingly laugh at the ridiculousness of the rumor. The purple-haired woman asks if the rumor is true, leaving her nervous maid hesitating to answer. Several maids quietly adjust the elegant green dress as the purple-haired noblewoman stands in silence. The noblewoman notes that whether the rumor is true or false is irrelevant to her. She coldly dismisses the facts, emphasizing that the truth does not matter to anyone anyway. Placing a letter down, she reflects on how high society cares far more about gossip than the actual truth. His muscular torso wrapped heavily in bandages, Calyx stands quietly as the doctor finishes treating his wound. The doctor strictly explains the steps required to keep his injury from worsening. Overriding the doctor's warnings about resting, Calyx bluntly tells Rosalina she is no longer needed and should leave. Rosalina glares at him, inwardly criticizing him for acting so toughness right after being stabbed. She reluctantly recalls how he effortlessly knocked out 2 mercenaries barehanded immediately after getting injured. Rosalina remembers how his terrifying aura scared off the remaining thugs, proving his reputation as a formidable war hero. A deeper question troubles her as she wonders why he was even at the arena in the first place. Calyx walks toward the window, reiterating his request for her to leave since his injury isn't serious. He dismisses her concern, coldly pointing out that they are not close enough for her to worry. He warns her that staying in his mansion any longer will only bring her trouble. Rosalina stares back at him with a resolute and unwavering gaze, refusing to be easily dismissed. She lets out a tired sigh, mentally preparing herself for the stubborn negotiation ahead. Stepping forward, Rosalina firmly commands the stubborn gladiator to first get back onto the bed. She scolds him for ignoring the doctor, forcefully reminding him that he is currently a patient who must rest. Calyx responds quietly, noting that he only got hurt because she got involved with him. Ignoring his protests, Rosalina calmly pours a fresh glass of water from the teapot. Calyx glares at her, questioning if she really just mentioned the word responsibility. Leaning in close, Rosalina places her hand gently on his bandages, stating she has come to understand him. Rosalina leans in incredibly close, her red eyes locked onto his with absolute determination. Holding the glass out, she explains that she is currently trying her absolute best to change. She holds her finger up, demanding that he must also cooperate with her efforts. Rosalina firmly tells him that from now on, he is not allowed to behave rudely toward her. Calyx takes the glass, skeptically asking what benefit he will receive in return for his cooperation. Rosalina looks at him with wide eyes, asking if the answer isn't already completely obvious. Rosalina bursts into a bright, cheerful smile, radiating confidence in their budding partnership. A magnificent grand palace stands proudly beneath a bright blue sky filled with fluffy white clouds. Gazing down at Leodore sleeping peacefully, Rosalina wonders why someone cursed could rest so calmly. Looking closer, Rosalina grows uneasy as she senses that something is deeply wrong with his state. Rosalina turns to her small green-haired fairy, warmly thanking the spirit for her past assistance. Keeping her focus on the sleeping man, Rosalina asks the fairy for an assessment of his current condition. The little green-haired spirit shakes her head frantically in disapproval, signaling that something is highly abnormal. Hovering over Leodore, the fairy gravely clarifies that his deep slumber is not caused by a fairy's curse. The fairy reveals that Leodore's peaceful state is actually the result of a fairy's protective blessing. Rosalina absorbs this revelation in stunned silence as a soft blue magical light glows nearby. Her eyes trail down to Leodor's pale hand, which is hooked up to a continuous medicinal drip. Pointing toward the clear fluid feeding into his veins, Rosalina asks the fairy if she recognizes the substance. The fairy warns that the fluid is actually a lethal poison designed to rot a victim's blood. But dark vision shows how the agonizing toxin eventually causes a slow and painful demise. Rosalina realizes that the protective fairy blessing has been actively purifying the poison to keep him alive. Clasping a glowing magical light in her hands, Rosalina desperately prays for her purification efforts to succeed. A powerful surge of magical energy flares around Rosalina as she channels her inner strength. The green-haired fairy gasps in alarm, warning Rosalina that her current magical output is still insufficient. Flying directly before Rosalina's face, the loyal little spirit determinedly offers her own magical power to assist. The scene shifts to another part of the estate where candle flames flicker in the quiet halls. Holding her elegant purple fan close, the brown-haired Duchess suspiciously questions Rosalina's frequent visits to Leodor's room. From her luxurious couch, the Duchess demands answers from her terrified maids, who begin to tremble in fear. Sweat dripping down her face, the terrified maid stammers that Rosalina merely wishes to gain the Duke's favor. A dark, knowing smirk spreads across the Duchess's face as she mockingly ponders Rosalina's true motivations. The young maid falters further, struggling to find the right words under her mistress's intense scrutiny. Shaking uncontrollably, the maid repeats her desperate explanation, terrified of the consequences of any misstep. A memory shows Rosalina warning Antonia to protect herself should any danger arise in the future. Rosalina's voice echoes in the memory, commanding the maid to reveal everything she knows if threatened. Rosalina reaches out with a serious expression, emphasizing the gravity of her protective instructions. While Antonia remembers her mistress's kindness, she also recalls the secret motive behind Rosalina's upcoming ball. Tears drip onto the floor as the maid continues her forced confession about Leodor's vegetative state. Weeping bitterly, Antonia explains that Rosalina plans to exploit the airless situation to repair her public image. Kneeling before the Duchess, Antonia confesses that Rosalina intends to use the ball to seize control of Brighton. The Duchess sighs in smug satisfaction, pleased that Rosalina's apparent scheme aligns perfectly with her own assumptions. A hand clenches tightly in anger, reflecting the Duchess's bitter resentment toward Rosalina's perceived treachery. Her expression hardening into cold fury, the Duchess vows to block Rosalina's plans at all costs. With a sharp click of her heels, the Duchess commands the attention of everyone in the room. Turning to look out the window, the Duchess decisively orders her allies to accelerate their scheme. 5 years ago, the Duchess reveled in her prestigious new title as she walked the palace grounds. She greedily laid claim to all the family's exquisite jewels and magnificent treasures. She fondly remembers calling out to her new husband during those early days. She proudly showed off her sparkling ruby ring, celebrating their sacred union. However, the silver-haired Duke reacted with sudden shock and visible discomfort to her advances. Coldly turning his back on her, the Duke offered a curt and dismissive apology. Left alone, the Duchess clenched her dress in bitter humiliation as he walked out. She reflects bitterly on the numerous failed attempts she made to win his cold heart. She remains deeply resentful that he repeatedly rejected every single chance she offered him. A young pink-haired Rosalina is shown watching her distant father's back in a sunlit garden. Running eagerly through the lush garden, Rosalina calls out to her beloved father. Turning around with a soft gaze, her father gently tells her he has something important to share. Giggling brightly, the young Rosalina beams as she prepares to ask him for a special favor. The auburn-haired Duchess clenches her hand, refusing to allow things to go Rosalina's way. The Duchess angrily looks down at memories of her husband and young Rosalina in the garden. A pink narrative box notes that the long-anticipated day of the ball arrived unexpectedly soon. Ornate platters of frosted cupcakes are meticulously prepared for the grand celebration. The magnificent grand ballroom stands illuminated under glowing crystal chandeliers. Elegantly dressed noble guests mingle across the polished marble floors of the venue. Two noble women gossip in excitement, noting that the Duchess of Fieldsden has finally returned. They quietly discuss rumors that Rosalina is the sole host of the lavish banquet. A guest swears their sparkling champagne glass as the gathering begins. Two elegantly dressed noble ladies whisper to each other about the unfolding events. A gray-haired noble spots an old acquaintance and raises his finger in greeting. He loudly calls out to Baron Moliette across the crowded ballroom. The gray-haired man questions why the bald Baron is exceptionally dressed up today. Twirling his long mustache with a smirk, Baron Moliette cryptically deflects the question. Moliette boastfully declares his ambitious plan to capture the wealthy Duchess of Fieldsden's heart. The gray-haired noble dryly dismisses his absurd fantasy and tells him to stop dreaming. He warns the Baron about her fierce temper and reminds him of her recent divorce. Moliette smugly winks, questioning if his companion has truly not heard the latest news. Molliet greedily calculates the massive fortune he would acquire by marrying the wealthy divorcee. He boastfully asserts his absolute confidence in easily taming and controlling any fierce woman. He arrogantly muses that taming a woman or a wild horse is all the same. Molliet proudly raises his glass, confidently asserting she will soon submit to his authority. A steady stream of dark red wine is poured into a clear glass. Suddenly, a wet peef sounds as a splash of wine hits Molliet squarely in the face. Wiping his face, the drenched Baron furiously demands to know who dared to attack him. A gloved hand holding an empty glass appears as a woman calmly offers a mock apology. Rosalina smirks in her pink ball gown, insincerely claiming that her hand simply slipped. Rosalina coldly rejects his demand for an apology, stating that she deserves one instead. Stunned and trembling with absolute rage, the red-faced Baron glares at her in disbelief. Molliet angrily questions her stubborn pride, reminding her that she is a disgraced divorcee. Rosalina calmly closes her eyes, summoning her magical status window to investigate the Baron. Her system window displays her past achievements, including securing the magical stone. The window confirms she altered her original tragic fate, successfully accumulating destiny energy. A glowing blue system interface prompts her to select a target for information viewing. Smiling confidently, Rosalina swipes her gloved hand to access the Baron's profile. Glowing blue screens scroll rapidly as she accesses the system's databases. The profile reveals Molliet is Alina's useless older brother who accomplished nothing of value. Rosalina stares in shock upon realizing that Molliet is actually older than her father. She inwardly recoils in disgust at his proposal, realizing he is technically her uncle. She resolutely vows that she will never accept such a repulsive partner under any circumstances. Molliet arrogantly extends his hand, offering to take her in if she quietly submits. Rosalina gasps in sheer disbelief at his audacity, pointing a shocked finger at herself. Molliet yells defensively, insisting that his proposal is the best offer she will get. Frustrated by his ignorance, Rosalina coldly orders her guards to immediately escort him out. Molliet shrieks in outrage, loudly mocking her apparent inferiority complex and status. Armor-clad guards firmly seize the struggling Baron as he aggressively protests his eviction. Shouting hysterically, Molliet vows to ruin her reputation by exposing her disgrace to high society. Molliet laughs mockingly, but a voice suddenly interrupts, declaring that her partner is already present. Sensing a sudden shift in the room, Molliet stammers as the ballroom falls silent. Molliet freezes in terror as a tall, imposing, shadowy figure looms threateningly directly behind him. Standing behind the trembling, bald noble, a tall man mockingly references the idiot he was told about. Leodor, standing tall with striking red eyes, glares down coldly as Baron Molliet shudders in fear. Intrigued noble guests whisper amongst themselves, questioning the state of Rosalina's rumored divorce. Rosalina frowns in irritation, silently noting that she never invited the newly arrived guest. A sudden light tap on her shoulder breaks her train of thought, causing her to freeze. Turning around in surprise, Rosalina finds Leodor standing close behind her with a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Trembling with sweat, Baron Molliet nervously laughs and claims his previous offensive remarks were merely a joke. Leodor coldly retorts that such dangerous jokes might cost the Baron his life, causing him to gasp. A chibi Rosalina sighs in annoyance, privately labeling the trembling Baron as a pathetic and cowardly bully. Rosalina swiftly summons her glowing blue system interface to investigate the Baron's background. A glowing blue screen reflects in Rosalina's red eye as she scans the system's databases. Leodor calls out the Baron's name, prompting a desperate, stuttering response from the terrified man. Sweating profusely, Baron Molliet frantically pleads with Duchess Rosalina for her forgiveness. Leodor places a hand on Rosalina's shoulder as she dryly notes the apology has come far too late. Walking forward as her heels click on the floor, Rosalina casually questions his Brighton-sponsored brewery business. Rosalina flatly exposes his massive gambling losses, leaving the Baron completely speechless. Pale with shock, Baron Molliet stammers in disbelief, demanding to know how she uncovered his secrets. Rosalina addresses Baron Molliet with cold authority, preparing to reveal his darkest crimes. She reveals that he resorted to human trafficking and kidnapped commoner children to cover his massive debts. She explains how he used Duchess Brighton's name to hide his illegal deeds within family territory. Glaring with piercing crimson eyes, Rosalina declares her authority to pass judgment on the spot. Surrounded by soft floral patterns, she delivers a definitive verdict of guilty. Smiling confidently, Rosalina gracefully raises her champagne glass to mark the end of her judgment. Leodor orders his guards to immediately search the Molliet estate to free the captive children. A murmur of surprise and gossip rippled through the gathered crowd. Surprised noblewomen whisper in confusion about Rosalina suddenly acting with the authority of a duke. Molliet screams in a furious rage, loudly accusing Rosalina of lying and abusing her power. A booming voice interrupts Molliet, declaring that Rosalina was granted full permission to judge him. The silver-haired Duke Brighton reveals he authorized Rosalina to act on his behalf for the day. Duke Brighton firmly challenges the crowd, inviting anyone with an objection to speak up. A heavy silence falls over the ballroom as the guests exchange uneasy glances. With a heavy thud, the utterly defeated Baron Moliette collapses helplessly to his knees. Duke Brighton raises his champagne glass, warmly calling out to his daughter, Rosalina. Smiling brightly, Rosalina raises her own glass to toast her beloved father. In a memory, Rosalina warns her father that a major event will occur at the upcoming ball. Duke Brighton warmly reassures her that he could never turn away his own daughter. He recalls how she diligently recommended successful investments after returning to the estate. Rosalina is remembered presenting important financial documents to her father in his study. He fondly reflects on how she even sourced special tea to improve his failing health. She gently held his hand, pleading with him to share his honest thoughts. Duke Brighton smiles warmly, expressing his absolute faith and trust in her. Back in the present, Duke Brighton looks at the crowd, noting how many old faces have gathered. Turning his back to the ballroom, he poetically reflects on the passing of a long, cold winter. He promises that even the deepest snow eventually melts, signaling a new beginning. He warmly invites the nobles to help nurture the family's new blossoming future. Duke Brighton extends his open hand with a genial laugh, welcoming a brighter era. The gathered noble guests smile and raise their glasses in cheerful agreement. Sensing a sudden presence beside her, Rosalina turns her head in mild surprise. Leodore smiles down at her warmly, causing a bright blush to spread across Rosalina's face. Meanwhile, the auburn-haired Duchess Brighton flies into a violent rage upon learning of her brother's arrest. Duchess Brighton furiously yells, demanding to know if her servants simply stood by, twiddling their thumbs. Kneeling on the floor, the maid desperately pleads that there was absolutely nothing they could do. Duchess Brighton violently kicks the maid, screaming that they are all useless and worthless bugs. Slumping onto a sofa, Duchess Brighton sighs and resolves to hold in her anger for now. Touching a small chest, Duchess Brighton notes she is still deeply furious about her arrested brother. Duchess Brighton orders the servants out of her sight, screaming that she cannot stand them. Prostrating herself, the maid tearfully begs to see her kidnapped little brother, Riki, just once. Grabbing the chest, Duchess Brighton ignores the maid's desperate pleas to hear her brother's voice. Duchess Brighton ruthlessly strikes the prostrate maid down with a harsh, sweeping blow. Duchess Brighton asks if she is a joke, causing terrified screams as she raises her hand. Glaring coldly, Duchess Brighton demands to know if they failed to understand her order to leave. A violent slap echoes through the room, emphasizing Duchess Brighton's ruthless cruelty. Bowing politely, Leodore extends his hand to Rosalina, asking for the honor of a dance. Rosalina looks at Leodore's outstretched hand with a stunned and highly hesitant expression. Turning away, Rosalina declines Leodore's request, explaining that she will be dancing with her father. Leodore takes a decisive step forward, blocking her path and cutting off her escape. Getting close, Leodore intensely questions if it truly matters who her partner is. Rosalina glares in irritation, inwardly complaining that he is cheaply using his handsome face. Rosalina grumbles that her partner doesn't matter, though her soon-to-be ex-husband was certainly a surprise. With a sudden pull, Leodore sweeps her into his arms, causing her to cry out. Sweeping her across the floor, Leodore mockingly asks if she has forgotten how to dance. Glaring at him, Rosalina heatedly refutes his tease, insisting that she has not forgotten. Their fingers entwine as Leodore firmly guides her hand, establishing his control over the dance. Leodore executes a flawless, dramatic dip, supporting Rosalina as her pink dress billows around them. Leodore smiles down at her with a gentle, confident smirk as they move in perfect sync. Leodore asks if her memory is returning, to which Rosalina retorts she never forgot. Surrounded by a flurry of white roses, the pair spin elegantly together across the crowded ballroom. The dance slows as Leodore softly calls out Rosalina's name, capturing her full attention. Leodore gazes deeply into her eyes, beginning to speak with a serious and intense tone. Leodore leans in close, murmuring that he wants to know just a bit more about her. Panicked by his sudden closeness, Chibi Rosalina shrieks internally as he holds her in a dep. Quickly recovering her composure, Rosalina coldly commands him to stop talking nonsense. Leodore asks what she truly wants, questioning if she is simply trying to hasten their divorce. Leodore warns the divorce might fall through, teasingly asking if he should obsess over her again. Startled by his bold declaration, Rosalina hesitates as she tries to find her voice. Sliding her pink dress hem across the floor, Rosalina pulls away, saying she understands. Rosalina walks away with an annoyed look while Leodore watches her with a satisfied smile. Two noble women greet the late-arriving Duchess Brighton, who politely apologizes for her delay. Duchess Brighton freezes in shock as she hears a grand announcement echoing from the center stage. Rosalina proudly stands beside her father, announcing herself as the representative of House Brighton. Intrigued noble guests whisper amongst themselves, questioning if the Felsdons are truly getting divorced. Other guests whisper in confusion, noting they did not seem divorced earlier. A close-up shows a hand raising a beautifully decorated glowing goblet of wine. Rosalina's father raises his goblet, warmly expressing his deepest gratitude for her return. Raising their glasses high, Rosalina and her father lead the guests in a joyful toast. Duchess Brighton secretly drinks as she coldly thinks that this consequence is entirely of their own doing. Glaring sinisterly, Duchess Brighton thinks they are fools, just as Rosalina's father suddenly begins to cough. Rosalina's father coughs violently, spitting up a spray of blood into his hand in shock. With a loud shatter, the poisoned goblet slips from his hand and crashes to the floor. Screams of terror erupt as Rosalina's father collapses helplessly, leaving Rosalina watching in absolute horror. Pushing past the crowd in a panic, Duchess Brighton desperately screams for her collapsed husband to wake up. Wailing in grief, Duchess Brighton loudly cries out for her husband. Turning her head slightly, the Duchess begins to direct her quiet fury elsewhere. Whipping around with a furious glare, the Duchess loudly spits out Rosalina's name. She desperately shakes her husband while demanding how such a betrayal of trust could happen. Demanding answers, the weeping Duchess fiercely denounces Rosalina before the shocked onlookers. The Duchess fiercely condemns Rosalina as an absolute blight on House Brighton. The Duchess tearfully laments that she always defended Rosalina despite all the criticism. She recalls how she defended Rosalina's cruel actions, including expelling the former Duchess's nanny. Shadowy, glaring eyes surround Rosalina as the crowd labels her actions as truly disgraceful. She claims the servants came to her daily, weeping over Rosalina's terrible behavior. The Duchess claims she even scolded those servants out of loyalty to Rosalina. She dramatically laments that her blind trust ultimately led to this horrifying tragedy. She accuses Rosalina of poisoning her own father despite his efforts to show affection. She cries out in despair, questioning how anyone could possibly be so cruel. Gossiping guests whisper that Rosalina should be stripped of her noble status immediately. Leodore silently watches the unfolding drama, wondering how Rosalina will handle this situation. Leodore's eye suddenly widens in shock as he notices something unexpected. Leodore smiles in amusement, eagerly anticipating whatever bold countermove Rosalina is about to make. Rosalina calmly suggests that her stepmother should also be stripped of her title for kidnapping children. Duchess Brighton panics, desperately shouting that Rosalina is speaking absolute nonsense. The skeptical guests whisper amongst themselves, dismissing Rosalina's shocking accusations as a pathetic distraction. An outraged noblewoman steps forward to challenge Rosalina regardless of her current noble title. The woman loudly pleads for Rosalina to stop tormenting the grieving Duchess any further. Internally panicking, the Duchess resolves to replace every servant once she gets through this. Rosalina casually asks why her stepmother hasn't summoned a doctor to save her husband. The Duchess freezes in sheer shock as she realizes her grave oversight. The Duchess frantically orders a physician to be fetched, only for him to immediately arrive. Duchess Brighton realizes with growing suspicion that the physician was already waiting to step in. The scene shifts to Leodore's guard standing alertly in the ballroom. A reporting guard salutes Leodore, announcing that his orders have been carried out. He reports that the children trapped in the Maliette mansion have been safely rescued. An anxious maid steps forward, looking through the crowd for a specific face. She cries out her brother's name and runs to embrace him tightly. The young boy stares blankly in utter disbelief after his sudden rescue. Tears quickly began to stream down the rescued boy's face in overwhelming relief. He fiercely clings to his sister while crying out for her in pure relief. Emotional reunions take place across the room, leaving the aristocratic guests completely speechless. Sweating profusely, Duchess Brighton desperately tries to distance herself from the unfolding scandal. She stammers her innocence, completely unaware of the furious servants glaring behind her. A solemn thought acknowledges the deep-seated desire to settle these long-standing grudges. Turning back to the crowd, Rosalina declares that this trial is not over yet. Rosalina coldly addresses her stepmother of formally calling out her name, Eliza Brighton. Rosalina formally accuses Eliza of human trafficking, attempted poisoning, and the former Duchess's murder. Eliza feigns ignorance, weakly claiming she has absolutely no idea what Rosalina means. A chilling question echoes through the tense room, listing off her undeniable crimes. Rosalina firmly grabs Eliza's shoulder, preventing her from escaping her inevitable judgment. With a piercing crimson gaze, Rosalina demands to know if those were her crimes. The head maid suddenly drops to her knees before the two confronting women. The weeping maid reveals that the Duke was poisoned with a toxic herb. The head maid confesses to bringing the poison into the estate under Eliza's direct orders. Eliza silently fumes in rage while the kneeling head maid submissively accepts her punishment. The narration explains that chronic akarosia poisoning turns lethal the moment the victim consumes alcohol. Crucially, it is revealed that Lord Leodore's medical fluids were also laced with akarosia. Eliza reacts with outrage, desperately demanding how anyone could possibly believe such a ridiculous accusation. Screaming in fury, Eliza prepares to strike down the maid for making these accusations. A powerful, commanding voice cuts through the tension and orders the violent outburst to stop. With a sudden, firm grip, the silver-haired noble catches Eliza's wrist to stop her. Eliza gapes in absolute shock and terror, questioning how he is standing before her. He reveals he had been forewarned about the Akaroshia poison and prepared countermeasures beforehand. Walking forward with cold determination, the silver-haired man voices his deep disappointment in her. Eliza trembles on the floor as he coldly declares his disappointment in both her and himself. Overwhelmed by fear and defeat, Eliza's hands shake violently against the cold stone floor. A chilling, desperate laughter echoes through the room, punctuated by violent, painful coughing. Driven to madness, Eliza hysterically confesses to the human trafficking charge in front of everyone. My speed will remain the same. Here is the text. Hysterically admitting to trafficking and poisoning, Eliza maliciously demands proof for the murder charge. Laughing crazily, Eliza tries to deflect the blame by accusing Rosalina of killing her mother. Rosalina calmly glides past her stepmother, conceding that too much time has passed for physical evidence. A sharp click-clack echoes through the hall as Rosalina takes another decisive step forward. Her silver-haired brother stands ready, his calm demeanor hiding a deep, unwavering resolve. The scene shifts back in time to the innermost sanctuaries of the Grand Brighton estate. Deep within lies a restricted garden housing the legendary fairy tree that protects the family. Holding a plate of fresh strawberries, the young silver-haired brother welcomes someone to the garden. Suddenly, a flock of birds scatters in panic as he drops his strawberries in shock. He whips around in alarm as a mysterious, glowing purple light flares in the distance. A foot violently stomps down, crushing a fresh strawberry into the grass with sudden force. Heart-pounding, the young noble desperately sprints through the garden, screaming out Beatrice's name. His eyes widen in pure terror as he desperately gasps out her name again. The frantic maid carrying the young master runs directly into him, screaming out in relief. She tearfully explains that the fairy tree went on a rampage after Rosalina broke its branch. The maid reveals the devastating truth that the Duchess sacrificed herself to protect young Rosalina. The horrific realization of his mother's tragic sacrifice strikes him, leaving him completely frozen. Under a dark looming shadow, young Rosalina sits beside her mother's lifeless body in silence. Following the traumatic incident, young Rosalina completely lost her memories of that horrifying day. The fairy tree's barrier sealed the garden, giving false credibility to Eliza's cursed testimony. Seizing the opportunity, Eliza capitalized on the tragedy and successfully rose to become the new Duchess. Playing the devoted mother, Eliza fooled the world by caring for her comatose stepson. Rosalina reveals that her newly awakened brother's testimony completely contradicts Eliza's lies. He stands tall, ready to speak the truth and expose her wicked deeds at last. Pointing a firm finger, he accuses Eliza of trying to murder him, his mother, and Rosalina. Eliza desperately claims he is confused from illness, but he replies his mind is clear. He begins recounting the fateful day, recalling it was unusually sunny without a single crowd. He remembers being dragged under the fairy tree by Eliza without knowing the reason why. The flashback shows Eliza smiling sinisterly, satisfied that everything was going exactly as she planned. By threatening his life, she weakly forced the protective fairy tree to open its path. In the past, Eliza mockingly tells Beatrice that she is finally playing her tragic role perfectly. Angered by Beatrice's defiant glare, Eliza demands to know what that look is about. Eliza violently grabs Beatrice by her pink hair, furiously asking if she still ignores the situation. With a cold, wicked smile, Eliza promises that all of them will die there together. Cast to the ground, Beatrice groans in pain as the horrifying trap closes in around her. Beatrice, with her long pink hair, lies helpless on the grass, while Eliza, sporting a sinister smile, grips her wrist. Eliza mockingly tells Beatrice that this attack is not sudden and that she has always wanted to crush her. A happy memory of Beatrice's family appears, illustrating Eliza's envious thoughts, questioning why Beatrice was the only lucky one who got to have everything. Standing alone in a dark, trembling rage, Eliza bitterly recalls how she had to play the pretend friend just to build up her own good girl image. Eliza's face is shown in a manic close-up view as she crazily declares she is sick of receiving Beatrice's charity crumbs, commanding Beatrice to beg like a worm for her life. Activating a glowing purple scroll, Eliza initiates a powerful curse while Beatrice desperately begs her to save her son instead. Tears stream down Beatrice's face as she gasps in pure horror at the unfolding betrayal. Eliza sinisterly reveals that Leodore is indeed innocent, but plans to kill Beatrice first before using the curse scroll to turn her son into her personal puppet. The scene focuses on the swirling purple magic rising past the garden leaves as Eliza menacingly mentions Rosalina's name. In the distance, young Rosalina watches as Eliza contemplates her fate, only for Beatrice to scream out in denial and tear the scroll apart. Back in the present, the silver-haired brother solemnly concludes his testimony, stating that this is the full and true account of that fateful day as he remembers it. Eliza screams out in absolute panic, her face contorting in rage as she frantically protests that his testimony is a complete lie. The silver-haired brother continues his public accusation, revealing that Eliza didn't stop there and had been poisoning both him and their father while framing Rosalina. Silver-haired brother turns to Rosalina with a gentle, regretful smile, apologizing to her for being a useless brother and letting her fight this battle entirely alone. Their hands clasped together tightly, cementing their unbreakable sibling bond after years of suffering. Surrounded by beautiful roses, a silent message of heartfelt gratitude thanks Rosalina for her courage and devotion. Rosalina and her brother share a tender moment of relief surrounded by beautiful blooming roses. Leodore quietly observes the touching family reunion while keeping a watchful eye on Eliza in the background. In a desperate last-ditch effort, Eliza secretly prepares to activate another dangerous magical scroll. Eliza raises the scroll, her face consumed by homicidal madness as she screams that she will never forgive Rosalina and threatens to send her to join her deceased mother. The scroll ignites with a violent burst of purple lightning, threatening to strike Rosalina. Leodore swiftly steps in front of Rosalina to shield her, firmly asserting that it is a husband's duty to protect his wife since she is still his wife for now. Rosalina looks on in stunned silence as her husband stands fearlessly to shield her. Leodore holds a glowing sword while Rosalina playfully teases him, asking if he should be acting so cool after just being stabbed. A noblewoman loudly commands the Imperial Knights to restrain the dangerous, out-of-control Eliza immediately. Eliza is pinned to the floor as Rosalina stands over her holding the evidence scroll. Rosalina officially lists the charges of murdering the former Duchess of Brighton and attempting to murder the family. Rosalina formally delivers her final judgment, sentencing Eliza to death for her crimes of murder, attempted murder, and human trafficking. Eliza chokes violently as a sudden agonizing pain grips her chest in her final moments. Eliza crumbles to the ground, screaming out in utter torment as her life fades away. A system notification officially announces that the first stigmatized target has been identified and the Brighton family rescue is complete. Rosalina quietly stares at the floating system message as the chaotic trials finally come to an end. Maid Antonia politely knocks on the door and announces that she is coming into the ladies' private quarters. A sudden, massive pile of summoned red roses collapses over the startled maid as she enters. Peeking out from the sea of red roses, Rosalina happily greets Antonia, praising her perfect timing. Rosalina hands a written address to the bewildered maid, requesting that all of the newly summoned artificial flowers be sent there immediately. Smiling warmly, Rosalina cheerfully waves goodbye and thanks her loyal maid for the assistance. Antonia frantically calls out that Rosalina shouldn't be running around the estate in her loungewear as the pink-haired lady runs off. Rosalina sighs to herself, questioning the actual usefulness of her unlimited fate energy. Lying on the sofa, she laments that summoning harmless, artificial roses is a disappointing use of such massive power. Taking off her disappointment, she resolves to work hard and raise her summoning rank. She cheerfully decides to make some good money by selling the summoned roses in the meantime. Rosalina's expression turns thoughtful as she looks toward the sofa, noting that her little fairy companion has been sleeping unusually much lately. The adorable green-haired fairy sleeps peacefully on a plush pillow bathed in a warm light. The little fairy tiredly mutters that she thinks she used far too much of her power. Floating gently above Rosalina's hand, the fairy explains she needed deep rest to fully recover her strength. The fairy apologizes for pushing herself too hard, but Rosalina kindly tells her there is no need to apologize. Rosalina laughs merrily on her couch, sharing a sweet and lighthearted moment with her fairy friend. Rosalina looks up in surprise as an outside voice politely requests pardon for the sudden intrusion into her room. The head maid hesitantly begins to speak, stating there is something she must shamelessly say despite the late hour. Two maids stand by the doorway as a young boy steps forward to address Rosalina. The weeping servant deeply thanks Rosalina, emotional that her family has been reunited like a wonderful dream. The maid holds the young boy protectively, expressing her deepest gratitude to Rosalina for keeping them safe. Handing over a formal document, she tearfully announces their decision to resign from the estate. Rosalina holds the letter of resignation, listening to the maid's confession of their past coerced actions. The confession reveals they played a part in harming Rosalina and the Brighton family. Dropping to her knees, the maid tearfully declares they will accept any punishment Rosalina deems fit. Rosalina reminds her that she already promised her father not to hold them accountable. Pointing out his growing family responsibilities, Rosalina encourages the young boy to keep working instead of quitting. Overwhelmed by her immense kindness, the three maids break down in tearful gratitude. The young boy beams with a bright smile, calling out to his sister in pure joy. A hand suddenly pulls him back as a woman apologizes to Rosalina for his youthful insolence. Smiling gently, Rosalina reassures her that it is perfectly fine. A grim memory resurfaces of Calix, the notoriously abused slave gladiator of Memento Mori. He was the tragic protagonist of the novel, suffering endless abuse since his childhood. Though she previously knew of his immense suffering, she had chosen to look away to protect herself. She had once believed he simply needed to endure until the story's heroine arrived to save him. The glowing vision depicts the heroic female lead who was destined to rescue the captive gladiator. Believing herself to be a mere minor villain, Rosalina had strictly avoided interfering with the novel's plot. Terrified of changing her fate, she bound herself in metaphorical chains to stay out of trouble. However, she realized that this world had transcended the simple pages of a fictional book. This is now a living, breathing reality where people genuinely laugh, cry, and survive. Embracing her new path, Rosalina warmly connects with the servants she has chosen to protect. In the dark dungeon, the brutal master violently whips Calyx for attempting to break his chains. Standing over the battered gladiator, the master furiously demands gratitude for raising him. Glaring back with sheer hatred, Calyx silently endures the master's bitter insults. Suddenly, Calyx attempts to leap through the spiked bars, ignoring the master's panicked warnings. He is violently pulled back by his chains, collapsing heavily onto the stone floor of the cell. Angered by the defiance, the master snaps his whip down to punish the insolent slave. The scene shifts to steady footsteps echoing down the dark stone stairs. The slave master turns to address a mysterious buyer, asking if they wish to see the gladiator closely. Standing in the dimly lit passage, a cloaked figure wearing a dog mask silently awaits. The master warns the guest to stay cautious, muttering about naive children reading too many books. With a sharp thud, the disguised visitor drops a heavy leather pouch of gold onto the table. Stunned by the immense payment, the master instantly complies and points toward the passage. He guides the masked guest down, warning that the gladiator is highly dangerous and kept isolated. The disguised visitor gently rests a black-gloved hand against the cold dungeon wall. Wearing the white dog mask, she cautiously navigates the dark, damp stone corridors. She passes by grim prison cells, catching sight of a skeleton lying behind the rusted bars. Her soft footsteps continue to echo as she searches deeper into the silent prison. Suddenly, she halts her stride as she senses a presence further ahead. She notices a specific area marked by fresh, dark bloodstains on the floor. Crouching down quietly, she peers through the spiked iron bars of the lowest cell. From the pitch darkness, a pair of glowing purple eyes snaps open as footsteps draw near. Pulling her mask aside to reveal her pink hair, she softly asks if he is indeed Calyx. She stands before the cage, formally addressing the silent gladiator sitting in the shadows. Calyx violently clenches his shirt, his body trembling beneath the heavy iron chains. Fueled by raw rage, he prepares to lash out at the intruder. With a sudden scream of shock, she is thrown back as his chained fist violently slams against the bars. Dropping her mask, Rosalina stares in sheer horror at the feral gladiator's unmatched hostility. She realizes the tragic truth that he is already fully consumed by the beastification potion. Slipping onto the floor, she lets out a heavy sigh, realizing saving him will be incredibly difficult. A heavy downpour drenches a bleak alleyway, recalling a gloomy memory from the past. Barefoot steps splash through cold puddles on the dark, wet street in the rain. She quietly slides open the window, gazing out into the dark and rainy night. She recalls the tragic days of her parents' passing and debt collectors storming the funeral. She laments using her college tuition for debts while the rain fell without fail. She reflects on how uncontrollable circumstances in her life always dragged her down. She describes her past existence as a meaningless life where she was just barely surviving. Telling herself to get a grip, she searches her red bag for something useful. Trying to clear her mind, she sits on the floor beside a leaking ceiling drip. Clutching her head in the quiet dark, she desperately mutters that she is hungry. Shifting back to the present, she firmly resolves that things are completely different for her now. With determined red eyes, Rosalina declares she will no longer be swayed by the original story. Rosalina observes the growling gladiator, recalling how the novel destined his body to break completely. She looks closely at the bruised, heavily scarred body of the tragic captive gladiator. Rosalina notes the beastification potion has wiped his mind, making him too dangerous to approach. Resolute, Rosalina prepares to act, whispering that she has no other choice but to help. A gentle, comforting voice suddenly bids her not to make such a sad face. The adorable green-haired fairy floats before her with a reassuring and cheerful smile. The tiny fairy warmly presents her with a special magical gift for their difficult task. The fairy gently breathes her magical essence onto a beautiful pink rose in Rosalina's hand. Rosalina declares that there is someone who needs this healing gift far more than her. Holding the glowing pink rose tightly, Rosalina closes her eyes to activate its magical energy. Blowing gently on the flower petals, she earnestly requests the magic to heal Calyx's wounds. A sudden, warm, pink beam of light strikes Calyx, startling the chained gladiator. Calyx shields his face with his chained arms as the bright magical light envelops him. The deep scars on his muscular arm begin to glow and miraculously fade away. The magical light cleanses his battered leg, completely erasing his wounds in an instant. Calyx gazes at his healed hands in complete disbelief, his purple eyes wide with wonder. His wild, slitted beast eyes gradually soften, returning to a normal and clear human gaze. Approaching the bars of his cell, Rosalina kindly inquires how the healed gladiator is feeling. Introducing herself with a warm, bright smile, she invites him to call her Rosa. Staring at her intently, the dazed gladiator softly repeats her name with a quiet murmur. Rosalina gently asks the quiet boy if he remembers his own name by any chance. The heavy, empty chains hanging on the damp stone wall clank softly in the silence. Grim memories resurface of his cruel master standing outside his cage, mocking his helpless state. The blue-haired boy tilts his head in utter confusion, trying to process her question. After a brief pause, the boy looks down and quietly mutters his name, Calyx. Meanwhile, Leodor reacts in sudden shock, splashing his tea upon hearing about Rosalina's secret visits. Leodor furiously demands to know why he is only now hearing of her frequent outings. His assistant nervously bows, deeply apologizing for the grave oversight during their busy schedule. Glaring with determination, Leodor asserts his responsibility and prepares to take matters into his own hands. In an instant, Leodor vanishes, leaving only his empty, elegant chair spinning behind. Back in the dungeon, Rosalina holds up a bottle of beastification antidote for Calyx to drink. Confused but trusting, Calyx obediently gulps down the potion while holding onto a sandwich. Suddenly, the sheer bitterness of the antidote causes him to choke in intense shock. Calyx drops his sandwich in disgust, leaving Rosalina watching in surprise as it falls. Rosalina playfully laughs and apologizes, watching the chibi Calyx gag from the bitter taste. Calyx glares up from the floor, but she insists he must finish drinking the cure. Smiling cheerfully, Rosalina holds out a sweet strawberry candy as a reward for his cooperation. Rosalina looks on in sudden astonishment, noticing a surprising change in Calyx's behavior. Rosalina notices Calyx's eye color has changed, prompting a questioning look from him. Rosalina gently asks Calyx if she can take a closer look at him. Calyx eagerly grabs her hand and happily nuzzles his cheek against her palm. Calyx holds her hand through the cage bars, seeking her complete attention. Calyx's clear blue eyes shine brightly as he stares back at her. Rosalina is suddenly pulled away from the cell bars by an unseen force. Her master suddenly steps in, drawing his sword and commanding Calyx to step back. Surprised, Rosalina frantically questions her master about how he arrived at the dungeon. Rosalina immediately warns her master to keep his distance from the dangerous captive. Straining against his heavy chains, Calyx's protective instincts flare as he calls out to her. A low, menacing growl echoes through the dark corners of the dungeon soul. The heavy iron chains clank loudly as Calyx struggles to move forward. Calyx is forcefully pulled back, kneeling under the restraint of the chains. Electric sparks crackle violently against the wall as the magical restraints tighten. Raising his sword, the master coldly threatens to execute the defying gladiator. Rosalina rushes forward, shouting desperately for her master to stop his attack. She aggressively scolds her master for his sudden and disruptive interference. Turning to Calyx, Rosalina strongly lectures him about neglecting his physical injuries. Sparing a sigh, Rosalina excuses his wild behavior since he lacks proper understanding. The masked master mutters in deep frustration regarding the gladiator's hostile nature. Rosalina suggests they have a serious conversation, noting his arrival was timely. Rosalina quietly whispers her secret plans to her master, leaving Calyx curious. Her master directly questions whether she intends to set the gladiator free. Rosalina clarifies if he is referring to Calyx as a beast. She passionately protests that labeling him a beast is far too harsh. The master asks if the captive is secretly the missing Prince Blake. Stunned, Rosalina questions how her master managed to learn about the secret. Her master wonders if her motives stem from political ambition or pure kindness. He reflects on the monumental task of liberating all the enslaved gladiators. The master asks if her ultimate plan is to dismantle Memento Mori. Rosalina firmly declares that bringing down Memento Mori is indeed her ultimate goal. She admits her current weakness, explaining she needs public support to alleviate her guilt. Rosalina expresses deep remorse for not saving the suffering gladiator much sooner. She resolves to make things right, regardless of how late her rescue is. Rosalina cheekily asks her master to assist with her rescue mission free of charge. The master facepalms in utter disbelief at her bold free request. Rosalina enthusiastically asks if he has a viable escape plan they can use. She displays a map detailing her original plan to sneak past the guards. Rosalina happily discards her old plan, claiming it is no longer necessary. Meanwhile, a guard complains about his lazy colleagues as he enters the room. The remaining guard remains fast asleep, snoring loudly at the wooden table. Suddenly, a violent strike knocks the sleeping guard completely unconscious. Wearing her dog mask, Rosalina commands the guards to stay quiet to survive. Her master reveals a secret escape passage, completely bypassing the guarded main gate. Declaring it might be dangerous, her master pushes Calyx down the secret passage first. After Calyx lands safely at the bottom, Rosalina sighs in relief. Before descending, Rosalina suddenly remembers something important and stops her climb. She turns back to the tied-up guards, strictly demanding her money back. Her gloved hands firmly grip the wooden ladder to begin her descent. Wearing her dog mask, Rosalina carefully climbs down the secret ladder. Slipping suddenly, Rosalina lets out a startled cry as she loses her footing. Calyx swiftly catches her, prompting a quiet, flustered thank you from Rosalina. Her master steps down firmly, coldly ordering her to put her shoes back on. Her master wonders if they should head directly to Duke Blake's residence first. Rosalina rejects the idea, firmly deciding they must go to Hennis before doing anything else. Her master hesitates, her attention caught by the boy's strikingly clear and vivid blue eyes. Startled by the boy's appearance, her master asserts that those eyes are a distinct trait of the royal family. Though skeptical, her master notes there are no official records of other royal children being born. Rosalina recalls that the Blake family's eyes also bear a strong resemblance to the royals. As her master ponders eye-altering medicine in Hennis, Rosalina excitedly declares she has solved the puzzle. Holding up a small vial, Rosalina asks her master to take care of it for her. She hands him the vial, instructing him to give the medicine to the boy daily to manage his beastly state. Her master groans in deep frustration, questioning why he has to be the one responsible. A brief vision of a sappy noble family reminds Rosalina of the stakes involved. Rosalina reassures her master they will head to Duke Blake's residence once everything is fully settled. Calyx looks up with wide eyes, asking if he can simply remain with her instead. Both Rosalina and her master glare back at him in deep irritation and suspicion. The tense, silent standoff continues as they stare down the blue-haired boy. Her master slides open a hidden street door, preparing to guide them out into the open. They emerge into a bustling city square featuring a grand fountain and a waiting horse carriage. Her master politely holds Rosalina's hand as she steps up into the carriage. Suddenly, Calyx throws open the carriage door, staring inside with desperate longing. Reaching in, Calyx firmly grabs Rosalina's sleeve, refusing to let her leave. Her master immediately pulls the clinging boy back, separating him from the carriage. Her master apologizes to Rosalina, expressing regret that he cannot escort her all the way. Calyx calls out to her in confusion as her master keeps a tight grip on him. Leaning out of the window, Rosalina explains she must return home because her family has arrived. Rosalina promises to visit soon and bids him to behave, leaving him standing in the square. As the carriage disappears, Calyx's expression instantly cools, dropping his helpless, pitiful act. He casually brushes his master's hand away with a cold, dismissive gesture. A sharp slap sounds as Calyx smacks his fist into his palm with dark resolve. With a cold and calculating gaze, he quietly asserts his true identity as Calyx Blake. A soft chirp-chirp of birds echoes outside a beautiful sunlit cathedral in the city. A rhythmic click-clack of footsteps echoes down the grand estate corridor. Maurice slides open the door, surprised to find Rosalina already waiting in the library. Dressed in an elegant blue gown, Rosalina stands gracefully before the tall bookshelves. Maurice steps forward to present the historical record book she had previously requested. Taking the book, Rosalina confirms it contains the appearance records of past royalty and nobility. A gentle flutter of turning pages fills the room as Rosalina searches for details about Calyx's eye color. She wonders if she overlooked a crucial detail in the original story regarding his heritage. A sudden slam echoes as the library door is thrown open by a frantic Calyx. Calyx rushes in and eagerly grabs her hand, urging her to hurry along with him. He insists there is absolutely no time, leaving her completely bewildered. Calyx drags the startled Rosalina out of the library at full speed. Out in the garden, Calyx happily explains he found a baby bird up in the tree. Rosalina stares at him in complete disbelief, sweat dropping at his childish emergency. Feeling her silent judgment, Calyx falls quiet, his cheerful expression faltering. Calyx quickly crouches down, enthusiastically offering her a piggyback ride to reach the branches. A dark shadow looms over them as her master's cold voice cuts through their play. Loud clatter sounds as her master dumps heavy textbooks onto Calyx, demanding he finish his etiquette lessons. A dismissive tisk escapes his lips as the master calls Calyx's academic progress pathetic, prompting Rosalina to ask him to go easy. Rosalina asks her master if he requested an audience with the Blake family, which he confirms. Rumors circulate about the Blake family's current state as the white-haired duke stands near a warm fireplace. Having dealt with numerous fraudulent claimants pretending to be the lost heir, the family remains highly vigilant. Calyx sits at his desk looking completely uninterested in his studies, holding a quill in his mouth. When Rosalina suggests taking a break, Calyx dramatically slumps over, loudly protesting that he hates studying. Master suggests giving up on the hopeless boy, which instantly triggers Calyx's fierce determination to study. Calyx silently resolves not to give up, realizing he now has a deeply personal reason to study. Surprised by his sudden shift in attitude, Rosalina asks if his motivation is to find his long-lost family. Peeking over his book, Calyx secretly vows to study hard and become worthy of Rosalina. Rosalina and her master study an open reference book displaying detailed illustrations of historical figures. Pointing to the page, Rosalina cheerfully asks her master what he thinks of her findings. With a sudden snap, Calyx aggressively slams his book down and angrily complains that they are standing way too close. Deflecting the tension, Rosalina happily asks Calyx if he wants to see a newborn foal in the stables. Calyx's eyes light up with childish excitement as he enthusiastically agrees to go. Together, they stand at the stable fence to catch a glimpse of the horses inside. Rosalina grabs Calyx's arm, gently warning him not to get too close and startle the horses. Approaching quietly from behind, her master whispers that the medicine to alter eye color has finally arrived. The records state that the Blake family never married into royalty, struggling with inbreeding to preserve their line. Since the royal crown prince is an only child, no rumors of illegitimate royal children exist. Rosalina wonders how Calyx possesses the vivid blue eyes exclusive to the imperial royal family. Gently petting the horse, Rosalina questions the original plot as she doubts Calyx's true identity. A droplet falls, sending quiet ripples across the clear blue water. The day of the highly anticipated audience arrives at the grand estate of Blake Manor. Rosalina carefully adjusts the silver star brooch pinned to Calyx's black cravat. Stepping back with a satisfied smile, Rosalina proudly announces that she is finally finished. Dressed in elegant noble attire, Calyx looks incredibly handsome, much to Rosalina's absolute delight. In the original storyline, Calyx was forced to fight endlessly in the brutal arena of Memento Mori. Broken and deemed completely useless, the gladiator was cruelly cast out and left to die in the rain. The original novel's protagonist, Daisy, happened to pass by the alleyway during the heavy downpour. Daisy discovered the dying gladiator and cradled his unconscious body in her arms. Rosalina feels a brief twinge of guilt for altering Daisy's destiny by rescuing him first. Rosalina expresses her sincere gratitude to her master for all the help he has provided. Her master casually brushes it off, requesting financial compensation later since he had free time. Meanwhile, back at the estate, a miserable Maurice is buried under towering piles of paperwork. Dressed in formal attire, the trio enters the grand reception room to meet the Duke. Leaning heavily on his walking cane, the old Duke steps forward to meet his guests. Overcome with emotion, the white-haired Duke wonders if he will even recognize his long-lost child. Looking up, the Duke realizes his anxieties were entirely foolish as he gazes upon Calyx. Stumbling forward, the tearful Duke cries out Calyx's name in sheer disbelief and relief. The emotional father tightly embraces his lost son, sobbing uncontrollably against his shoulder. Respecting their private reunion, Rosalina politely offers to take her leave with her master. Startled, the Duke begs them to stop, refusing to let the benefactors of his son simply walk away. Turning to his head butler, the ecstatic Duke demands that a grand banquet be prepared immediately. He commands his staff to shower Rosalina with the finest dresses, jewels, and anything she desires. Her master politely declines the offer, explaining that Lady Failsden is extremely busy with her affairs. He suggests scheduling a future meeting, which Rosalina quickly agrees to as she steps back. The Duke is utterly dumbfounded to discover that the young lady is the legendary Duchess Failsden. The elderly Duke stands in complete shock, his mouth agape at the sudden revelation. Desperate to protect his family's honor, the Duke begs her to accept any land, money, or jewels she wants. Rosalina politely declines the Duke's grand offer, explaining she did not rescue his son expecting a reward. Refusing to let her leave empty-handed, the old Duke instructs his butler to fetch a precious family heirloom. A beautiful pristine light porcelain vase decorated with elegant gold filigree sparkles brightly under the light. A decorative plaque reveals the ancient heirloom to be the legendary and immensely valuable orichalcum vase. Rosalina is absolutely ecstatic to receive such a priceless treasure while her master watches her in quiet exasperation. The old Duke bids them a warm farewell, offering his sincere blessings to Rosalina and her family. Rosalina expresses her gratitude for his hospitality as she prepares to board her carriage with her master. Calyx runs out onto the balcony in a desperate panic, shouting his desire to go along with Rosalina. The old Duke and his servants stand completely frozen in utter shock at Calyx's sudden emotional outburst. Rosalina gently admonishes the boy, warning him that his dramatic behavior is making his father uncomfortable. Waving from the carriage window, Rosalina bids Calyx a fond farewell and promises to visit him soon. The grand carriage rolls out through the massive iron gates, leaving the sprawling Blake estate behind. Calyx stands beside the Duke in sullen silence, watching the carriage disappear into the distance. The old Duke steps closer, calling out to Calyx to examine him more closely. With a sudden, firm grip, the Duke rudely grabs Calyx's chin to inspect his face. The Duke questions why Calyx's eye color has not returned to normal, deeply suspicious of Memento Mori's actions. Walking back toward his mansion, the Duke resolves to investigate how Lady Failsden became involved with Calyx. The Duke darkly asks his butler if he knows who he despises most in the world. Reaching out, the Duke plucks a beautiful pink rose from the garden bush with a soft snap. With a wet crunch, the Duke viciously crushes the rose in his fist, cursing fortunate people. Inside the moving carriage, Rosalina suddenly flinches with a sudden start, prompting her master to ask what is wrong. She quickly brushes off her sudden discomfort, claiming it is nothing while keeping her eyes lowered. Rosalina reviews the search records, noting the prominent guilds the Blake family commissioned to find Calyx. She finds it highly suspicious that no requests were sent to Hannes, realizing they had no real desire to find him. Panicking, Rosalina worries she made a grave mistake by leaving Calyx behind and contemplates going back. Her master abruptly slams his book shut with a sharp slap, ordering her to stop her frantic worrying. He points out that Calyx is the absolute last person in the world she needs to worry about. Crossing his arms, her masked master declares that their work is officially finished for the day. He instructs her to cool her head, but she turns to look at him with a lingering question. Rosalina admits there is a certain question she has wanted to ask him for a very long time. Leaning in close, Rosalina gazes intently into her master's eyes, building a quiet, loaded silence between them. The tense and intimate silence lingers as she continues to stare closely at his masked face. Rosalina reminds him that she previously asked him to use her real name, but he flatly refused. She questions why he uses her full name instead of her nickname, wondering if he is being overly lenient with her. A soft sigh escapes her master's lips as he closes his eyes in mild exasperation. Turning his head away with a swift swish, her master dismisses her question as none of his concern. Rosalina sits in quiet shock at his cold rejection, her reflection showing her disappointment. Nervous, Rosalina hesitantly asks her master if she has somehow managed to upset him. A soft rustle of silk sounds as she carefully shifts her position inside the carriage. Sliding right up next to him, Rosalina gently settles herself by his side. Leaning her head close to his shoulder, she playfully calls out to her master with a bright smile. Rosalina reflects on how they have actually known each other for a very long time now. Clenching her hand into a tight fist, Rosalina admits she might have been a bit careless in the past. Sitting closely together on the carriage seat, Rosalina begins to recount the details of their shared history. She asks her master if he initially came to Memento Mori solely to rescue her. A brief memory flashes of the dark dungeon where they first found Calyx locked in a cage. Rosalina notes that his protective assistance continued even during their visit to the Blake mansion. A view of the grand Blake mansion reminds her of how he shielded her during her troubles. She recalls how her master always made sure to personally escort her safely back home in the carriage. Smiling warmly, Rosalina softly confesses that she has grown to genuinely like and deeply trust him. Her master downplays his protective aid as a simple gentlemanly duty and coincidence, closing his eyes. Blushing slightly beneath his mask, the master insists he did not assist her expecting any reward. Rosalina giggles softly behind her hand, thoroughly amused by her master's uncharacteristically flustered demeanor. Gazing out the carriage window, the master admits that he finds her modern self truly fascinating. He reflects on how a woman once notorious for being cold and cruel could change so much. The master notes she now seems like an entirely warm and different person, leaving her startled. He turns away to ask her an important question before their ride suddenly comes to an end. Rosalina gasps with a sudden start as she realizes they have arrived at their destination. Scurrying past her master, Rosalina excitedly announces that they have finally reached Brayton Mansion. She bids her master a cheerful farewell, explaining that her father must be worried about her. The carriage rolls out of the massive gates, leaving Rosalina alone at the grand estate. He steps down from the carriage, wondering if his next thoughts are overstepping his bounds. Holding her hand, the master asks Rosalina if she knows how many people misunderstand her true nature. He startles her by suggesting her husband is a prime example of someone who misunderstands her. He gently points out that she has not actually finalized her divorce with her husband yet. A sudden breeze sweeps past, fluttering the elegant hem of her dress. Catching her in his arms as she stumbles, he asks if she intends to give him another chance. Pushing back against his chest, Rosalina immediately demands that he stop talking about that man. She explains her husband's deep hatred for her and firmly vows to reject any attempt at reconciliation. Rosalina dismisses the subject and prepares to take her leave to handle important personal business. She beams with excitement as she reveals a brilliant new idea for her rose perfume business. Rosalina runs eagerly up the grand staircase to put her plans into action. Her master watches her leave with a warm, affectionate smile in his eyes. Bright morning sunlight bathes the beautiful balcony, shifting the scene to the next day. Antonia bursts excitedly through the door to report her return, catching her mistress's attention. Looking up from her desk, a delighted Rosalina warmly calls out to welcome Antonia back. The two grasp hands in shared excitement as Rosalina eagerly asks about the errand's outcome. Antonia gushes dramatically, expressing her incredible luck at meeting the legendary perfume master, Granua. She proudly recounts how her perfect perfume ingredient identification earned her an apprenticeship offer. Antonia credits her mistress, but Rosalina kindly insists that she earned this great opportunity herself. Antonia delivers a letter explaining that crafting rose perfume without roses is deemed highly impossible. Undeterred by the letters, Antonia proudly offers a custom rose fragrance she attempted to make herself. Antonia nervously declares that her mistress accepting the gift would be the greatest family honor. Antonia opens one eye slightly, anxiously awaiting her mistress's reaction to the perfume. Rosalina immediately tests the fragrance, spraying it onto her collarbone to see how it smells. Antonia gasps in absolute wonder as the gorgeous scent begins to fill the room. Mesmerizing rose petals bloom as the magical fragrance surrounds Rosalina's elegant hair buns. Satisfied with the incredible results, a smiling Rosalina calls out to Antonia in pure admiration. Rosalina stands in her gorgeous rose-patterned gown, completely captivated by the beautiful fragrance. Suddenly, the frantic butler bursts into the room bearing an urgent letter from the palace. The panicked butler waves the beautifully decorated royal letter in complete shock. Rosalina looks up in surprise, staring in disbelief at the unexpected arrival of royal correspondence. Accepting the envelope, Rosalina slowly turns it over to inspect the sender's official royal seal. She realizes with a serious expression that the sender of the invitation is the Empress herself. Rosalina realizes it is a tea party invitation, while the butler remains in absolute panic. Unbothered by royal prestige, she casually questions why she should treat a royal letter with special care. A sudden spark of inspiration hits Rosalina, giving her a brilliant idea for her next move. She quickly puts quill to paper, drafting her response with elegant and swift strokes. Handing over her written reply, Rosalina instructs Antonia to deliver it to their previous location. Under the glowing full moon, a mysterious guest arrives at the quiet gates of Brighton Mansion. Rosalina sits quietly by her window under the starry night sky, carefully drafting her letter. Sensing a sudden disturbance nearby, Rosalina stops her writing and looks up in surprise. A mysterious, dark-clothed figure scales the balcony railing of the grand estate under the night sky. Stepping onto the balcony, the dark-haired masked master quietly pulls down his heavy blue hood. Startled by the sudden intrusion, Rosalina loses her balance and stumbles backward in absolute shock. Clutching his collar, the masked master asks how she knew he would arrive tonight. Frantic, Rosalina points at the balcony and furiously declares that he has completely lost his mind. She demands to know what he is doing there at such an hour, pointing out that many watchful eyes are nearby. Holding up her written letter, the master explains he came exactly at 11 as requested to receive the important delivery. Facepalming in mild exasperation, Rosalina tells him to reread the letter because it clearly scheduled their meeting for tomorrow morning. Closing her eyes in irritation, she complains that he should have easily dispatched a messenger instead of coming himself. Opening her bright red eyes, Rosalina suddenly catches a strange scent and looks up in mild curiosity. Leaning her head close to his chest, Rosalina sniffs his collar to investigate the scent. Sniffing him, Rosalina directly asks her master if he has been drinking, noting that the scent of alcohol is incredibly strong. Turning his head away, the master reassures her not to worry, admitting he made a mistake that had nothing to do with alcohol. Stepping away with his back turned, the master claims that he is not a person who usually enjoys consuming alcohol. Holding a white cloth, the master admits he drank a little due to a sudden regretful memory, though Rosalina remains highly skeptical. Turning toward the window, the master asks if he can pose at least one question before he departs. Rosalina blinks in mild surprise, asking him what exactly he wants to know. Glancing back, the master asks her who she plans to partner with for the upcoming national founding ceremony. Closing her eyes, Rosalina happily replies that for the national founding ceremony, she has a very specific choice in mind. Winking playfully amidst blooming pink roses, Rosalina confidently prepares to reveal her brilliant new business strategy. Looking down thoughtfully, the master asks her if she is referring to her husband, the Duke of Failsden. Waving her hand in absolute dismissal, Rosalina scoffs and declares that her husband is not even considered as a candidate. Turning away in frustration, the master drops the subject and asks about the important business matter she previously mentioned. Gasping with sudden excitement, Rosalina stands amidst glowing pink sparkles as she remembers her main business plans. Looking up at him eagerly, Rosalina announces that she has conceived a brilliant new idea for her rose perfume business. Raising a finger, Rosalina notes that despite her great business plan, she still feels a vital piece is missing. Looking confused, the master crosses his arms and asks her what she means by a missing key piece. Rosalina explains her creative concept of transforming beautiful rose arrangements into elegant jewelry pieces that she will wear proudly. A pink silhouette illustrates her concept of wearing a delicate rose encased inside a ribbon glass ornament. She imagines herself wearing a magnificent white gown decorated with massive blooming pink roses at a grand social gathering. Touching his chin, the master notes that the person wearing it would link their personal value to the rose ornament, expressing both interest and worry. He warns that while the beautiful rose ornaments will undoubtedly sell out quickly, a different problem will emerge. He explains that commoners of any age will also purchase and wear the rose ornaments as long as they can afford them. He cautions that aristocratic society, which seeks to monopolize wealth and beauty, will scorn and look down on her for tarnishing her noble honor. Rosalina confidently shakes her head and dismisses his warnings with a playful snap of her fingers. Looking up at him, Rosalina softly calls out to her master to address his lingering doubts about her business strategy. Surrounded by falling gold coins, Rosalina flashes a bright smile and confidently makes a gesture indicating money. Winking, Rosalina asserts her pragmatic belief that absolutely everything in life eventually circles back to money. She explains that there is no reason to worry about others calling her vulgar or lacking dignity for her choices. Rosalina stands triumphantly amidst blooming pink roses as a shower of gold coins rains down around her. Smiling behind his mask, the master quietly chuckles at her bold claim of a world completely controlled by money. Reaching out to touch the fabric of her nightgown, the master softly agrees that her plan sounds highly entertaining. Leaning close, the master asks her what her own role will be in that money-driven world. The atmosphere grows deeply intimate as the master leans in close, locking eyes with a startled Rosalina. Whispering closely, the master asks if she will finally acknowledge the protective efforts he has made for her so far. A sudden knock on the closed door interrupts them as a voice calls out to Rose from the hallway. Her lavender-haired father peers inside the room, gently asking if she is still awake at such a late hour. Rosalina cheerily replies from her desk that she still has a great many tasks left to complete tonight. Her father expresses concern about her working late, prompting Rosalina to question his midnight garden stroll. Urging her to rest, her father bids goodnight as the cloaked figure silently slips away. The quiet Brighton mansion garden settles into the peaceful night, illuminated by soft moonlight. The next morning, the assistant carrying a heavy stack of books suddenly halts in surprise. Gasping in surprise, the glasses-wearing assistant looks up to see an unexpected presence. The shocked assistant addresses the dark-haired master, nearly slipping up on his actual name. The master notes the immense workload ahead after the founding ceremony, which his assistant reluctantly confirms. When the assistant curiously asks about his master's whereabouts last night, he is immediately told to get to work. The assistant mutters happily that his master's madness has calmed down, granting them both more freedom. The master reflects internally, realizing he had temporarily forgotten his own madness amidst recent chaotic events. He gazes at the handkerchief Rosalina gave him, attributing his calm state entirely to it. The master ponders the mysterious soothing effect of the handkerchief, questioning the true reason behind it. Staring into space, the master suddenly wonders if Rosalina could actually be his destined imprinter. The ancestral curse of madness has long plagued the Failsdon bloodline within their cold castle. The legend explains that only a fated person called an imprinter can soothe the Failsdon's destructive madness. Meeting their destined imprinter causes a Failsdon to fall instantly in love as a matter of fate. A grim prophecy declared that no imprinter would ever be born for the young heir, devastating his parents. Consumed by despair, the parents abandoned the dukedom, leaving the young boy in his Aunt Catalina's care. After departing the estate that day, the Duke and Duchess of Failsdon never returned home. Meanwhile, the radiant pink-haired Rosalina joyfully prepares for the grand social gathering ahead. The Duke contemplates the handkerchief, deeply puzzled by the miraculous calming effect it has on him. He shakes his head in denial, noting his madness only recently began to fade. Determined to find the truth, the Duke decides he must press his investigator further for answers. Rosalina beams with sisterly pride, complimenting her handsome brother, Leodore Brighton, in his elegant formal attire. Leodore fondly praises his sister's beauty, to which Rosalina playfully agrees that she always sparkles. Offering his hand, Leodore asks Rosalina if she is ready to depart for their highly important showdown. The massive doors swing open as Rosalina prepares for her ultimate business showdown. Whispers ripple through the crowd as the announcer heralds the entrance of the Duchess and Leodore. Arm in arm, Leodore proudly escorts Rosalina into the ballroom, her stunning rose-lined gown captivating everyone. Rosalina gasps in sudden alarm as something slips from her grasp and falls to the floor. Apologizing to her brother, Rosalina asks him to wait while she quickly retrieves her dropped item. On the polished floor lies a beautiful artificial red rose ornament with silver chains and leaves. Leodore gently stops Rosalina, insisting that he will be the one to pick up the fallen item. Leodore declares his absolute devotion to escorting his sister as he picks up her accessory. Refusing to let her bend down, Leodore carefully pins the artificial rose back onto her gown. Grateful and radiant, Rosalina beams happily as the beautiful rose ornament sits perfectly on her shoulder. Nearby noblewomen watch the display with stunned expressions, their eyes wide in absolute disbelief. Watching them, the irritated Duke scoffs internally at her choosing her own brother as her partner. Unbothered by the stares, Rosalina winks playfully, ready to execute her brilliant business masterpiece. The Duke narrows his red eyes in silent irritation, fixated on the identity of Rosalina's escort. He grumbles to himself about traveling all this way just to witness her brother escorting her. Glancing back at the happy siblings, the Duke bites his thumb in frustration and curses silently. The scene shifts to a serene garden stream where fish swim peacefully through clear, sparkling waters. At a sunny garden tea party, noble ladies eagerly discuss the picturesque scene they recently witnessed. The ladies gossip about the Duchess of Failsden, bringing up the famous rose curse she suffers from. One of the ladies leans in close, preparing to share the scandalous details she uncovered. A blonde noblewoman in a green dress interrupts their gossip, politely greeting the gathered group. The ladies gasp in horror, pointing out that the arriving countess is wearing a real rose. Smiling, the countess explains that her rose is actually an artificial creation presented by Rosalina. She happily explains how it perfectly mimics a real rose's scent without triggering any painful allergic reactions. The brown-haired woman explains how she was previously excluded from social gatherings but can now proudly attend. She expresses deep relief that she no longer has to worry about her younger siblings' marriages. The brown-haired woman tearfully wonders how she can possibly repay Lady Rosalina for this wonderful blessing. Gazing at the beautiful red accessory, she declares Lady Rosalina to be her family's absolute savior. Gathered at a tea party, the noblewomen eagerly ask where to purchase the miraculous artificial rose. A sudden heavy thud echoes as a guard grumbles while walking down the prison stairs. The gray-haired guard calls out loudly to announce the arrival of the prisoner's food. Discovering the empty cell and broken shackles, the guards frantically sound the alarm regarding Eliza's escape. The scene shifts to the elegant wine salon, showcasing row after row of finely aged wine bottles. The smiling gray-haired elder proudly presents a shiny red rose accessory to his social companions. His amazed companions marvel at the rare rose replica, which the father proudly explains is a gift. The proud father boasts that his daughter is clever and possesses an incredible mind for business. As he continues bragging about her successful investments, his companions realize he is merely showing off. The father beams with joy as his companions express deep envy over Lady Rosalina's devotion. The guard suddenly interrupts the gathering to whisper an urgent message from the estate to him. The father reacts in utter shock and fury upon learning that Eliza Moliette has escaped prison. A loud clatter sounds as a green carriage quickly travels down a paved path and stops. Footsteps echo softly as the father and his subordinate descend deep into the dark stone corridors. A sharp click sounds as the heavy lock is turned, opening the prison door. The heavy iron gate creaks open to reveal a completely empty cell, leaving only silence. Standing before the open gate, the father demands to know when the cell became empty. The guard reports that the prisoner was already gone by breakfast and interrogations are underway. The father instructs the guard to report the interrogation results directly to him, bypassing others. He strictly orders the guards to keep the escape a secret from Rose for now. Inside the Grand Mansion, pink-haired Rose happily completes her notes with a white quill. Rose suggests taking a short break, prompting Calyx to collapse exhausted onto his study desk. Calyx groans in absolute despair, complaining about how difficult and tedious studying is. Rose smiles warmly and encouragingly, urging the young Lord Blake to cheer up. Rose recalls how eager Duke Blake originally was to invite her to parties when they met. She reflects on how drastically his attitude shifted once she submitted an official visitation request. She recounts arriving at his estate in perfect form, strictly adhering to all formal protocols. She notes that the elder Duke quickly made excuses to avoid her and has disappeared since. Rose gazes off thoughtfully, deeply puzzled by the strange and evasive behavior of the elusive Duke. A sudden sharp slap sounds as someone abruptly slams their hands down onto the open book. Hurried footsteps echo through the room as someone loudly calls out Rose's name. Calyx eagerly suggests they go hang out since they are on a break, surprising Rose. Calyx enthusiastically mentions a nearby small lake where they can go to play and relax. Their excitement is suddenly cut short as a thick book is slammed down between them. The masked master firmly schools young Lord Blake for wanting to play instead of studying hard. Rose turns to her master in confusion, questioning what prompted his sudden strict behavior. The master crosses his arms and firmly warns her that she cannot afford to sit idle. He solemnly reveals that a major emergency has just reached all the way to Heaviness. Rose asks in bewilderment why such an emergency has suddenly arisen. A trembling maid bursts into the room with a newly circulated newspaper, calling out in panic. Shaking with fear, the maid hands over the paper and urges Rose to look at it. Rose is horrified to read a shocking headline claiming her safe roses are actually a scam. Rose's expression darkens with suspicion as she mutters the name Daisy under her breath. She dreads the thought that the original heroine of the story might be involved in this. The Countess of Roman despairs over the shocking events unfolding at her grand estate. She trembles violently in absolute denial, refusing to believe the devastating news. Slamming her hands down, Maria angrily declares the Rose scandal a conspiracy and vows to defend their safety. Determined to act, Maria quickly throws a gray cloak over her shoulders. Maria resolves to personally clear up the dangerous misunderstandings since she has used the ornament safely. Arriving outside, Maria is shocked to find an angry mob demanding Rosalina face judgment. The furious crowd gathers before the grand estate gates, loudly demanding justice for the victims. Maria tries to clarify the misunderstanding, but the aggressive mob commands her to shut up and shoves her down. Her descent is interrupted as a sudden sharp gasp leaves her lips when a cloaked figure catches her. The cloaked savior kindly asks if Maria is unharmed, prompting a breathless expression of gratitude. Staring closely, Maria is stunned as she recognizes her savior's distinctive pink hair and red eyes. Winking under her hood, Rosalina presses a finger to her lips to silently gesture for quiet. While the mob shouts that the villainess is fleeing, Rosalina quickly guides Maria away. The angry crowd frantically chases after their target, shouting commands to prevent her escape. Safely away from the chaotic scene, Rosalina warmly asks Maria if she was injured. Still resting on the ground, Maria politely asks for the name of her kind rescuer. Grasping Rosalina's hand, Maria introduces herself and invites her savior to call her Maria. Maria apologetically asks if she can request a favor despite this being their very first meeting. Rosalina's face lights up with bright, cheerful excitement at Maria's unexpected request. Rosalina cheekily asks if she can request a favor from Maria in return. Rosalina opens the estate gate and invites Maria inside, while Maria wonders how she can help. Clasping Maria's hand tightly, Rosalina prepares to explain her plan. A slightly startled Maria quickly follows as Rosalina happily pulls her along. Inside the mansion, the frantic father and Aunt Catalina run down the stairs calling out for Rosalina. Fast-paced footsteps echo down the corridor as they search for Rosalina in deep worry. Rosalina turns in surprise as her worried family members finally catch up to her. Her father anxiously checks Rosalina for any injuries, relieved to hear she is fine. Aunt Catalina and Leodore are furious, with Catalina condemning the mob's witch hunt and Leodore promising protection. Watching the dramatic family display, Chibi Maria stands aside in utter shock. Calming them down, Rosalina accepts that she can no longer avoid the trial. Rosalina reveals a formal trial summons has been issued against her, shocking her protective family. Catalina insists Rosalina shouldn't attend, while Leodore furiously declares any attack on his sister represents a declaration of war. Declining their aggressive response, Rosalina firmly asserts her intention to attend the trial no matter what. Rosalina confidently explains to Catalina that she was clearly framed and must face it. With a clever smirk, Rosalina plans to wait for the trial to draw out the hidden mastermind. Flaring with spirit, Rosalina proudly vows to punish whoever dared try to ruin her business. The father looks on with deep pride, seeing his own youthful, fiery ambition in Rosalina. Rosalina turns to Maria, asking if her previous offer of help is still valid. Rosalina leads Maria to the drawing room as her father continues to yell advice about safety. The father tries to list a second point, but Catalina sighs and stops him. The father and Catalina stand in chibi shock, realizing Rose has already walked away. Maria looks around the stunning, luxurious drawing room in complete amazement at its grandeur. Rosalina politely invites Maria to make herself comfortable as she prepares some refreshments. Rosalina humbly apologizes for the rushed hospitality, offering warm tea to soothe her guest. Maria insists it is her fault for showing up suddenly, touched by Rosalina's incredible humility. Maria asks about a magnificent vase, which Rosalina casually reveals was a recent gift from Duke Blake. Maria is utterly awestruck to learn of Rosalina's high-profile connections to the prestigious Blake family. Sliding a paper forward, Rosalina reminds Maria of her promise of unconditional help. Confused, Maria slowly agrees while wondering why Rosalina is presenting a note. Rosalina writes a message instructing Maria to ask no questions and simply say she understands. Apologizing to Maria, Rosalina slides the note across, asking her to commit perjury at the trial. Rosalina winks playfully, explaining that Maria's false testimony would be a great help to her plan. Realizing she must lie, Maria nervously but fiercely promises to do anything to help her savior. Flustered Maria frantically clarifies that her quick agreement stems from deep gratitude toward her benefactor. Rosalina merely smirks in response, holding her purple gem brooch as she speaks softly. Rosalina gently tells the flustered countess to calm down, leaving Maria hiding her deeply embarrassed face. A beautiful white vase adorned with intricate gold patterns sits prominently in the quiet drawing room. A dark, magical aura looms as a cloaked investigator silently writes down details of his findings. One investigator promises to carry out the task as they discuss the recorded evidence in secret. Glowing magic seals a recording device as footsteps echo down a dark corridor. The investigator reports to the Elder Duke that they caught Maria agreeing to commit perjury. The Elder Duke notes with a mocking smirk that his target is acting quite cleverly. The scene transitions to the majestic, sunlit spires of the Grand Imperial Palace. An Imperial guard politely asks the visitor to state the official purpose of their arrival. The visitor presents a sealed letter explaining she was invited by the Empress herself. Inside a luxurious chamber, the brown-haired Empress stands gracefully looking out the grand window. The Empress smiles subtly, her soft features reflecting a calm yet mysterious demeanor. Curtsying elegantly in her green gown, Rosalina formally introduces herself to the Empress. The Empress warmly expresses how eager she has been to finally meet the young lady. The Empress gestures toward a tower of exquisite desserts prepared specially by the Imperial chef. The two women sit at the elegant tea table, sharing lighthearted conversation and laughter. Rosalina nervously addresses the Empress, seeking to steer their conversation to a serious matter. Rosalina directly asks the Empress why she requested this private meeting. The Empress smiles, teasingly noting how impatient and rushed young people tend to be. The Empress calmly advises Rosalina not to rush matters as their tea is served. While Agnes offers a special tea, Rosalina instantly recognizes its deeply suspicious scent and color. Staring at the vibrant red liquid, Rosalina inwardly wonders if it is Akarosha poison. Examining the murky brown hue, Rosalina grows increasingly suspicious of the tea's true nature. Rosalina mentally confirms the identity of the lethal Akarosha poison sitting right before her. Rosalina pauses in hesitation, wondering if her deduction about the poison tea is correct. The Empress coldly urges Rosalina to drink, making her wonder why she is being tested. Reasoning that the Empress wouldn't dare openly attack her family, Rosalina decides to drink. She mentally notes that pretending to be a fool is a useful tactic for now. Rosalina lifts the cup and boldly drinks the potentially poisoned tea without showing any hesitation. The smiling Empress, clasping her hands, asks Rosalina if the tea is to her liking. Suddenly, Rosalina coughs up a violent spray of blood, sending the Empress into absolute shock. Clasping her chest, Rosalina collapses heavily onto the floor beside the spilled tea table. Trembling in sheer terror, the Empress realizes with horror that the tea was indeed poisoned. Panicking, the Empress screams for her servants to bring the imperial physician immediately. Rosalina lies completely motionless on the tiled floor as the chaotic room descends into silence. The terrified Empress stands frozen, anxiously looking down at the unresponsive Duchess. Sensing they are alone, Rosalina's hand suddenly twitches as she asks if everyone is left. The Empress gasps in absolute shock as Rosalina calmly sits up, entirely unharmed. With a devious smirk, Rosalina declares that the stage is set for their real conversation. Wiping blood from her lips, Rosalina demands to know what the Empress truly wants. Desperate and apologetic, the Empress admits she was testing Rosalina because of Calyx. Sobbing, the Empress falls to her knees, confessing she is merely a powerless figurehead. The Empress begs Rosalina for help, frantically explaining that young Lord Calyx is in grave danger. Tears streaming down her face, the Empress desperately cries out that Calyx's life is threatened. Chibi Rosalina ponders the claim, recalling that Calyx is currently safe under Blake Manor's protection. The weeping Empress counters that being at Blake Manor makes him even more vulnerable. Rosalina's red eyes narrow with intense focus as she demands to know why Calyx is in danger. The Empress sits in heavy silence, her back turned as she prepares to reveal the truth. Shocked by the implication, Rosalina asks if Calyx is indeed the Empress's biological child. The Empress looks deeply shaken and sorrowful as the secret is finally brought to light. With tears streaming down her face, the Empress confirms that Calyx is indeed her biological son. She laments that her only prince is in danger, transitioning to a memory of her brother. The gray-haired Duke demands to know what happened to the exclusive trading rights with Brent's. The Empress calmly explains that she rejected the trading rights because the Blake family is wealthy. She advises her greedy brother to show restraint to allow the country to prosper in balance. Her brother mockingly questions her naive desire to govern the country well and live happily. The furious Duke aggressively grabs her hair, calling her an imbecile for forgetting her family duties. When she desperately calls for help, her brother mockingly reminds her that the servants serve him. The Empress watches in despair as her servants ignore her pleas and remain completely submissive. The Duke declares he will no longer grant her freedom and threatens her with interesting news. The Empress weeps, realizing her brother lied about Calyx's safety while keeping him locked in a dungeon. With nowhere else to turn, she fears the worst for Calyx if things continue like this. Comforting the weeping Empress, Rosalina warmly promises to grant her desperate favor and help Calyx. Rosalina demands absolute trust regardless of what happens, and the Empress eagerly agrees to trust her. A loud knock announces the arrival of the Imperial physician just outside the chamber doors. Rosalina turns back with a sharp, determined look, signaling the Empress to prepare their next move. Rosalina acts out a dramatic rage, loudly slamming the Imperial way as completely intolerable. Storming off, Rosalina dramatically declares that Brighton will never forget this severe insult. Rosalina stomps out in theatrical fury, leaving the Imperial staff sweating in absolute shock. The maids console the Empress, expressing outrage at Rosalina's shockingly rude behavior. The Empress sheds tears of immense relief, softly whispering that she is more than fine now. Recalling the past, she explains how she suspected Duke Blake shortly after receiving his vase. The scene shifts back to the majestic mansion where her suspicions first began to unfold. Investigation revealed the vase was enchanted with advanced eavesdropping magic that is extremely difficult to remove. Her masked companion curiously asks if they should simply dispose of the bugged magical vase. Rosalina declines, smugly deciding to keep the vase for her own clever purposes instead. With a devious smirk, Rosalina happily announces that she has just conceived a brilliant idea. On the day of the trial, a large, restless crowd gathers outside the grand courthouse. The angry mob loudly protests, demanding justice and refusing to tolerate any noble special treatment. Inside, the scheming Duke listens with dark satisfaction as the mob outside chants for her guilt. The sinister Duke suppresses a dark chuckle, confident that his trap is working perfectly. He throws his head back in maniacal, echoing laughter, fully enjoying his apparent triumph. The scene transitions to the magnificent empty courtroom just before the official proceedings begin. The Duke grows furious upon realizing the corrupt officials he heavily bribed have failed to appear. Onlookers whisper that Rosalina must be boldly relying on the Brighton family's massive political influence. Despite the missing officials, the grinning Duke notes public opinion is already set to ruin her. A sudden authoritative step silences the noisy crowd as the official trial finally begins. The herald commands everyone to kneel and pay respects as a royal figure steps forward. The Duke gasps in utter shock while Rosalina maintains a calm, knowing smile at the entrance. The Emperor declares he will personally preside over the trial to ensure absolute caution and fairness. Clenching his fist, the Duke listens as the Emperor promises to deliver a fair verdict. The Emperor formally addresses Rosalina, accusing her of spreading rumors about curse-free roses. He adds that she is suspected of profiting enormously from the sales of these cursed flowers. Looking down from the high stand, the Emperor directly demands if Rosalina admits to her guilt. Rosalina firmly denies guilt, explaining that her roses are artificial and cannot manifest the curse. To prove her claim, Rosalina introduces Countess Roman as her witness who suffered from the curse. The witness testifies that since using artificial roses, her curse is not manifested even once. Countess Roman's testimony is abruptly interrupted by a sharp bang as Duke Blake furiously accuses her of lying. Presenting the glowing purple recording stone to the Emperor, Duke Blake begs him not to be fooled. Duke Blake expresses his profound disappointment in Rosalina despite her role as his son's savior. From his high throne, the Emperor listens impassively as Duke Blake pleads for a fair verdict. The Emperor's blue eyes narrow as he commands the court to activate the recording stone. The recording begins broadcasting a voice politely requesting Countess Bronzina to commit perjury during the trial. The courtroom erupts in quiet murmurs as the recording confirms the witness's eager agreement to lie. A triumphant grin spreads across Duke Blake's face as he gloats that the witness promised perjury. Pink-haired Rosalina raises her hand to her mouth, calmly addressing the Duke with feigned apology. Standing alongside her brown-haired witness, Rosalina points out that the woman present is actually Countess Roman. Stunned by the unexpected correction, the gray-haired Duke stutters in sheer disbelief and panic. From the bench, the Emperor confirms that the entire Count's family is present in the courtroom. Rosalina smugly challenges the Duke to present other evidence, leaving him to silently curse her in rage. Wildly gesturing, the panicking Duke insists it's a misunderstanding and begs to postpone the trial. A sudden firm voice from the courtroom entrance declares that no postponement is necessary. Stunned silence falls as the Empress and blonde Calyx enter the courtroom hand in hand. The Emperor leaps from his seat in absolute shock, slamming his hands onto the desk. Staring directly into Calyx's brilliant blue eyes, the Emperor is frozen in utter disbelief. Curtsying deeply, the Empress declares her determination to reveal the truth and correct past wrongdoings. The Empress reveals the shocking secret that Duke Blake swapped his own son with the Crown Prince. Shaking with rage, Duke Blake furiously rejects the claim, shouting that it is a false accusation. Sweating profusely, the Duke argues that eye color can easily be fabricated using illegal alchemy. Rosalina mockingly notes the Duke's extensive knowledge of illegal alchemy, prompting him to curse her. The Emperor commands silence, stating they will verify the children's parentage under identical conditions. The Emperor prepares to determine once and for all if the true prince is Felix or Calyx. The Emperor offers Duke Blake a final chance, promising to spare his household if he confesses. A flashback reveals Duke Blake's long-standing bitterness over serving an emperor he deemed far less qualified. Driven by greed, Duke Blake plotted to swap the children and replace the royal line with his own. The Duke's desperate ambition to claim absolute power echoes through his dark memories. Back in the courtroom, the broken Duke grinds his teeth as he prepares to speak. Yielding to the Emperor's pressure, Duke Blake finally confesses his crime, admitting Felix is his son. Rosalina breathes a heavy sigh of relief, silently wondering if the long battle is finally over. A glowing blue system notification appears, congratulating her for successfully exposing Calyx's hidden truth. Rosalina's red eye widens in pure astonishment upon reading the system's strange designation. Turning around in surprise, Rosalina hears her name called as the courtroom proceedings conclude. A hand reaches out and gently grabs Rosalina's arm, catching her off guard. Calyx pulls a startled Rosalina close as a flurry of rose petals swirls around them. Rosalina playfully chides Calyx for startling her, while the Emperor coughs awkwardly to interrupt them. The Emperor expresses his profound gratitude to Rosalina, declaring he is forever in her debt. The Emperor warmly promises to grant her any wish, swearing upon his royal honor. With absolute confidence, Rosalina prepares to state her shameless desire to the Emperor. A sealed white envelope rests quietly in the darkness, carrying a vital request. The documents are revealed to be a formal divorce petition addressed to Argentian. The letter details the attached bank check, firmly reiterating that her feelings remain unchanged. A hand drops the written plea for divorce directly into the roaring flames. The dark-haired Duke watches impassively as her signed letter is consumed by the fire. Meanwhile, a grand and bustling banquet begins, filled with elegant nobles socializing. Soldiers drag the screaming Duke Blake away to confinement as shocking news of his crime spreads. The desperate cries of the fallen Duke echo uselessly as his ruin is finalized. Standing gracefully in her white gown, Rosalina reflects on the surprising, ambiguous end of the trial. Rosalina wonders what kind of changes her new title as Hero of the Empire will bring. Overhearing the socialites, Rosalina listens to them wonder how a notorious villainess saved the Crown Prince. The socialites gossip about how the former Mad Dog of Brighton is now praised as the hero. An announcement heralds the arrival of their Imperial Majesties and the Crown Prince. The assembled nobles bow respectfully as the Emperor makes his way through the Grand Hall. The Emperor ascends the steps and sits down on his golden throne. The Emperor sentences the traitor Duke Blake to death, prompting quiet agreement among the whispering crowd. The Emperor reduces Felix's sentence to being stripped of royal status, shocking Rosalina. A thoughtful prompt questions whether Felix is truly innocent of his family's crimes. Suspecting Felix knew about his eye color changes, Rosalina resolves to keep a close eye on him. The Emperor proudly gestures toward Calix, declaring him as his true and undeniable son. The Emperor officially recognizes Calix as the newly restored Crown Prince of the Empire. Calix confidently addresses the crowd, formally introducing himself to the imperial court. The elegant guests burst into applause as Rosalina watches the celebratory moment with a smile. Smiling brightly, Rosalina warmly tells Calix that he looks absolutely amazing. The Emperor officially bestows the title of Hero of the Empire upon a startled Rosalina. The guests enthusiastically praise Rosalina, expressing their profound admiration for her immense courage. Summoned forward, Rosalina complies while wondering if her hero title is manifesting this way. The Emperor bestows the rank of Grand Duchess along with substantial wealth upon Rosalina. Stunned by the immense reward, Rosalina expresses her deep gratitude to the Emperor. Rosalina grins greedily, thrilled that she no longer needs to buy a noble title. An anonymous guest questions the Emperor bestowing such an illustrious rank on a woman. The party guests murmur about the unprecedented nature of the Emperor's extremely generous reward. A sharp, tense glare is exchanged between two competitive figures in the crowd. A formal thought praises the remarkable achievements of Duchess Failsden. The noblewomen eagerly invite the newly titled Grand Duchess Brighton to visit their social club. Rosalina gets annoyed at the socialites' hypocrisy, remembering how they insulted her during the trial. Aghast gasps in excitement upon spotting the Crown Prince approaching the gathering. Rosalina turns around in surprise as Calix suddenly stands right behind her with a smile. Surprised, Rosalina asks Calix what brings him to her side of the hall. Calix gently takes Rosalina's hand, announcing that he brought a special gift for her. The onlookers remark on the close relationship between the Crown Prince and the Grand Duchess. Rosalina happily welcomes the gossip, equating public attention to money and business success. Rosalina playfully asks what the gift is, while Calix keeps it a mysterious secret. Calix offers Rosalina a red rose and politely requests the honor of a dance. Holding the rose close, Rosalina joyfully accepts his invitation to dance. As they prepare to dance, the surrounding crowd gushes over the highly romantic scene. Rosalina silently smirks, knowing their romantic dance is a calculated promotion for her artificial roses. A nearby skeptic scoffs at the rose, calling it a cheap, fake display. Rosalina turns her gaze toward Count Moljacrack, irritated by his attempt to ruin her success. A sharp exclamation demands that the critical Count refrain from speaking such negative things. Stepping forward, Countess Ramon loudly defends the artificial rose as a truly great invention. Rosalina calls out in surprise as Countess Roman bows politely before her. Countess Roman challenges Count Moljacrack, asking if he would still complain if it cured the curse. Count Moljacrack mockingly dismisses Countess Roman's defense as emotional nonsense, leaving her completely shocked. Enraged by his sexist remark, Rosalina steps in to demand if he can take responsibility. Argentian suddenly appears behind the Count, warning him for insulting his wife. Count Moljacrack panics upon realizing the powerful archmage is present to protect his wife. Stuttering, Count Moljacrack tries to backtrack while Argentinio cold-facedly questions his insults. Argentian stares in silent, cold disapproval, completely intimidating the terrified Count. The purple-haired archmage coldly turns away, addressing the Emperor to bypass the rude Count. Walking past the stunned Count, the archmage delivers urgent news to the welcoming Emperor. Holding her chin thoughtfully, Rosalina wonders why the powerful archmage has suddenly arrived. The Emperor eagerly requests to hear the urgent message the archmage has brought. The archmage prepares to reveal the true purpose of his sudden, unexpected visit. The Archmage shocks the hall by announcing a clue to cure the rose's curse. Startled by the incredible news, the Emperor rises from his throne in utter disbelief. The Archmage reveals that the cure's aura was detected within Rosalina's artificial roses. Rosalina stands stunned as the whispering crowd begins praising her incredible artificial roses. Thrilled by her success, Rosalina inwardly compares her artificial roses to a legendary master ball. The Emperor immediately commands that research on the artificial roses must be continued. The Archmage explains his efforts to secure a supply through the Hennis Merchant Guild. Rosalina rejoices at her master's business support before spotting Argentian standing silently behind him. Rosalina grumbles in frustration, wondering why her husband has not yet finalized their divorce. Seeing Argentian's pleading look, a shocked Rosalina wonders if he actually opposes their divorce. Rosalina finds it ironic that the man who initially wanted a divorce now looks so pitifully attractive. Slapping her cheeks to regain focus, Rosalina overhears the socialites gossiping about her new title. Rosalina smiles triumphantly, happily basking in the crowd's sudden attention and praise. Rosalina gladly agrees to cooperate, envisioning the massive fortune her roses will soon bring. Rosalina ruthlessly declares that the rude Count Moljacrack's household will receive absolutely none of her roses. The Emperor immediately nods in agreement, granting Rosalina complete authority over her business. Desperate, Count Moljacrack calls out to Rosalina in a panic as she turns away. The Count begs for mercy, revealing his son is in critical condition from the curse. With a cold gaze, Rosalina listens to the Count desperately argue that his son is innocent. Rosalina bluntly rejects the claim of innocence, leaving the Count frozen in sheer confusion. Rosalina exposes the Count's son's reckless and cruel misdeeds, refusing to aid a villain. Shaking with fear, the Count stutters, completely stunned that she knows his son's dark secret. Swept away in rage, the Count vows vengeance for the humiliation he has suffered. As the Count retreats, Rosalina internally addresses his confusion regarding her secret knowledge. Rosalina silently smiles, knowing her secret source was her invaluable system notification window. Calix gently pulls Rosalina close, asking if she is all right after the tense confrontation. Brushing off the incident, Rosalina playfully invites the blonde crown prince to dance. Staring tenderly at her, Calix confesses that he has been eagerly waiting for this moment. Calix blushes deeply, unable to hide his sheer happiness at her sweet invitation. Calix takes her hand to dance, prompting Rosalina to find his elegant efforts incredibly endearing. Smiling brightly, the two step onto the dance floor to begin their elegant dance. A gorgeous display of white blossoms frames the celebration as the banquet continues. Watching from afar, the guests eagerly admire how perfectly matched the dancing couple looks. Observing their dance, the Emperor warmly wishes that Rosalina would officially join the imperial family. Back in her study, Rosalina plans her highly lucrative business venture with the Magic Tower. Rosalina greedily plots to amass billions before her divorce, startling her masked business partner. The masked master dryly notes that her coin jingling was loud enough to hear outside. The masked master offers his congratulations, which Rosalina warmly shares with him as business partners. Quickly shifting focus back to work, Rosalina eagerly prepares to review overnight business orders. Rosalina decides to prioritize trading with customers suffering from the most severe curse symptoms. The masked master suggests sending the rest to the Magic Tower, earning her enthusiastic praise. Leaning forward with excitement, Rosalina proposes a brand new business venture to her partner. Rosalina gets nervous when the masked master hesitates instead of immediately accepting her offer. The masked master readily agrees, eagerly asking Rosalina what her next project will be. Looking ahead to autumn, Rosalina slyly hints at a major seasonal event just around the corner. Rosalina displays a single metallic rose gold flower she successfully summoned after working all night. Rosalina asks if the rose gold is processed gold, and the masked master explains it as the tournament prize. The masked master deduces her plan to imbue the tournament's value into the rose gold, which she eagerly confirms. Rosalina explains her limited supply and asks her business partner to figure out the metallic ratio himself. The masked master agrees to try, prompting Rosalina to clap happily and praise his impressive capabilities. Rosalina asks if he will participate in the competition, and the masked master asks who she thinks will win. Rosalina guesses the crown prince will win, causing the masked master to react in utter shock. Rosalina casually explains her choice by mentioning Prince Calix's terrifying brute strength. Clenching his fist in silent frustration, the masked master trembles with unexpressed anger. The masked master grumbles about the beastly prince before quickly dismissing Rosalina's confused inquiry. Rosalina warmly thanks him, expressing her complete trust in his business partnership. Rosalina leans in to share a confidential story framed as being about a friend. The masked master invites her to speak comfortably and share whatever is on her mind. Rosalina explains that her friend sent a letter to a certain man but received no reply. A quick glance from the masked master reveals his sudden curiosity about the letter. Rosalina wonders why the man is ignoring the letter, prompting him to ask about its contents. Rosalina explains her friend sent the letter to notify the man that she prepared a specific item. The masked master clenches his hand tightly upon hearing the purpose of the letter. The masked master asks if the item is money, shocking Rosalina with his accurate guess. The masked master calls the man trash, while Rosalina assumes he already knows the story is about her and Argentian. Rosalina confesses the story is about herself, and the masked master strongly advises her against meeting such a man. Rosalina tearfully argues she must meet him to secure her massive 40 billion won alimony. The masked master furiously curses the blonde prince, believing him to be an extortionist. Believing Calix is exploiting Rosalina, the masked master fumes over why she remains so hung up on him. Angered, the masked master resolves to enter the tournament and crush Calix. An official announcement reveals that the powerful Duke of Failsdon has entered the hunting tournament. Relaxation turns to surprise as Rosalina sits on her sofa and reads the tournament roster. Rosalina is furious that Argentine ignored all her letters yet found time to enter the tournament. Standing up in a rage, Rosalina panics that Argentian is planning to avoid paying her alimony. Pacing around her study, Rosalina considers that the Duke is guaranteed to win the tournament's prize. Rosalina worries that his victory will make securing their divorce far more complicated. Rosalina defiantly vows that she will not stand by and let him get away with it. The scene shifts to the bustling imperial hunting grounds filled with white tents and chattering guests. The clearing in the forest buzzes with anticipation as participants prepare for the big event. A carriage approaches the hunting grounds, drawing the attention of the waiting staff. The coachman calls out to the horses as the carriage halts at its destination. Emerging from the carriage, Rosalina confidently declares that all her preparations are complete. Rosalina reminds herself to stay sharp and remain highly focused for the challenges ahead. Rosalina notes that a major plot point from the original novel is set to happen today. She recalls that Calix is destined to fight off a monster horde while Daisy awakens as a saintess. During the chaos, Daisy's holy powers are meant to awaken, cementing her status as a saintess. The coachman formally announces their arrival at the Imperial hunting grounds. Rosalina thanks the coachman as she steps down from the elegant carriage. Rosalina looks around the grounds but notes that Argentine is nowhere to be seen. Rosalina gets irritated, resolving to track him down and demand an explanation for his silence. Prince Calix suddenly approaches from behind and warmly welcomes her to the grounds. Rosalina beams with excitement upon formally greeting the handsome crown prince. Rosalina inwardly admires how exceptionally handsome the prince looks in his hunting attire. Calix poses gracefully in his hunting gear, prompting Rosalina to quickly snap out of her daydream. When Rosalina asks what brings him over, Calix gently requests that she speak casually with him. Laughing nervously, Rosalina addresses Calix as Your Highness, but he insists that only those with a special relationship can speak that way. Calix questions why they can't speak so closely since they share a special relationship, declaring that she is his master before a panicked Rosalina covers his mouth. Rosalina angrily demands Calix watch his mouth in public, and the muffled prince compliance, addressing her as Rose. Rosalina wonders if this behavior is a side effect of taming, desperately questioning why he keeps calling her master. Calix leans in and eagerly asks his master when she will return to the palace, startling her. Rosalina gasps in shock as she overhears the nearby nobles whispering in confusion about the prince calling her master. Rosalina internally rages at the foolish prince for ignoring her warning, while outwardly laughing off his confusing statement. The nobles gossip about the hierarchy, noting that the crown prince is not yet the master of the palace, while the emperor and empress still rule. Calix remains silent, turning away with a solemn expression as the whispers continue. The noble couple silently watches the interaction, desperately praying that their subtle meddling will actually work. The emperor laughs that the couple is already discussing their future, leaving a sweating Rosalina relieved that they are safe. Rosalina exasperatedly asks Calix why he keeps using that title, and he tenderly replies that it is because she is his master. Rosalina begs him not to say such things in public, but Calix innocently wonders why when he's just stating a fact. Rosalina delivers a harsh ultimatum, threatening to completely hide her face from him for a week if he repeats the title. Calix cries out in pure desperation, calling her cruel for making such a terrible threat. Clinging to her tightly, Calix desperately wraps his arms around her to beg for forgiveness. Rosalina promises to visit him more often if he behaves, prompting Calix to happily pledge to do anything she says. A loud trumpet blast suddenly cuts through the air, interrupting their embrace and causing Rosalina to gasp in surprise. Rosalina tells Calix that the tournament is starting and urges him to hurry, and he cheerfully agrees. Calix dashes off into the forest, brightly shouting back his promise to secure a grand victory for her. Waving him off, Rosalina fondly muses to herself that the prince's eager behavior makes him seem just like a child. Rosalina's playful smile quickly fades as she stands alone, her expression turning quiet and determined. Rosalina's eyes widen in sudden surprise as she notices a quiet rustling behind the nearby trees. Behind the dense green foliage, the dark-haired Duke Argentian stands silently staring at her with his intense red eyes. Rosalina stands frozen amidst a beautiful framing of white roses, caught completely off guard by her husband's presence. Staring at her, Argentine questions his own sanity as his gaze remains helplessly locked onto his wife. Argentine admits to himself that the very pink hair he once disliked now looks extraordinarily lovely to his eyes. Observing her from afar, he realizes he has never seen her smile so warmly and brightly during their marriage. A wave of bitter jealousy hits Argentine as he wonders if her beautiful transformation is due to the crown prince. Rosalina begins walking purposefully toward him, calling out her husband's name as she approaches. Rosalina boldly steps right up to him, cornering the startled Duke in his hiding spot. Rosalina firmly demands a conversation, leaving the usually stoic Duke Argentine looking visibly nervous and cornered. Instead of answering, Argentine suddenly leaps onto his horse and gallops away, completely fleeing the confrontation. Rosalina calls out in utter disbelief, shouting for him to wait as he speeds away. Rosalina screams after him in frustration, demanding to know where he is going as his horse vanishes into the woods. Standing in dumbfounded silence, Rosalina angrily questions why her husband would run away from her.
Rosalina grits her teeth in sheer irritation, refusing to let him avoid their important divorce discussion.
Grabbing her sleeve, Rosalina furiously declares that playing nice has failed and she will take matters into her own hands. Rosalina commands a nearby groom, boldly taking his horse while the shocked servant stutters her name. Rosalina swiftly mounts the horse, completely ignoring the frantic warnings of the panicking groom. Galloping away, Rosalina speeds into the dense forest, leaving the shouting groom far behind. Deep within the lush green forest, the sound of horse hooves echoes as the chase intensifies. Rosalina slows her speed, looking around anxiously as she wonders if she has ridden too deep into the woods. Searching the dense trees, she is frustrated to find absolutely no sign of Argentine anywhere in the area. Suddenly, a sharp rustling noise nearby breaks the silence, making Rosalina freeze in apprehension. Sweating, Rosalina frantically wonders what the noise was, dreading that she has encountered a dangerous forest monster. A massive horned monster with drooling green jaws suddenly lunges out from the thick foliage, blocking her path. Rosalina reassures herself to stay quiet, trusting her scent-masking potion to shield her presence from the approaching beast. Her hopes are instantly shattered as her terrified horse panics and rears back, neighing wildly in pure terror. Lurching backward, Rosalina screams in panic as she is violently thrown off her horse into the wilderness. Irritated by her fall, Rosalina gets to her feet and grumbles about failing to account for the horse. A sudden drop of slime alerts Rosalina to the terrifying presence of a nearby monster. The giant red-eyed beast lunges at her from the forest with a terrifying roar of "Krah!" Green blood splatters across the scene as an unseen attack strikes the menacing creature. Rosalina stares in shock as the defeated monster slumps forward right before her eyes. The massive creature collapses completely, hitting the forest floor with a heavy thud. A firm boot steps onto the dirt, signaling the arrival of her mysterious savior. Argentine suddenly appears and frantically yells at his wife to get back from the danger. He shields her protectively, warning her that the monster's splattering blood is highly poisonous. Clinging to her, Argentine catches his breath while holding her tightly in his arms. Realizing she has cornered him, Rosalina triumphantly declares that she has caught her sneaky husband. Rosalina grins victoriously, holding on to Argentine so he can no longer escape their confrontation. Searching the dense woods on horseback, Rosalina wonders where her husband could have vanished. Feeling lost, Rosalina sighs and wishes she had a tracker to find him. An unexpected system window prompts her to summon an item, catching her off guard. Puzzled by the system's sudden appearance, she wonders if a tracking device would actually work. Taking a chance, she inputs Argentine's full name into the system to locate him. The system app displays his location, shocking Rosalina to realize her husband is nearby. Realizing he was not running away, she questions why he has been following her. Irritated, she wonders why he behaves like a stray cat before a terrifying realization hits. Rosalina panics, dreading that her proud husband might be planning to quietly eliminate her. She desperately frets that he would rather be a widower than suffer a shameful divorce. Determined to survive, she quickly opens her summoning menu to prepare some self-defense. She searches for a weapon that is both portable and easy to handle. Waiting for the system, she anxiously wonders if she is asking for too much power. Her fate energy updates, and she gasps in excitement as the item finally appears. She holds up an ultra-powerful slingshot capable of taking down high-level forest monsters. As she aims her slingshot, a terrifying roar of "Krah" announces another attacking monster. With a scream of "Kya," she falls off her horse but defiantly fires at the beast. Her shot strikes the monster's mouth perfectly, making it scream in agonizing pain. Smiling triumphantly, Rosalina grabs Argentine and tells him that he can no longer run away. Their confrontation is interrupted as the first cool droplets of rain begin to fall. A sudden heavy downpour begins to wash over the dense imperial hunting forest. Rosalina scrambles to her feet, highly annoyed by the sudden change in the weather. Argentine urges her to find shelter, but she warns him not to escape. Staring at her husband, she is temporarily speechless by the sudden turn of events. Sheltered under a cliff, Rosalina complains to herself about the cliché romantic scenario they are in. Argentian politely declines her offer to sit, choosing to stand awkwardly at a distance. Rosalina playfully teases him, pointing out that he is acting like she will eat him. She laughs off her own joke, leaving a flustered Argentian completely red-faced and stuttering. An awkward, chilly silence settles between the married couple as the heavy rain continues. Rosalina shivers in her damp clothes, muttering about how cold the air has become. Argentian steps forward and gently drapes his warm blue fur cloak around her shoulders. Turning away to hide his face, he insists that she wear his warm cloak. Blushing intensely, Argentian claims he is too warm while she tries to decline his offer. Rosalina secretly cringes at his old-fashioned dialogue, leaving her husband highly confused by her reaction. Quickly correcting herself, she smiles warmly and admits that the cloak is indeed very comfortable. Her expression turns serious as she tells Argentian there is something important they must discuss. Outside their dry shelter, the heavy rain pours as Argentian claims he already knows her intentions. Argentian looks at her intently, revealing he knows about her recent Imperial bank check transaction. Rosalina happily agrees that only a final stamp remains to officially finalize their divorce. Argentian quietly asks when she would like to meet to finalize the divorce. Observing his quiet hesitation, Rosalina warily wonders if this is another cliché romantic plot trap. Rosalina recalls standard novel tropes where cold male leads suddenly fall for reformed villainesses. She worries that her sudden change in behavior is causing her husband to develop feelings. A tired sigh escapes her as she realizes their rainy cave shelter is a romance cliché. She reminds herself that reciprocating his affection in this world would be a fatal mistake. Determined to secure her massive divorce alimony, Rosalina refuses to let romantic tropes distract her. Argentian proposes meeting in 3 days to finalize everything, leaving her momentarily stunned. Relieved to finally have a set date, Rosalina happily accepts his proposed timeline. Her momentary relief vanishes instantly as a sudden development catches her completely off guard. A sudden system warning alerts her that she is spending too much time with Argentian. Frustrated, Rosalina angrily questions why the system is penalizing her for seeking a divorce. She wonders if the system honestly expects her to flee into the pouring rain. A sudden communication cut-in rings out, bringing Calix's name to her mind. Rosalina asks if his hunt was successful while Calix eagerly calls out her name. Rosalina anxiously checks on him while Calix tearfully expresses his immense relief at her safety. Calix insists on coming to her, and Rosalina gratefully agrees to share her location. Calix suddenly bursts into the cave, desperately clutching her hands while apologizing for causing worry. Rosalina asks why he is apologizing, prompting him to admit he was temporarily distracted. Rosalina gently reassures the sulking prince that there is no need for an apology. Calix confesses how terrified he was when she did not answer his calls. Smiling warmly, Rosalina reassures him and suggests that they head back together now. Calix happily agrees, squeezing her hand tightly as they prepare to leave. Rosalina glances back at Argentian, wondering if she should have invited him to join. Calix calls out to her, gently asking why she has stopped walking. Dismissing her worries, Rosalina reminds herself that everything will end in 3 days. She quickly turns around, leaving the quiet shelter of the cave behind her. Returning to camp, Rosalina is horrified to find a scene of absolute chaos and destruction. The soldier explains that a monster horde attacked, leaving Rosalina deeply horrified by the carnage. She recalls that in the original novel, Rosalina was blamed for summoning the monsters. She wonders who summoned them just as voices begin praising Saintess Daisy nearby. Daisy heals an injured soldier while onlookers praise her as a divine savior. Despite the praise, Daisy wears a subtly tense and nervous expression on her face. Daisy suddenly spots Rosalina, calling out her name as she quickly stands up. Rosalina gets a deeply suspicious and uneasy feeling as she looks at Daisy. Daisy quickly approaches Rosalina, calling out her name with apparent relief. Daisy greets Rosalina warmly before shifting her attention to the blonde prince. Rosalina realizes Daisy deliberately cut her off to criticize Calix for leaving. Calix remains silent, his expression turning icy and displeased by Daisy's remarks. The crowd begins whispering, criticizing the prince and questioning why Rosalina remains unscathed. Rosalina smirks to herself, finding Daisy's manipulative motives to be entirely obvious. Daisy puts on a show of defense, pleading with the crowd to stop whispering. Under her sweet smile, Daisy is clearly pleased with how the situation is unfolding. Easily manipulated, the crowd immediately praises the saintess for her kind-hearted nature. Rosalina finds Daisy's transparent attempts at manipulation to be incredibly childish. A gloved hand suddenly reaches out, grabbing Rosalina's shoulder protectively. Argentian steps forward to shield his wife, taking everyone by surprise. Argentian firmly defends his wife, demanding an end to the baseless accusations. Silenced by the Duke's formidable presence, the chastised crowd quickly backs down. Daisy approaches Rosalina with a gentle expression, mentioning how much trouble Rosalina suffered because of her previously, while Rosalina looks on with a dark, suspicious glare. Daisy acts regretful about Duke Blake's actions while Calix stands beside her, prompting Daisy to display a show of dramatic distress as she claims to feel pathetic for not knowing his true nature. Observing Daisy's theatrical display, Rosalina gazes at her with a highly skeptical and silent expression. Deciding to ignore the drama, Rosalina turns to leave, prompting a frantic Daisy to reach out and try to stop her as Rosalina remains determined to avoid getting involved. Daisy begs Rosalina not to ignore her and offers a dramatic apology, but Rosalina simply turns back with a smug, cheerful smile, agreeing that the Saintess indeed should be sorry. Confused by Rosalina's reaction, Daisy begins to speak, but Rosalina cuts her off by pointing her finger, clarifying that the apology should actually be directed to the Crown Prince. Daisy reacts with utter shock and confusion at Rosalina's unexpected demand, her eyes widening in disbelief. Rosalina explains that the Crown Prince, who has not been in the Imperial Palace long, should not be seen holding hands with an unmarried woman in public. Daisy stammers in embarrassment as she stands beside the prince, unable to defend her inappropriate actions. Realizing the truth of Rosalina's words, Calix looks down at Daisy with a cold, suspicious glare as he realizes her true motives. Highly displeased, Calix confronts Daisy and demands to know if her excuse about needing physical contact to heal people was a complete lie. Daisy stutters in a panic while Rosalina steps in, firmly reminding the same test to maintain proper decorum. Staring coldly at her rival, Rosalina reflects on how Daisy built her innocent reputation through cheap tricks that will no longer work. Turning her attention back to the crowd, Rosalina holds up the rose gold prize to present it to everyone. Holding the beautiful, shimmering metallic rose in her hand, she captures the complete awe of the onlookers. The crowd begins to murmur, criticizing Daisy's previous insensitivity, which leaves the Saintess visibly annoyed and sweating. Daisy looks at the rose in disbelief upon hearing that the rare item is capable of granting wishes. Clasping her hands together in prayer, Rosalina selflessly wishes for the complete healing of everyone injured in the hunting competition. A brilliant, blinding light suddenly erupts across the area, startling the wounded soldiers and onlookers alike. The soldiers sit up in absolute amazement as their painful wounds instantly vanish under the holy light. Horrified Daisy stares in disbelief at the miracle, while Rosalina bids her a cheerful and victorious farewell as she departs. Calix desperately calls out for Rosalina to wait as she continues walking away. Standing alone in her blue fur cloak, Rosalina looks forward to the next steps of her plan. Stepping down from her carriage, Rosalina happily celebrates that the long-awaited day of her divorce has finally arrived. Meeting with her business partner, the masked Magic Tower Master, he enthusiastically praises the explosive success of her rose gold item. Flattered by his praise, Rosalina wonders to herself if she should switch her romantic target to him instead. She cheerfully announces her divorce to the Magic Tower Master, who politely offers his congratulations. Leaning in close, Rosalina playfully prompts him to confess his hidden feelings, convinced that he must have a crush on her. The Magic Tower Master looks completely baffled by her suggestion, flatly denying having any romantic feelings and causing her to choke in embarrassment. Shaking her head frantically, Rosalina scolds herself to focus on the reality of her divorce instead of indulging in silly romantic fantasies. Walking through the streets, Rosalina reflects on how the restaurant chosen for today's meeting is the very place where their divorce agreement began. Arriving at her destination, Rosalina stands in utter disbelief upon finding nothing but a completely empty paved lot where the restaurant used to stand. As she panics over the missing building, a familiar voice suddenly greets her from behind. Rosalina turns to find Argentian standing there, pointing out the absurdity of the restaurant completely vanishing. Observing her husband's incredibly calm demeanor, Rosalina suspiciously wonders if he was the one who demolished the building. Argentian smiles smugly, pointing out that because their agreed meeting place has disappeared, their divorce cannot be finalized. Rosalina reacts in stunned silence, while Argentian shrugs and explains that meeting the exact terms of their agreement is absolutely necessary. Highly frustrated, Rosalina argues that his bizarre logic makes absolutely no sense. Suddenly, a bright blue system warning screen flashes, alerting Rosalina that penalties for failing her quest are about to be applied. The system announces the immediate commencement of a forced execution of her fate, sending a wave of sheer panic through her. Horrified, Rosalina yells in frustration at the ridiculous penalty, while Argentian calmly stands his ground. Seething with rage and glowing with a dramatic purple aura, she despairs over the system's unfair interference. Argentian silently watches her emotional breakdown with a neutral expression. Under the beautiful background flowers, Argentian quietly mutters to himself with a subtle, knowing smirk. Back in her private room, Rosalina paces back and forth, deeply worried about her husband's sudden, suspicious change in behavior. She dramatically breaks down in tears, terrified of facing a horrific punishment ending if the story proceeds naturally. Her attention is caught by a sudden golden glow, prompting her to look up in surprise. A system notification pops up, and Rosalina curiously reviews the details regarding her sealed magical power in living creatures. Deciding to worry about the divorce later, she concentrates her energy to summon roses for the magic tower first. Rosalina gasps in amazement as a brilliant golden stem appears, realizing that her summoned item is entirely different from before. Rosalina happily examines her newly summoned golden rose, marveling at its significantly increased magical effectiveness. Clutching the flowers close, Chibi Rosalina cheerfully anticipates becoming incredibly powerful in no time. Encouraging herself to remain positive despite her failed divorce, Rosalina determinedly raises her hands in her room. A smiling, golden brown-haired woman warmly welcomes Rosalina as she arrives at her residence. Rosalina apologizes for her unannounced visit to discuss an urgent matter, but the host happily welcomes her. Rosalina presents a gift of roses, though the lady notes she already has many artificial ones. The lady is shocked to learn that this new rose version is far more effective at curing curses. As the lady praises Rosalina's incredible crafting speed, Written, a voice suddenly apologizes for being late. A calm, silver-haired man wearing glasses and dark academic robes quietly makes his appearance. The lady defends the Magic Tower Lord's late arrival, while Rosalina politely praises his dedication to research. Rosalina explains that she rushed over because her newly crafted rose possesses a much stronger curse healing effect. The Magic Tower Lord closely inspects the rose, noting the remarkably high purity of its magical power. When Rosalina asks for confirmation, the Magic Tower Lord explains that the higher purity enhances its effects. Observing his focused expression, Rosalina is pleased that the Magic Tower Lord seems interested in consulting her. Seizing the opportunity, Rosalina boldly proposes becoming his apprentice to receive formal magical lessons. Sudden silence falls over the room as both characters stare at each other in absolute shock. Giggling warmly, the golden brown-haired woman points out how both of them seem to think exactly alike. Rosalina is eager to make better items, while the Magic Tower Lord refuses to ignore her magic. When Rosalina asks to start lessons immediately, the Magic Tower Lord readily agrees to begin today. The Magic Tower Lord bids Rosalina to follow him, and she cheerfully prepares to do so. The Magic Tower Lord shows Rosalina his personal library and research lab, receiving her polite gratitude. Rosalina sits down on the plush sofa as instructed by the Magic Tower Lord. Before finalizing her apprenticeship, the Magic Tower Lord demands honesty, catching a nervous Rosalina slightly off guard. Sitting opposite her, the Magic Tower Lord asserts his knowledge that Rosalina is no ordinary alchemist. He presses further by pointing out she is not a mage either, leaving Rosalina sweating nervously. The Magic Tower Lord leans forward, narrowing his eyes as he begins to ask a highly suspenseful question. The Magic Tower Lord asks if she is a great being, leaving Rosalina thoroughly confused. Rosalina panics internally, wondering if he can actually sense dragon power within her magical energy. Rosalina insists she is completely human, leading the Magic Tower Lord to ask to check her magic. The Magic Tower Lord gently takes Rosalina's hand to directly examine the flow of her magical power. A brilliant shimmering blue light suddenly emanates from their touching hands as the magical connection activates. Overwhelmed by the magic's extreme purity, the Magic Tower Lord sincerely apologizes for his prior misunderstanding. Rosalina dismisses his apology while quietly marveling at how much her magical power has developed. The Magic Tower Lord expresses deep regret that such an extraordinary talent was hidden away for so long. The Magic Tower Lord formally promises to guide her, and Rosalina happily accepts his official mentorship. Rosalina excitedly anticipates that her magical powers will grow rapidly under his expert guidance. The Magic Tower Lord explains that his first lesson will teach her how to unconsciously enhance items. Rosalina smiles warmly, fascinated by the incredible and versatile things that magic is capable of doing. Guided by his instructions, Rosalina prepares to open her magical inventory screen to select an item. Selecting her trusty slingshot, Rosalina is amazed as the weapon's attack power immediately increases upon enhancement. Clutching her newly enhanced weapon, Rosalina looks on with newfound awe at her growing magical abilities. Turning home, Rosalina sighs deeply, utterly exhausted after a long and mentally demanding day of lessons. The manor maids react with nervous shock upon seeing Rosalina return home much earlier than expected. Noticing their highly suspicious behavior, Rosalina gets an uneasy feeling and wonders what is going on. Overhearing a heated argument from the parlor, Rosalina instantly recognizes the familiar voices echoing down the hall. Peering inside, Rosalina is stunned to find Leodore Brighton and her husband, Duke Argentian, confronting each other. Duke Argentian slams his fist down in a furious outburst, refusing to leave until her safety is confirmed. Duke Argentian stands by his desk in casual attire, looking down thoughtfully at a document. Gripped by a sudden, overwhelming wave of madness, Duke Argentian cries out in agonizing emotional torment. Duke Argentine recalls the horrific memory of Rosalina collapsing after being struck down by his own sword. Horrifying memory flashes of the pink-haired woman being brutally struck down by a sword. She lies lifeless amidst dark flowers, a grim testament to the tragic outcome. The dark-haired man fiercely refuses to leave until he has absolute confirmation of her safety. A young pink-haired girl learns of her father's whereabouts and realizes why her brother is confronting Duke Argentine. Clutching his head in agony, the dark-haired Duke struggles desperately to suppress his recurring curse of madness. The silver-haired youth reluctantly agrees to leave, bowing his head as the dark-haired Duke walks away. The silver-haired youth calls out to the Duke, while the pink-haired girl wonders how long he has been present. Sensing her presence, the Duke hastily flees the room to avoid running into the pink-haired girl. The silver-haired youth calls out after the departing Duke, desperately pleading with him not to leave. The silver-haired youth is startled as his pink-haired sister suddenly appears and calls out to him. The pink-haired girl asks her brother about the Duke's sudden departure, confused as to why she missed him. Hiding outside against a tree, Duke Argentine somberly mutters the pink-haired girl's name to himself. Overwhelmed with deep regret, Duke Argentine crouches on the grass and questions why he ever requested a divorce. Standing in a dark, fog-filled garden in her nightgown, the pink-haired girl wonders where she is. A sense of deep unease washes over her as she gazes at the glowing dark flowers. In the dark mist, she witnesses a man comforting an older gray-haired man who is crying out in grief. She looks on in shock as she recognizes the grieving older gray-haired man as her father. Her father furiously yells back, rejecting the warning and expressing his immense rage over what happened to Brighton. Her father laments his unforgivable ignorance over a child he believed was stillborn but had actually passed away. With a sudden whoosh, she is struck with the shocking revelation that Beatrice and her child were alive all along. The dreamscape abruptly shifts, leaving her bewildered as she is transported to a new, unfamiliar location. Her weeping brother begs their dying father to hold on, but the old man weakly announces his end has come. On his deathbed, her father laments that the mysterious child still continues to haunt his vision. A sudden sharp gasp leaves her lips as she violently jolts awake from the heartbreaking dream. She sits up in her dark bedchamber, heavily catching her breath and wondering if it was all just a dream. She recalls the Archmage's warning that growing magical power triggers precognitive dreams that inevitably come true. Determined to change fate, she summons her magical tracking system to locate her lost youngest sibling. She is baffled and dismayed when her system screen flashes a warning that targeting has failed. She notices a tiny warning note on the system screen requiring the target's real name to function. She fumes in frustration at the system for hiding such crucial instructions in tiny letters. She realizes that a woman named Eliza Moliette must have taken the child and plans to track her down first. Fearful and determined, Chibi Rosalina confidently shouts the name of her next target. She anxiously bites her finger, urging the system to quickly display the results of her new search. She recoils in surprise as the system screen suddenly flashes an unexpected error message. She gasps in utter disbelief upon seeing that her attempt to locate the woman has also failed. Groaning in immense frustration, she refuses to give up and resolves to keep trying until the system works. Repeating the target's name like a mantra, she focuses her magical energy on locating Eliza Moliette. Her focused search leads her to visualize a magnificent pink palace belonging to the target. The scene transitions quietly to the shadows of the dark night as footsteps echo. Slipping through the dark alleyways, a cloaked woman cautiously checks her surroundings to ensure she isn't being followed. The mysterious cloaked woman steals her resolve, knowing this is her absolute final chance to succeed. With a silent and graceful leap, the cloaked woman lands safely on the cobblestone ground. She slips silently past the wooden fences of the town, blending seamlessly into the night. Determined to succeed at all costs, she approaches the entrance of the Hope Almshouse. A young blue-haired boy struggles to lift a heavy wooden bucket filled with waste. With a heavy sigh, the young boy dumps the contents of the bucket. Exhausted from his chores, the boy wipes his brow and catches his breath under the starlit sky. The boy gently calls out for his unusual companion to emerge and eat, prompting a massive dark bird monster to appear. The massive beast lets out a low screech as it prepares to devour its meal. The boy warmly comforts the fearsome monster, happily watching as it peacefully enjoys its meal. The light blue-haired boy prepares to move on to his next chore. He worries about being thrown back into solitary confinement if he fails to finish before dawn. Recalling the headmaster's harsh demands for gratitude, the boy patiently accepts his difficult life. The boy is startled but happy to spot Lady Eliza approaching him in the dark. He runs to embrace her, but she harshly pushes him away and demands he stay back. The boy apologizes for his overeagerness while Eliza sighs in sheer irritation. He reminds himself that despite her harshness, Eliza saved his life and promised to free him. Eliza asks for the headmaster's whereabouts, and the boy directs her to his office. Eliza orders him to remain locked inside the attic before abruptly shutting the door on him. Alone in the dark attic, the boy anxiously resolves to listen closely to his surroundings. He curls up alone on the floor, waiting quietly in the oppressive silence of the attic. The boy's face lights up as a familiar, glowing magical orb floats into the room. He giggles warmly as the playful magical light tickles his hair, bringing him comfort. The boy watches in curiosity as the glowing orb hovers down toward the wooden floorboards. The magical light reveals a projection of the headmaster's office, prompting the boy's amazed praise. Hearing that the time has come, the boy wonders what they are discussing. Eliza sharply commands the anxious headmaster to calm down and take a seat. Eliza chillingly reveals that the day to use the boy as a sacrifice is today. The headmaster celebrates, but Eliza coldly reminds him not to presume they are equals. Submitting to her intimidating warning, the headmaster quickly agrees with her words. Eliza expresses relief at finally disposing of the boy, while the headmaster shivers at the bright name. Hearing their dark plans to eradicate him, the boy asks himself who they are planning to destroy. Realizing he is their target, the boy fears he is going to be executed for his sins. The boy desperately prays, promising to work even harder if they will only spare his life. His prayers are suddenly interrupted by a violent, deafening crash that shakes the entire attic. Terrified and confused, the boy looks around frantically, wondering what caused the massive explosion. Paralyzed with fear, he dreads that his life is about to end right here. A sudden blast sends Eliza and the headmaster crashing violently down the stairs in terror. Rosalina proudly admires her handiwork, taunting Eliza about the sheer power of her slingshot. Shimmering blue roses materialize as the residual force of her magical attack dissipates. The terrified boy peers through the thick cloud of dust, utterly stunned by the sudden intrusion. Hearing footsteps drawing closer through the dark, the boy panics as someone approaches his hiding spot. The boy throws himself to the floor, desperately begging the mysterious intruder to save him. Looking up through the smoke, the boy is bewildered to see a pink-haired woman standing before him. Rosalina quickly reassures the terrified boy that she is not a Grim Reaper but has come to rescue him. The boy gasps, completely caught off guard by her gentle and unexpected words. Rosalina tenderly introduces herself as his older sister and invites him to call her Rose. Weeping softly, Rosalina apologizes for not finding him sooner and promises to take him home. The boy asks if he truly has a home, and Rosalina confirms he has a family waiting. Rosalina reveals his true identity as the beloved youngest child of House Brighton, moving him to tears. Overwhelmed with emotion, the boy collapses into his sister's arms, weeping loudly as she embraces him. Rosalina notes how shockingly small and light he is, deeply saddened by his immense suffering. As the boy continues to sob against her shoulder, Rosalina vows to protect him from now on. Looking up with hope, the boy eagerly asks if he also has a name of his own. The boy explains that no one at the almshouse ever called him by a name. Rosalina asks if she may give him a name, and the boy happily agrees to it. Rosalina proposes the name Leonhardt, and the boy repeats it with wonder in his eyes. Rosalina explains the strong meaning behind his new name, which the boy absolutely loves. Their touching moment is suddenly interrupted by a furious voice shouting Rosalina's name. A battered and enraged Eliza rises from the wreckage, demanding to know how Rosalina dares to interfere. Eliza violently yells that she will kill Rosalina right in front of her younger brother. Rose lightheartedly mocks Eliza's weakness, teasing that her slingshot was perhaps too strong for her to handle. Eliza grinds her teeth in absolute fury, glaring at Rosalina with intense hatred. Eliza boasts that she also has a secret weapon, summoning giant purple glowing chimeras to overpower Rose's slingshot. Rose completely dismisses the threat, laughing off the idea of needing her slingshot against mere chimeras. A soft chime rings out as sparkly magical energy begins to swirl around a serene Rose. Eliza is left utterly bewildered as the atmosphere shifts and a strange noise echoes through the room. To Eliza's horror, the chimeras instantly tame and cuddle affectionately with Rose, prompting Heart's amazed admiration. Staring in absolute disbelief, Eliza realizes she is completely powerless against Rose's overwhelming magical affinity. Refusing to back down, a desperate Eliza charges forward with her dagger, swearing to kill Rosalina. Eliza lunges forward to strike, but Rose smiles calmly and asks if she truly thought she came alone. A booming voice suddenly calls out Eliza's name, bringing her attack to a screeching halt. Heavy, authoritative footsteps approach as Eliza desperately hopes her worst fears are not coming true. Duke Brighton steps out from the shadows, surrounded by glowing white roses, leaving Eliza completely frozen in shock. Duke Brighton points his sword downward, coldly calling Eliza by her full name. He sternly declares that she will finally face judgment for all of her wicked deeds. Eliza screams in absolute terror as the Duke draws his sword to strike her down. A dull, heavy thud echoes through the dark chamber as her desperate resistance is swiftly crushed. Duke Brighton stands victoriously over a completely defeated and cowering Eliza, holding his sword ready. Pointing his sharp blade directly at her throat, the Duke forces her to submit. He strips Eliza of her noble status and declares her execution, sparing her immediate death only because children are present. Eliza trembles in absolute horror as the Duke warns that he would have decapitated her himself otherwise. The Duke commands his guards to seize the wicked woman, catching her completely off guard. Eliza screams her innocence and accuses Rosalina of being the true demon, while the Duke restrains his urge to execute her. Rose calls out to their father to pronounce that their youngest sibling is finally safe. Duke Brighton falls to his knees, looking tearfully at his long-lost son in sheer amazement. Rose gently introduces the Duke to Hart as his father, leaving the young boy completely stunned. Tears streaming down his face, the Duke emotionally embraces his child, introducing himself as his loving father. Unused to such warmth, Hart stands nervously, hesitating and stammering in disbelief. With Rose's gentle encouragement, Hart tearfully runs forward and throws himself into his father's loving embrace. Rose smiles warmly through her own tears, expressing her immense gratitude to her youngest brother for surviving. Under a brilliant full moon, the Grand Palace stands tall as the story describes a prince overcoming his hardships. Rose happily finishes reading the fairy tale to Hart, concluding with a classic happy ending. She gently closes the book, cheerfully announcing that the story has reached its end. Noting that Hart is still wide awake, Rose affectionately strokes his hair and offers to read another book. Rose happily agrees to read more, asking her brother what kind of story he would like to hear. Settling in, she suggests a soothing fairy tale about the legendary spirit of moonlight. Rose asks Hart if he likes spirits, sharing that she felt a mystical presence by her side before he arrived. She tenderly strokes his light blue hair, comforting him in the quiet night. Hart looks up and begins to recount the very first time the mysterious spirit appeared before him. He gazes out toward the glowing full moon, explaining that the spirit's presence kept him alive. Rose listens intently, quietly wondering if her young brother truly possessed the rare ability to see spirits. Hart explains that ordinary people cannot perceive such beings, continuing his story of their magical bond. Rose ponders in amazement at the realization that Hart could not only see the spirit but also interact with it. She excitedly suggests that Hart might be a spirit tamer, prompting his confused but curious reaction. Rose explains they must observe him further, gently stroking his head before returning to their bedtime story. Reading from the book, she describes how the moonlight spirit visited the child daily until it had to return home. She narrates the spirit's emotional parting promise to meet its precious friend again in the future. Rose continues reading, describing the tearful child's desperate plea to know how they could reunite. The story concludes with the spirit revealing that finding and calling its true name will bring it back. A soft tap sounds as Rose gently places the book down and tucks her sleeping younger brother Hart into bed, surrounded by a magical glow of shimmering white roses. Pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead with a soft smooch, Rose tenderly whispers a sweet wish for him to have good dreams. As quiet footsteps echo down the dark, dimly lit hallway, Rose walks away with a pensive expression. Rose looks back thoughtfully, reflecting on the fascinating revelation that calling a spirit by its true name will bring it back to a person's side. Her eyes widen in sudden realization as she thinks to herself that she has definitely heard this somewhere before. In a memory of her youth, Rose asks the glowing spirit if it is drifting back to sleep, and it confirms it will rest until she calls again, assuring her that she will soon figure out how to summon it once more. Standing by the window amidst glowing blue flowers, Rose wonders if the way to bring her spirit back is to find its name and call it. Under the warm daytime sun, young Hart walks carefully through a lush, green, grassy field. Peeking eagerly from behind a large tree, young Hart lets out a soft gasp of excitement. A gentle whoosh of wind rustles the leaves as Hart gazes in awe at a massive ancient tree, amazed that this must be the legendary fairy tree his sister Rose told him about. Hart wraps his arms tightly around the massive trunk, happily greeting the fairy tree with a warm embrace. Suddenly sensing a strange presence, the young boy looks up in mild surprise, uttering a quiet gasp. Gazing up into the bright sky, Hart wonders aloud what the mysterious glowing light descending toward him could be. A sudden brilliant flash of sparkling turquoise light bursts forth, illuminating the surroundings. Spotting a glowing winged fairy spirit, Hart joyfully recognizes it as the one that visited his attic, thanking it warmly for its past kindness. Looking back at the tree, Hart confides in the fairy spirit, admitting that he once believed he was abandoned for being a bad child until the spirit proved otherwise. Hart continues, expressing his profound relief that his sister and the spirit both came to rescue him, making him realize he was never truly abandoned. The boy shares his heartfelt dream of growing up quickly and becoming stronger so he can dedicate his life to helping other vulnerable children. With a bright, determined smile, Hart looks forward to a future filled with hope. Startled by the spirit's words, Hart tilts his head in confusion, asking what kind of power he could possibly possess. The glowing green fairy spirit looks down gently, revealing to Hart that he possesses the power of a king. Hart's eyes sparkle with wonder as he processes the spirit's incredible revelation about his destiny. Hart smiles warmly, declaring that he would gladly accept such power if it could be of any use to his beloved sister. With a sudden rustle and flash of magical light, Hart gasps as a vibrant green energy begins to swirl around him. The fairy spirit declares that it will now return the grand power that Hart once protected with his very life. Bathed in a radiant green light, Hart stands completely awestruck by the overwhelming magical energy. A gentle breeze rustles the leaves of the ancient tree as Hart slowly opens his eyes, returning to reality. Hearing Rose's voice nearby discussing how Eliza and the orphanage director were behind the incident, Hart gasps in surprise. Eager to see her, Hart runs through the white roses, calling out to his sister with a bright smile. Looming over a giant chimera, Rose demands to know the identity of the person pulling the strings behind their enemies. Their confrontation is interrupted as Hart calls out Rose's name, leaving her completely startled to see him there. Rose quickly scoops Hart into a tight, protective hug, asking why he is out here in the woods. Hart explains he had a strange feeling and wanted to see the fairy tree, prompting Rose to warmly reassure him that he can visit it whenever he wishes. With a heavy thud, the giant chimeras bow down reverently, declaring it an honor to meet the king of all spirits. Rose clutches her brother tightly, her eyes wide with absolute shock at the chimera's sudden submission. Staring in utter disbelief, Rose mentally questions if her little brother Leonhard is truly the king of spirits. Rose asks Hart if he knows why the beasts are calling him their king, but the young boy simply laughs and shakes his head. Rose narrows her eyes in deep thought, realizing there is definitely more to this mysterious story than meets the eye. Deciding to address the mystery later, Rose points firmly at the chimera, demanding to know who is behind Eliza. Shaking its massive head with a low groan, the chimera admits they do not know the exact identity of the mastermind. The beast recalls a crucial clue, mentioning that the mysterious visitor always lit a uniquely scented candle during their visits to the almshouse. Rose ponders the clue, noting that since the Empire uses magic stones instead of candles, tracing candle users could lead them directly to Eliza's mastermind. The scene shifts abruptly as a heavy wooden door is slammed open with a loud bang. Tired-looking brown-haired man with glasses writing at a desk casually welcomes Rosalina, catching her completely off guard. Walking into the study, Rose demands to know why he is sitting at the desk and where her master is. The glasses-wearing man bluntly states that the master is not there, leaving Rose thoroughly dumbfounded. Slamming her hands violently onto the wooden desk, Rose yells that the important Rose business presentation and launch are just around the corner. Sweating profusely, the man frantically waves his hands and stammeringly reassures her that the master always disappears and will return soon. Cracking her knuckles menacingly, Rose demands to know his exact location, forcing a terrified Maurice to stammer that he truly has no idea. As Rose chillingly threatens to resort to violence, a panicked Maurice desperately shrieks that the master has a secret hideout he always visits when he disappears. Rosalina walks through a busy town street, complaining about her master's sudden disappearance, throwing everything into chaos. Rosalina stops abruptly as her eyes widen in surprise. She spots Argentian, dressed in a dark cloak, turning away in the distance. Rosalina deliberates whether to pursue him or continue searching for her master, ultimately deciding that resolving her divorce is the top priority. Argentian stumbles weakly through the crowded street, struggling as he notes that his madness has not fully subsided. Spotting Rosalina nearby, Argentian hides in the crowd, fearing a disastrous encounter if she sees him in his current state. Sensing a sudden presence behind him, Argentian quickly turns his head to check the street. He gazes at the bustling crowd, wondering if his senses played tricks on him. Wiping his brow, Argentian attributes his dulled perception to his lingering madness. Close by, Rosalina lets out a quiet sigh of relief. She hides directly behind a startled bystander to avoid being seen by Argentian. Rosalina admires Argentian's sharp intuition, wondering how he almost detected her tailing him. Bystander misunderstands her closeness as a confession, prompting Rosalina to punch him away in frantic embarrassment. The crying man flees in pain, leaving Rosalina panicking that she might lose Argentian's trail. Wiping his sweat amidst dark red flowers, Argentian sighs in relief as Rosalina's determined vow to catch him echoes from afar. The scene shifts to the exterior of a charming wooden building under a bright blue sky. Footsteps echo as Argentian walks cautiously, gasping as he senses someone nearby. Determined to corner him, Rosalina moves stealthily through the crowd. Argentian quickly slips around a corner to evade her. Rosalina peeks from behind a wall, frustratedly wondering where he has gone. Argentian hurries down a dark alleyway as Rosalina silently vows to chase him down wherever he runs. A single boot steps firmly onto the cobblestone path. Argentian continues walking down the quiet alleyway, passing by mysterious glowing purple flowers. He quickly slips inside a wooden door, slamming it shut behind him. Rosalina peeks out from around the corner, watching him enter. She steps into the alley, questioning if he truly went into that specific building. Rosalina wonders aloud what a refined noble like the Duke of Failsden would be doing in such a rundown place. Her eyes widen in shock as she reads a plaque on the door showing the address. She realizes this is the exact address of her master's secret hideout that Maurice told her about. Rosalina gasps in sudden realization, wondering if Argentine and her master are secretly connected. Inside, dark red wine is poured from a green bottle into a goblet. Argentine sits back in a plush armchair inside the cozy study, taking a deep drink. He sets the glass down with a heavy sigh. Looking up with glowing red eyes, Argentine worries that his madness will lead to a disastrous encounter if he meets Rosalina. Deciding to avoid her, he rests his head, but his eyes fly open in shock as a voice suddenly expresses pity for him. Argentine bolts upright, completely stunned to see Rosalina standing in the doorway of the study. A floating white rose shines brightly as Rosalina reflects on the dangerous trap she had to bypass to get inside. As Rosalina dusts off her dress, Argentine demands to know how she managed to find this place. Standing up angrily, Argentine retorts that he should be the one asking the questions. He demands to know why she is at Master Henna's hideout, leaving Rosalina stammering in surprise. Rosalina narrows her eyes suspiciously, asking if he and her master are secret accomplices. Argentine breaks into a cold sweat, panicking internally that his secret has been exposed. Poking his chest aggressively, Rosalina demands to know what kind of deal he made with her master.